Chapter 5361. Latest news. Tomorrow was 515 Chidian's anniversary celebration, the day with the most benefits. Apart from the gift bags and school bags, this time's 515 red packets were definitely worth watching. There was no reason not to snatch the red packets. Set the alarm clock. If it was just to let Bing Wuqing come up. From Lin Yi's point of view, it was not attractive at all. However, this was a negotiation and he could not show his bottom line right away. That would be too stupid. If this is the only condition and you don't even have the least bit of sincerity, then there's no need to talk anymore. Elder Lu, please go back. Xanijia stood at the side and chimed in. Don't be anxious. Before I came here, the Grand Supreme Elder said that after Bing Wuqing is sent away, he will personally appear and talk to you. When that time comes, he will definitely give you a satisfactory answer. What do you think? Lu Pingan quickly added. To Lin Yi, it was more advantageous for Qinjiu to appear personally than for Bing Wuqing to come up the mountain to meet him. This was because it was the only way he could prove his identity as the immemorial Grand Uncle Master, unless Qinjiu turned against him. Of course, Lin Yi did not think too much of this. This was just Qinjiu and Lu Pingan's one-sided wishful thinking. There's no proof, Lin Yi said lightly. Could it be that Grand Supreme Elder wants to make a written contract for you, Grand Supreme Elder? Lu Pingan frowned. Haha, rather than believe in a written contract, I'd rather believe in a ghost. How about this? Let Bing Wuqing come up to see me first and we can talk about other things later. Lin Yi decided. This. Lu Pingan hesitated, then nodded and agreed. Okay, to show our sincerity, we'll take a step back first, but we'll wait for Grand Supreme Elder's reply next. His meaning was clear. If Lin Yi sent Bing Wuqing away, then they could continue the next step of the negotiation. If not, then it would be equivalent to completely falling out and there would be nothing to talk about. Fine. Lin Yi nodded. Even though he was trapped in the one-step-to-heaven formation and could not get out, he had no intention of leaving Bing Wuqing behind as a helper. Compared to this side, Lung Leng, who was left in the Snow Sword faction of the Middle Island, needed the protection of Bing Wuqing, a nascent soul expert, more. After all, there was still a huge hidden danger in the form of Shui Jianfeng. In addition, he had another consideration. He was afraid that Bing Wuqing would really fight with Qinjiu on impulse. Although she was an expert of the Yuanying realm, she had just broken through and her foundation was not stable. If that happened, it would not only mean that she would completely fall out with the Green Cloud clan of the North Island, but Bing Wuqing would definitely be the one who would suffer losses. There would be no benefits. Lu Pingan was very efficient, and brought Bing Wuqing up in no time. Of course, Bing Wuqing did not have an identity token, so she could only stand outside the one-step-to-heaven matrix and talk to Lin Yi. Otherwise, he might not be able to get out after coming in. Boss Lin Yi, I'm relieved that you're fine. Bing Wuqing breathed a sigh of relief when she saw that Lin Yi was safe and sound. Even though she knew that Lin Yi would not be defeated so easily by Qinjiu, she was still worried that she could not see Lin Yi for a long time. Now she was finally relieved. Hee, what could happen to me? Lin Yi smiled. He noticed the way she addressed him. It was obvious that she had learned it from Wu Qintian and the others. It seemed that this arrogant immemorial prodigy had already recognized his own position. Their relationship was no longer one of mere coercion and exploitation. She had become his follower with sincerity. So what do you need me to do now? Help you break the matrix or deal with Qinjiu directly? Bing Wuqing did not have the habit of making small talk. Even if she wanted to express her loyalty, she was simple and direct. You don't need to do anything. Go back to the Snow Sword faction and look after Lung Leng for me. Just stay put for now, Lin Yi said. What about Shui Jianfeng? Bing Wuqing could not figure out what Lin Yi was thinking. Things were different now. When he came to the North Island, he had openly betrayed the center. Naturally, there was no need for him to continue feigning civility. If it was not for the fear of disrupting Lin Yi's plan, he would have killed Shui Jianfeng directly and not let him live. If he doesn't move, you don't move either. No matter what he and the center do, your priority is to ensure the safety of Lung Leng and yourself. You don't need to worry about anything else for now, Lin Yi instructed. Okay, I understand. Bing Wuqing understood. Even though Lin Yi did not reveal more, she had already understood what Lin Yi was thinking. If he didn't move for now, it meant that there would definitely be a big move with the center in the future. It was just that the time was not right yet. All right. It's rare for you to come to the North Island. I can't let you make a wasted trip. As Lin Yi spoke, he called Xanijia, who was waiting at the side, and gave him 2 elixirs to pass to Bing Wuqing. Thank you, big boss. Bing Wuqing's eyes lit up instantly. Strictly speaking, The Supreme Grade Gathering Nascent Elixir was his main purpose for coming to the North Island this time. Even though it was a little too realistic and even despicable to say it out loud, it was undeniable that it was the truth. To put it nicely, a person like him was extremely rational, but to put it bluntly, he was actually a mercenary. He just wasn't as short-sighted as the others. Linny was well aware of this, but he did not mind. Since he had become someone's boss, he had to have a corresponding vision and tolerance. As long as Bing Wuqing served him well, he would never choke her in the supply of elixirs. After all, as long as he could control her, the stronger Bing Wuqing was, the better it would be for him. Putting away the 2 Supreme Grade Gathering Nascent Elixirs, Bing Wuqing did not express her gratitude verbally. Instead, she solemnly bowed to Lin Yi, turned around and left. Since Lin Yi had asked him to bide his time and take care of Lung Lung, then he would do it. Obviously, there was no need for him to meddle in the troubles of the North Island. From the beginning, he had predicted that a mere Qinjiu would not be a problem for Lin Yi. With 2 Supreme Grade Gathering Nascent Elixirs, if everything went well, she could advance 2 levels in a short period of time and become a middle-stage Nascent Soul expert. Bing Wuqing was looking forward to her future even more. Bing Wuqing left swiftly. She didn't bid farewell to anyone when she descended from the ascending cliff. She rode on her snow eagle and disappeared into the horizon. All right, it's time to get down to business after dragging it out for so long. Lin Yi stretched himself. Until now, Xianijia was still in a daze. The 2 pills that he had just passed to Gu Lingji were too shocking. He was still in a state of shock until now. Those were the legendary Supreme Grade Gathering Nascent Elixirs. Before this, he was still very sure that Lin Yi was the grandmaster of his sect. Even if he was not, he must have a close relationship with the North Island's Green Cloud sect. But now he was really doubting it. What kind of monster was he to give away the Supreme Grade Gathering Nascent Elixirs so casually, and 2 at once? A small sect like the North Island's Green Cloud sect would not be able to accommodate such a big shot, right? You want the elixirs too? Lin Yi glanced at him. Xianijia did not know how to react at that moment. Chapter 5362. Wasn't that obvious? Who wouldn't want elixirs? Forget about the legendary elixirs like the Gathering Nascent Elixir. He would be thankful to his ancestors for just 1 golden elixir. He had been stuck at the early stage of golden elixir all these years without making any progress. On the one hand, it was due to his innate aptitude, which was incomparable to a freak like Bing Wuqing, but on the other hand he wasn't that bad. He was at least at the intermediate level, and the reason why he couldn't advance was because of the elixirs. What could he do if he couldn't get golden elixirs? Here. Lin Yi tossed a few golden elixirs to Xianijia. After a period of observation, Xianijia had gained Lin Yi's approval. Moreover, Xianijia was going to be entrusted with important tasks in the future. Therefore, it was reasonable to give him some elixirs to strengthen his strength. No matter what, the strength of an early-stage golden elixir was not enough. That. His dream came true without warning. Xianijia was at a loss for what to do. It took him a long time to catch the golden elixirs, and he said gratefully, "Thank you, Grand Master." "No need, you deserve it. You can go and call someone," Lin Yi said. "Call who?" Xianijia was stunned. Lu Pingan, of course. Now that Bing Wuqing has been sent away as they wished, it's almost time for a showdown. That Grand Elder's patience should be running out by now, right? Lin Yi said lightly. As a result, just as he finished speaking, there were people walking slowly towards Climbing Heaven Cliff. One of them was Lu Pingan, who was carrying the unconscious Qin Dongqing on his back, and the old man walking in front of him was Grand Elder Qinjiu. Just as Lin Yi expected, this Grand Elder's patience had long run out. In fact, even without the unexpected interlude of Bing Wuqing, he was already prepared to have a showdown with Lin Yi. After all, Qin Dongqing's current condition was not optimistic. When a person's primordial spirit was drained, their body would naturally begin to wither and even slowly die. Even powerful cultivators were no exception to this. Compared to ordinary people, the only difference was that their bodies were stronger and could last a little longer. There was no essential difference between the two. And now, Qin Dongqing was already on the brink of death. This unprecedented situation was something that even Qin Jiu could do nothing about. Once Qin Dongqing's body died, everything would be over. Even if his primordial spirit was still alive, it would only be a lonely soul, destined not to last long. The point was, how could the Qin family of North Island hand over such a big responsibility to a lone ghost? Without any greetings or words, Qin Jiu and Lu Pingan directly stepped into the One Step to Heaven matrix. The intention of placing Qin Dongqing, whose breath was extremely weak, in front of Lin Yi was obvious. Although the Supreme Elder personally came, he didn't put on a big show this time. Apart from Lu Pingan, he didn't bring any other disciples. After all, from his point of view, the fewer people who knew about his meeting with Lin Yi, the better it would be for him. You should have a way to cure Dongqing, right? Qinjiu looked Lin Yi up and down. The two had been at each other's throats for a long time, but this was the first time they'd met face to face. Lin Yi's youthfulness was far beyond his expectations. At first glance, he was sure that this guy was definitely not the Archean martial granduncle, but a real young man. Of course. Lin Yi nodded. Then let's start the treatment, Qinjiu said directly. Oh, aren't you going to talk about the conditions with me? Lin Yi raised his eyebrows when he heard the words, and Xnejia on the side also curled his lips. Even if the other party was the high and mighty Supreme Elder, after confronting for so long, he didn't have much power in his heart. He didn't even have the most basic conditions, and he directly asked someone to cure Qin Dongqing. Was he treating people like fools? What conditions do you want? Qinjiu looked at Lin Yi with an inscrutable expression. I don't need any conditions. Just give me my identity token. That's all, Lin Yi said with a faint smile. This answer was not surprising. With the identity token, it was equivalent to receiving official recognition, including from the Supreme Elder. Lin Yi was the legitimate Archean martial granduncle. No one could question it anymore, and it was a matter of course. More importantly, with the identity token, he could freely enter and exit the ascending heaven cliff. The one-step to heaven array would no longer be an obstacle that was difficult to overcome. For Lin Yi, this was the biggest benefit. If it was Lu Pingan at this time, he would definitely use the excuse of sect leader Hong Zijuan's absence. But now Qinjiu was standing here. If the dignified Supreme Elder had to use a mere sect leader as an excuse, no matter how reasonable it sounded, after all, he would still be at a disadvantage. If this spread out, he would be laughed at. If you cure Dongqing, I will give you the identity token. Qinjiu's answer was straightforward. Although he had confirmed that Lin Yi was not the Archean martial granduncle, compared to Qin Dongqing's life, these were not important. Okay. Lin Yi's answer was also very straightforward. Previously, when Lu Pingan and Xnejia were their respective spokespersons, they were testing each other and wrangling with each other. After talking for so long, they still could not come to an agreement. Now that the two main characters personally came forward, the negotiation was a matter of a word. The process of treating Qin Dongqing was very simple. Qin Dongqing's primordial spirit, which was imprisoned in the space of the jade pendant, was released and returned to his physical body. However, the current Qin Dongqing's physical body was too weak. Even if his primordial spirit was intact, it could not easily recover in a short time. When the primordial spirit returned, the whole person was still in a half-dead state. The only difference from before was that there was a trace of indescribable temperament. Lu Pingan did not understand, but with Qinjiu's eyesight, it was easy to see the difference between the two. Previously, Qin Dongqing was a piece of rotten wood that was constantly rotting, and there was no cure for it. Now, although he still looked like a piece of rotten wood, there was a glimmer of vitality. Next, as long as he was nursed well, it would not take long for him to return to normal. Well, it's your turn to fulfill your promise, Supreme Elder. Lin Yi raised his eyebrows. That's right. Qinjiu winked at Lu Pingan, signaling him to take the still unconscious Qin Dongqing away. After the two of them walked out of the range of the one-step to heaven array, Qinjiu slowly said, "Before that, this old man hopes that you can answer my question honestly." Say it. Lin Yi's face did not show any abnormality. Chapter 53-63. Lin Yi looked at him calmly. After a while, he grinned without any sincerity. "I've already told you, he's your martial granduncle." Looks like I won't be able to hear the truth." Qinjiu's expression changed and his aura became extremely sharp. For the first time, he released the aura of a nascent soul cultivator without holding back. Xnejia was taken aback. Facing the opponent's imposing manner, it was extremely difficult for him, an expert in the early stage of Gold Core, to even stand there. If it wasn't for Lin Yi standing next to him, he might have knelt down on the spot. After all, the power and terror of a nascent soul-old monster was deeply rooted in the ancient Jianghu. What? Is Grand Elder going to go back on his word? Lin Yi's expression was still the same. He was not moved by the other party's aura at all. In his eyes, the so-called Yuanying stage-old monster's aura was actually just like that. There was really nothing to be surprised about. It's not that I'm going back on my word. It's just that, as the old guy of the Blue Cloud sect in the North Island, I have to keep a close eye on this kind of thing. If I let some shady people in, I'll be criticized by others. Although Qinjiu's tone was calm, his aura became more and more intense. It was obvious that he wasn't going to let this matter rest. To be precise, he didn't have this plan from the beginning. No matter whether Lin Yi, the primordial uncle master, was real or fake, he was destined to never let Lin Yi enter the Green Cloud sect of the North Island as he wished. After all, two tigers couldn't share one mountain. Apart from Qin Dongqing's concern, the other key reason why he didn't directly turn hostile for so long was that he didn't want to take risks before he figured out the strange means that Lin Yi had displayed before. Therefore, Qinjiu had not been idle during this period of time. He had been searching for all sorts of information related to absorbing souls. Unfortunately, it was to no avail. This was not strange. Even if the primordial underworld had always focused on the cultivation of the primordial spirit, and there were all kinds of primordial spirit techniques, such as the soul-reaping hand and the primordial spirit-devouring technique, were unheard of. After all, the strongest among them was only a nascent soul-old monster. This was the limit of his level. So what if he researched more? Without information, it meant that he had no confidence. That was why Qinjiu had been patient. Until today, when his patience was completely exhausted. Of course, the unknown meant risks, but Qinjiu didn't think that he would really fall into the hands of a mere Lin Yi. At most, it would be a little troublesome. He was a nascent soul cultivator. Naturally, he had the arrogance of a nascent soul cultivator. At the end of the day, it's still the same thing. Burning the bridge after crossing the river. As a grand elder, you change your attitude pretty quickly. Lin Yi didn't show any anger on his face. He didn't expect the other party to talk to him about honesty. If he really foolishly believed the other party's character, there was only one explanation. He was out of his mind. You can say whatever you want. Since you've chosen to challenge me, you should have been prepared for this. Isn't that right? Qinjiu did not feel the slightest bit embarrassed. At his level, his face had long been honed to the point of perfection. So what was this? No wonder you're a nascent soul cultivator. You look like you're going to eat me alive. Very scary. Lin Yi said with a faint smile. You're about to die, but you're still quite stubborn. Qinjiu replied with a cold snort. Listening to the conversation between these two people, Xianijia on the side was completely motionless. The two big shots were ready to do it themselves. What should a small fry like him do? Should he stay and help, or should he escape? In terms of helping, Xianijia knew that he couldn't help at all with his little strength. It would be good enough if he stayed and didn't help. But if he just ran away like this, not to mention that it would be hard to explain to Lin Yi, he was still a gold core stage elder after all. He was still a person who cared about his reputation. Glancing at Xianijia, who was hesitating next to him, Qinjiu suddenly said, I heard that you also brought a few disciples from the secular world with good qualifications. If you don't want to get involved, let them hide first. Don't worry, as long as they don't make trouble in the future, I won't take revenge. I still have this little bit of tolerance. This was the truth. Qinjiu went back on his words to Lin Yi because Lin Yi had his weakness. Whether it was status or strength, Lin Yi had the potential to threaten him. To a certain extent, he could be considered as someone who was qualified to be his opponent. Of course, he could do anything at this time. But Ling Shan and the others were different. Although they were all Lin Yi's people, for a nascent soul cultivator like Qinjiu, it would be too narrow-minded to even care about these people. Now, not only House Qin of the North Island, even the entire Jadian of the North Island was in a state of no successor. As long as he killed Lin Yi, Ling Shan and the others would be a group of dragons without a leader. They wouldn't be a threat at all. Instead, they were all good prospects. The price was just to spend some time to train them. No need. Lin Yi's answer was straight to the point. In fact, until now, Ling Shan and the others hadn't shown themselves. They were all in their own rooms practicing in isolation, not paying attention to the outside world. Qinjiu couldn't help but be surprised. His lips curled into a mocking smile. You're so cruel to your own men? I've really underestimated you. What a character. The sky-climbing cliff was not a big place, and the area covered by the one-step to sky-climbing formation was even smaller. Even if it was a fight between two ordinary gold core experts, it could easily sweep everything away. Now, if it was a nascent soul-old monster like Qinjiu, he could easily destroy this place with just a wave of his hand. In other words, if these people, including Xianijia, stayed here, they would inevitably be implicated. With their strength, no one could leave this place alive. From Qinjiu's perspective, what Lin Yi did was equivalent to sentencing them to death. Cruel and merciless was absolutely appropriate. Cruel and merciless? Lin Yi smiled and looked at the nascent soul cultivator. I say, are you misunderstanding something, Grand Elder? Qinjiu paused. I never planned to fight with you. Even if we were to fight face to face, I would at most make you follow in Qin Dongqing's footsteps. There's no need to go through so much effort. Lin Yi said seriously. What? Even Qin Jiao couldn't help but be stunned by his tone. It was true that he still couldn't understand the strange method the other party used on Qin Dongqing, but he was a nascent soul old monster. Did this brat think that the same method would be effective on a nascent soul old monster? He was too naive. Chapter 5364. Ah, interesting. Very interesting. Qin Jiao reacted and laughed. His powerful momentum suddenly became more and more wild and fierce. He laughed loudly and said, "If you have the ability, then come and have a try." As he spoke, Qin Jiao took a light step forward. However, before he finished his step, his whole body swayed inexplicably, and then he had already crossed a distance of tens of feet and appeared directly behind Lin Yi. The top body movement of the Blue Cloud sect in the North Island, half-step jump. This was not the end. At this moment, Qin Jiao's fingertip had already pointed at the back of Lin Yi's head. An extremely fierce energy chi instantly condensed into an invincible magic weapon and shot out. Instant kill. Xianijia, who was watching this scene from the side, suddenly had his heart in his throat. Half-step flip followed by instant kill. Such an attack was absolutely fast and lethal. In the face of an unknown opponent like Lin Yi, Qin Jiao, a nascent soul realm old monster, did not underestimate his opponent at all. He was going all out, as if the person standing in front of him was a Yuanying realm old monster from another sect, a strong enemy at the same level as him. Qin Jiao's attack was indeed fast, but unfortunately his opponent was Lin Yi. Even if he did not use the extremely fast body movement, he could easily avoid his instant kill in the state of half-primordial spirit. As expected, Lin Yi just swayed slightly and easily avoided the instant kill. Your strength is really not weak. No wonder you are so arrogant. But you can avoid one, I wonder if you can avoid 10? Qin Jiao appeared above Lin Yi's head condescendingly. At this moment, a powerful finger strength was shot out from each of his fingertips. It was the ultimate version of instant kill, 10 consecutive finger kill. 10 finger strengths interweaved into a dense killing net, completely covering Lin Yi, leaving him nowhere to hide. You are quite confident, aren't you? Lin Yi's voice then sounded above his head. How could it be? Qin Jiao suddenly turned pale with fright. He had clearly locked the position of Lin Yi with his divine consciousness. No matter how fast the opponent was, it was impossible for him to escape unscathed. How could he suddenly appear above him? What the hell was this? It was only at this moment that the nascent soul stage old monster suddenly reacted. Although he looked no different from an ordinary person, he was still a primordial spirit. Qin Jiao's reaction was fast. He wanted to get rid of it the moment he realized something was wrong. Unfortunately, he was still too slow. An invisible giant black hand had already enveloped his head. Qin Jiao's eyes quickly became empty in a short period of time, and then became completely lifeless. He then collapsed to the ground and no longer moved. The situation was exactly the same as Qin Dongqing before. Xianijia was dumbfounded. He was speechless for a long time. From his point of view as a bystander, this pinnacle battle really came abruptly, but it ended even more abruptly. In his expectation, even if Lin Yi was really an extraordinary existence, in order to kill a Yuanying stage-old monster, he would at least have to go through a bitter battle. How could he kill him just like that? Was this still a powerful Yuanying stage-old monster? What are you waiting for? Drag him out. Lin Yi glanced at him and ordered. Drag him out? Xianijia pointed at Qin Jiao on the ground with trepidation. Even if he was unconscious at the moment, he was still a superior Grand Elder. He was a Yuanying stage-old monster who stood at the top of the small Jianghu in the primitive times. Since when could such an existence receive such treatment? What else can I do? Stay here and get moldy? Lin Yi had a strange look on his face. He seemed to be pointing at something and said, "You know what to do next, right?" What to do? Xianijia was still at a loss. Everything that happened today was too sudden. He was not mentally prepared at all. Lin Yi did not tell him anything about how to deal with it. He did not even know what to do at this time. Grand Elder was killed and there is no news from the leader. Isn't it obvious what to do next? Of course, it's to take over the Blue Cloud sect in the North Island. It's rare for there to be such a big power vacuum. Don't tell me you want someone else to take over the power vacuum? Lin Yi looked at him and said. Before he came to the Blue Cloud sect in the North Island, he actually had no idea about the power inside the sect. The reason why he came to this point was that he was forced by the situation. If it were not for Qin Jiao and Qin Dongqing, Lin Yi would not mind getting along with them peacefully. But now, even Qinjiu the Grand Elder had become like this. If he still did not take over the Blue Cloud sect in the North Island, it would be too hypocritical. No matter what. Since he planned to establish a foothold in the small Jianghu in the primitive times, the first thing was to smooth over the Blue Cloud sect in the North Island. Instead of letting others take over for Lin Yi, the best candidate to take over was naturally Xianijia. As for himself, of course he could not do it himself. He had to be a strong backer behind Xianijia. Otherwise, it would be a big trouble to appease the public opinion. After all, he was an outsider. Take over the Blue Cloud sect in the North Island? Do you want me to do it? Xianijia was completely stunned when he heard this. He was just an elder who ranked at the bottom of the early stage of Gold Core. He had never thought that he could defeat Qinjiu the Grand Elder, nor had he thought about taking over the Blue Cloud sect in the North Island. He did not even dare to think about it. Are you afraid that no one will obey you? Lin Yi saw through his doubts at a glance. Although Xianijia was a good person who put his own safety first, he could tell from the fact that he turned to Lin Yi without hesitation at the last moment that he was not a good-for-nothing. Deep down in his heart, there was a huge ambition. Xianijia was speechless. Was there a need to ask this question? With his little strength, it was difficult for him to rope in a few allies. As for taking over the Blue Cloud sect in the North Island, was that even possible? What's there to hesitate about? Drag this guy out. Who dares to obey you? Lin Yi pouted and pointed at Qinjiu on the ground. That's right. Xianijia's eyes suddenly lit up. Of course, he was not persuasive alone, but the Grand Elder on the ground was enough to convince everyone. The saying, "the strong are respected," was not just an empty saying. Now that even the old monster in the Gathering Vitality realm was killed, who in the sect dared to be disobedient? Needless to say, the local factions had all kinds of complaints in the open and in the dark, but they did not dare to show it because of Grand Elder Qinjiu's tyranny. If someone could stand up and take down Qinjiu, even if they did not raise both hands to agree, most of them would not oppose it. After all, this was different from the invasion of foreign enemies. It was an internal struggle of the sect, an internal affair. Chapter 5365. After all, the prestige of an old monster in the Yuanying realm was not just for show. They had the courage to go against Lin Yi before purely because they felt that he was just a swindler with no strength. To put it bluntly, the ignorant were fearless. In fact, after Qin Dongqing was beaten up, these people basically began to quiet down. The only one who really jumped up and down was Lu Pinggan, and this was because he was negotiating for Qinjiu's endorsement. Otherwise, even Lu Pinggan would not dare to be so active. After all, no one was a fool. Everyone knew that the bird that sticks out will be shot. Knowing that Lin Yi was not to be trifled with, who would dare to jump up and down? And now Lin Yi proved that he was not to be trifled with real means. The previous Qin Dongqing was just a small test, and Qinjiu was the one he wanted to get rid of. The whole process was easy. Thinking of this, Xianijia could not help but be excited. Although taking over the Green Cloud sect of the North Island still felt a little unreal, with the support of a big tree like Lin Yi, it was not completely impossible. But can I really do it with my little strength? Xianijia was still not very confident. Now, with the example of the Grand Elder, the effect of killing the chicken to warn the monkey was absolutely great. As long as there was the strength of a middle-stage Gold Core realm, Xianijia believed that he could control the overall situation. But the problem was that the strength of an early-stage Gold Core realm was a little too weak. It's not enough, so I have to come out in person to control the situation. That's enough, Lin Yi said. You'll come out in person? Xianijia was shocked. Even Qinjiu was easily beaten half to death. If Lin Yi came out in person, the deterrent effect would be obvious. Not to mention the high-level Gold Core realm and ordinary disciples in the sect. Even another old monster in the Yuanying realm would have to think twice. But the problem was, could Lin Yi go out? Don't forget, this was still in the One Step to Heaven formation. Even if Qinjiu the Grand Elder was easily killed, it did not mean that Lin Yi could break out of the formation. This was completely different. The only way to break the One Step to Heaven formation was to achieve 4 words, One Step to Heaven. Yes, so you can go and gather people. I'll be right there. Lin Yi smiled confidently. Then, all right. Xianijia nodded heavily. Since Lin Yi had said so, he naturally had no reason to doubt it. He immediately dragged the unconscious Qinjiu out. He watched Xianijia leave. Lin Yi closed his eyes and took a deep breath. Then he slowly stretched his hand forward until he touched the invisible barrier. The corners of his mouth curled up. One Step to Heaven array. After studying it for so long, I should be able to get out, right? During this period of time, Lin Yi's efforts were not limited to cultivating his spirit power and the soul-hooking hand. How to break through the one-step to heaven matrix had always been one of the biggest problems in front of him. After all, he had never expected Qinjiao and the others to obediently hand over their identity tokens. Of course, it was okay if they really couldn't break through. Now that the Blue Cloud sect of the North Island was leaderless, it shouldn't be too difficult for Xianijia to find a way to get an identity token. However, it was rare to encounter such a mysterious formation. If he couldn't break through by himself, but was forced to take the back door, would he still be Lin Yi? In theory, the only person who could really break through the one-step to heaven matrix was the legendary figure of the Blue Cloud sect of the North Island, who was called the Great Emperor. After all, this was the formation he set up himself. Other than that, no one else had ever heard of it. According to Xianijia, even a Yuaning realm old monster like Qinjiao had never really broken through the one-step to heaven matrix. He had never really broken through the one-step to heaven matrix, and he rarely made such an attempt because that was the domain of legendary figures. But now, Lin Yi was finally going to be the first person to try it. His fingertips touched the formation. In an instant, Lin Yi once again felt that mysterious feeling of being so close yet so far away. After this period of continuous fumbling, he wasn't unfamiliar with this feeling at all. In order to cross this barrier that was so close yet so far away, he'd thought of no less than 100 methods, but all of them had failed in the end. It wasn't entirely a problem of thinking. The main shackle was actually the strength itself. If one didn't have the strength beyond the Yuaning realm, it was impossible to break through the one-step to heaven matrix. This was probably the original intention of the legendary Great Emperor when he set up the one-step to heaven matrix. Originally, even if Lin Yi realized this, he would be helpless. However, because of the large amount of divine sense grassroot, regardless of the strength of the primordial spirit body, his primordial spirit was already a level higher than when he first came to the small ancient Jianghu. In terms of level alone, it had even recovered to the level of the original body on the Heaven Stage Island, a real mysterious ascension stage. If not, the power of his soul-hooking hand would not suddenly become so strong, and even a Yuaning realm old monster like Qinjiao could easily deal with it. For the small ancient Jianghu, which was used to the peak of the Yuaning realm, the current Lin Yi was undoubtedly a monster, a terrible monster who could easily pierce through the entire ceiling. With one step, Lin Yi instantly switched from the primordial spirit body to the primordial spirit form, and then quickly condensed into a very thin and long primordial spirit thread. If the onlookers had enough eyesight, they would find that this form was almost the same as when the primordial spirit projection was used. That's right, this was the countermeasure that Lin Yi came up with. Although the one-step to heaven line was mysterious, but after all, it was not comparable to the real cross-realm projection. The difficulty of this did not lie in whether the primordial spirit projection could cross the one-step to heaven line, but whether Lin Yi could successfully cast the imitation version of the primordial spirit projection. Even if it was just a simple imitation, even if the effect was only 1% or even 1,000th of the original, the difficulty of this was not trivial. One must know that the primordial spirit projection could only be successful by relying on a special formation, but now it was purely relying on Lin Yi himself. This level of difficulty was something that only Lin Yi himself could understand. One moment in reality, but to Lin Yi it felt like a long time had passed. The next moment, an almost undetectable primordial spirit thread appeared on the other side of the formation, and it grew at a speed visible to the naked eye, slowly condensing into Lin Yi's silhouette. One step to heaven achieved. "Boss, are we leaving?" Qintian's voice came from behind. Lingshan and the others poked their heads out as well, all of them looking excited. While the battle between Lin Yi and Qinjiao didn't take much effort, and they didn't make much noise, it would be a lie to say that they didn't notice anything at all. They were training in isolation on the surface, but they were actually eavesdropping. Chapter 5366. Okay. The crowd cheered and followed him. Dong, dong, dong. The deep sound of the ancient bell spread all over Mount Qingyun. All the people of the Green Cloud sect in the North Island, from the elders in the Gold Core stage to the ordinary disciples, changed their faces when they heard the bell. They stopped what they were doing and quickly gathered in the main hall from all directions. Something big must happen when the Green Cloud bell rang. Everyone must gather as soon as possible. This was the rule of the Green Cloud sect in the North Island. What happened? The group of pupils looked at each other. If there was no major change, the Green Cloud bell would not be easily rung. Could it be that something major had happened? Qinjiao and Lin Yi's personal negotiation was very secretive. Almost everyone was kept in the dark and didn't know what happened. Even Lu Pingan was very surprised. He didn't see the fight between Qinjiao and Lin Yi. In fact, when Qinjiu asked him to carry Qin Dongqing away, he had already left Dengtian Cliff first, so he didn't know what happened after that. It doesn't make sense. Master clearly said to deal with it coldly. Even if he killed Lin Yi, there is no need to ring the green cloud bell, right? Lu Pingan was confused. He still thought that Qinjiu could easily kill Lin Yi. After all, he was a real Yuanying realm old monster. How could he lose to a primordial spirit of unknown origin? Lu Pingan didn't understand, and the others were even more confused. When they saw the figure standing on the side of the green cloud bell, they were even more surprised. Xanijia, what the hell are you doing? Lu Pingan suddenly frowned. The rest of the Gold Core Stage seniors were also dissatisfied. The green cloud bell was not something that anyone could touch. At least, it had to be at the level of the deputy head. Xanijia, who was at the bottom of the ranking, was not qualified to touch it at all. If it was in the past, Xanijia would have been scared to the point that his legs were weak when he was surrounded by so many people. Today, although he was still a little nervous, he didn't panic at all. After all, he knew better than anyone that from today on, it was a new era of the Green Cloud sect in the North Island. I didn't do anything. Because there is an emergency, I rang the Green Cloud bell to gather everyone, Xanijia said calmly. Do you think you're qualified? Don't you think too highly of yourself? A Golden Core Stage elder from the Chen clan snorted disdainfully. Xanijia, don't tell me you don't know the crime of ringing the Emerald Cloud bell without permission? Lu Pingan sneered and then added, speaking of which, what kind of urgent matter could you have? Could it be that the archaic martial granduncle died? He had long believed that Lin Yi would die in Qinjiu's hands, so Lu Pingan's words were much more unscrupulous than before. No way. Isn't that imposter imprisoned on the ascending heaven cliff? She can't just smash her head against the wall and die, right? The bystanders deliberately echoed. The higher-ups and disciples of other local sects looked at each other. Recently, Xanijia had been trying to rope them in, but there were only a few who responded. Apart from being afraid of the Grand Supreme Elder's power, there was another rumor that made them waver. That archaic martial granduncle seemed to be an imposter. Xanijia glanced at them, cleared his throat and said, as for whether archaic martial granduncle Lin Yi is an imposter, there will be no more suspense from today onwards. Is it because he's dead? Lu Pingan curled his lips indifferently. In his eyes, Lin Yi was now a dead man. Everyone was looking at Xanijia, but he grinned and pointed to an empty space beside the green cloud bell. There was a piece of white cloth covering it, and there was a human figure under the white cloth. He's really dead. Lu Pingan was even more certain now. He believed that Lin Yi's body must be under the white cloth, because only a dead body could be taken out of the one-step-to-heaven matrix. You can say that. Xanijia smiled faintly, then faced the crowd and said, I think it's necessary to explain to everyone about what happened at the Heaven Cliff today. Elder Lu, you won't stop me from saying it, right? What's there to say? Lu Pingan snorted coldly. Not knowing the truth, he was still trying to keep a low profile. He changed the topic and said, speaking of which, Xanijia, you're quite bold. It's just the death of an impostor of unknown origin. How dare you ring the green cloud bell to gather all the disciples? How should you be punished? But Xanijia paused for a moment, then said with a smile, what if the person lying here isn't archaic martial granduncle Lin Yi? What do you mean? Lu Pingan did not react for a moment. What I mean is... Xanijia suddenly moved forward and lifted the white cloth. When they saw the face of the person lying on the ground, everyone was shocked. As for Lu Pingan, his face turned pale and he almost fainted on the spot. Now that it's the Grand Supreme Elder who's in trouble, it shouldn't be too much for me to ring the green cloud bell, right? Xanijia said calmly. No one said anything because they couldn't speak because their jaws were on the floor. After a long time, Lu Pingan's stuttering voice was heard. How? Oh, how could this be? The person lying on the ground was not Lin Yi but Qinjiu. How could this be? No way? Could it be that nascent soul realm old monsters from other sects are here? Those who did not know the reason were still shocked. In their minds, only nascent soul realm old monsters could defeat nascent soul realm old monsters, such as Bing Wuqing from Snow Sword sect who just left not long ago. No, the Grand Supreme Elder questioned the identity of archaic martial granduncle Lin Yi, so he was beaten up by archaic martial granduncle Lin Yi. It's as simple as that, Xanijia said lightly. After that, the whole place fell into dead silence again. The Grand Supreme Elder was beaten up? This would definitely be a big joke in the past, but at this moment, no one could laugh because Qinjiu was lying in front of them. This was an ironclad fact. Even so, the crowd still felt that the scene in front of them was too unbelievable. Could it be an illusion? Deceiving so many people with an illusion was undoubtedly a fantasy story, but killing Qinjiu, a nascent soul realm old monster, without making a sound was also a fantasy story. The credibility of the two was not much different to the crowd. Chapter 5367. Lu Pingan stared blankly at Qinjiu on the ground, as if he didn't feel anything. The other elders and disciples of the Qin family faction were also at a loss. Below Grand Elder Qinjiu, except for the deputy head Qin Dongqing, Lu Pingan's position was the highest. At this moment even he was stunned, let alone the others. The silence of Lu Pingan and the others finally gave all the other elders and disciples a clear signal. They all showed strange excitement on their faces. This meant that the Blue Cloud sect of the North Island would usher in a new era from today. A new era was not good news for the Qin family faction, which had been used to being superior. But for the local faction which had more people, it was undoubtedly a sign of a turnaround. Before this they had all witnessed Xianjia's efforts to build momentum. However, the effect was negligible. After all, a primordial Grand Uncle Master of unknown origin could overpower Supreme Elder Qinjiu. Those who would believe in such a ridiculous story were basically out of their minds. But now they finally knew that Xianjia was not brainless, but they were just frogs in a well. Xianjia took in everyone's expressions. To be honest, his legs were still trembling until just now. But now, after seeing everyone's different expressions, he suddenly felt at ease. Although the people of the Qin family faction were hostile, they were obviously stunned. They were like a group of dragons without a leader in a short period of time. It was destined that they would not make any big trouble. As for Lu Pingan, this guy wanted to raise his arm and call for help. Unfortunately, he was Qinjiu's pro-disciple, but not a real member of the Qin family faction. This was a natural shackle that could not be overcome. He was still far from being able to call for help. As for the local faction, because there was no news from the head Hong Zijuan, they were now like a group of dragons without a leader. The key point was that they were not hostile to Lin Yi, who could overwhelm Grand Elder. At this moment they were all full of awe. Even if there were a few people with ulterior motives, they dared not jump out to challenge Xianjia before they figured out the situation. It was the wisest choice to wait and see. Very well, now that times have changed, some untimely rules should be changed. The North Island Blue Cloud sect belongs to everyone. From now on, Green Cloud sect of North Island, which is not a single sect, can't put one sect first in everything. Everyone has to follow the rules and there will be no privilege. Xianjia seized the opportunity and said. As soon as he said that, many of the disciples of the local sects immediately cheered. If one were to say who had suffered the most from the Qin family's faction, it would be none other than them. Although there were not many people in the Qin family faction, they relied on the huge halo of Grand Elder Qinjiu. Over the years, as long as it involved good things such as cultivation resources, they would receive preferential treatment without exception. They got the meat, and the disciples of other local factions got the soup. Sometimes they didn't even get the soup, so they didn't dare to say anything even though they were angry. Today, Xianjia called for the abolition of the privileges of the Qin family. This was undoubtedly a move to win the hearts of the people. It was simple but extremely effective. I'd like to ask Elder Xen, which family do you mean by 1? At this time, a voice suddenly interrupted the cheers of the crowd. Everyone's eyes suddenly focused on this person. After seeing the person clearly, Xianjia's pupils suddenly shrank. Qin Dongqing. His primordial spirit had left his body for too long, so much so that his body had shown signs of atrophy. Normally it would take at least a month for him to fully recover. It was a miracle that Qin Dongqing could stand out at this time. Of course it's the Qin family of North Island. Xianjia immediately responded tit for tat. Although he didn't have the slightest confidence to fight against Qin Dongqing, the deputy sect leader, now that Qinjiu was killed by Lin Yi, what else did he have to be afraid of? Everyone from the Qin family's faction heard it, right? Times have changed. Even a small character like this who doesn't even count as a fart wants to ride on top of our heads. Do you agree? Qin Dongqing sneered and took the lead to provoke in public. Hearing this, Xianjia panicked. The reason why these people in the Qin family faction gave up before was that they were collectively confused. The main reason was that no one took the lead. Now that Qin Dongqing suddenly appeared, the situation would definitely go out of control. As expected, when Qin Dongqing took the lead to provoke, the other people in the Qin family faction all changed their expressions. Although they were afraid of Lin Yi who could kill Qinjiu, the person standing in front of them was just a good guy in the early stage of the Gold Core realm, Xianjia. What was there to be afraid of? Hey, you guys have to think carefully. What I just said was personally ordered by Grandmaster Lin Yi. Are you sure you want to disobey him in public? Xianijia quickly brought up Lin Yi. Grandmaster Lin Yi, right? We're so scared. Chen Dongqing deliberately pretended to be frightened, but then he ridiculed, yes, I admit that your Grandmaster Lin Yi is indeed unfathomable, but is that useful? Come on, tell me, how is your Grandmaster Lin Yi going to get out of the sky-reaching formation? This was why Chen Dongqing was able to stand up and challenge them. That's right, they didn't dare to face Lin Yi now, but wasn't there still the one step to heaven matrix blocking them? Since Lin Yi couldn't come out, what was there to be afraid of? This. Xianijia choked for a moment. In fact, he had thought about this, but Lin Yi gave the order in a hurry and he was too excited, so he neglected it. Hee hee, you can't be thinking that you can secretly get him an identity token without us knowing, right? Chen Dongqing sneered. It would not be difficult for Xianijia to get an identity token for Lin Yi if there was no leader just now. But now that he was the vice leader, nothing could be done. Chen Dongqing sneered. The Supreme Elder had fallen and there was no news from the leader. The person with the highest position was Chen Dongqing, the deputy leader. Most importantly, he was not just a deputy leader in name only. He was the leader of the Chen clan. Unless Lin Yi came in person, the others could only bow their heads in front of him. Xianijia was depressed. It was hard to stabilize the situation, but he did not expect this guy to wake up halfway. What should he do? What? Weren't you in the limelight just now? Elder Xin, it's not appropriate for you to give up so soon, right? That granduncle Lin Yi of yours is still waiting for your good news at the sky cliff. It's not good to let him wait anxiously like this, right? Chen Dongqing ridiculed him again and again. The others looked at each other. Xianijia was really far behind Chen Dongqing. In just a few words, the other party had taken control of the situation. Chapter 5368. Especially in the current situation, if Xianijia directly confronted this guy, it would be a mess immediately. If these people from the Qin family really made a fuss, they might not listen to him even though there were many people in the local faction. Maybe they were waiting to see him make a fool of himself. The situation was getting out of control. At this time, a faint voice suddenly interrupted, Vice Leader Qin, who are you talking about? Chen Dongqing was still pretending to be calm, thinking that Lin Yi couldn't get out of the one-step to heaven formation, so he still had a chance to turn the situation around. At this time, after hearing this voice, his legs suddenly went soft, and he almost fell to the ground. How did you get out? Chen Dongqing looked at Lin Yi and his people who were slowly approaching, and he was instantly covered in a cold sweat. He was definitely the one who had the deepest experience of the fear of Lin Yi. The others were just shocked that Lin Yi could actually kill an old monster in the Gathering Vitality realm, but he was the only one who had experienced it personally. You're curious? Lin Yi smiled and glanced at the others who were just as shocked. He said casually, I even took care of your Grand Elder with ease. Do you really believe that a mere one-step to heaven formation can trap me? I didn't come out before because I was playing with you. Everyone fell silent. At this time, no one dared to look at Lin Yi, and this was the effect Lin Yi wanted. If he wanted to control the Green Cloud sect of the North Island, then what he had to do now was not to appease them, but to establish his power. From the moment Qinjiu was killed, the rules of the whole Green Cloud sect of the North Island were destined to be remade, and this person could only be Lin Yi. What are you guys doing? Greet Grandmaster. Xianijia took the opportunity to give everyone a wink. Greetings, Grandmaster. All the people present immediately knelt down, from the elders in the Gold Core stage to the ordinary disciples. No one was an exception, whether it was the local faction or the Qin family's faction. Even Chen Dongqing and Lu Pinggan, the two absolute henchmen of Qinjiu, knelt down at this time. They had no choice, the situation was beyond their control. If they dared to disobey, Lin Yi absolutely wouldn't mind killing them again to warn others. Even Qinjiu was killed, let alone the two of them. Lin Yi glanced at the two of them and felt a little pity in his heart. He really didn't intend to keep these two people. Although they weren't a threat to him, they were at the peak of the late stage of Jindan stage and the middle stage of Jindan stage. In addition, with the connections of the Qin family in the North Island, it would be more or less troublesome if they did something bad behind his back. It was a shame that the two were smart enough to stop causing trouble, not giving Lin Yi an excuse to deal with them. They didn't give Lin Yi an excuse to deal with them. Although he wanted to establish power and remake the rules, when there was no sufficient reason, even Lin Yi couldn't kill people casually. That would make the whole Green Cloud sect of the North Island panic, and it wouldn't end well. Well, get up. Lin Yi looked at the people kneeling on the ground. Thank you, Grandmaster. Everyone got up one after another, and all of them were in fear and trepidation. Today, Lin Yi was a terrible existence above Qinjiu, the highest elder. They were nervous and frightened even in front of Qinjiu, and naturally they were even more nervous now. The most important thing was that they didn't know what kind of temper Lin Yi had. Was he kind and reasonable or a bloodthirsty tyrant? If it was the former, it was good news for everyone, especially for the disciples of the local sections. But if it was the latter, it was hard to say whether it was a blessing or a curse. It was better to speak less before figuring out the situation. At this time, honest people wouldn't suffer losses. Let me tell you something. The North Island's Green Cloud sect is such a big sect that it can't be without a leader for a day. Now the highest elder is gone, and there's no news from the leader. We need someone to stand up and preside over the affairs. After all, I can't do it, can I? Lin Yi said. Everyone looked at each other, and their eyes involuntarily fell on Qin Dongqing. Logically speaking, he was the most qualified candidate. Qin Dongqing suddenly felt like he was sitting on pins and needles. He couldn't wait to hide now. What he feared most was being targeted by Lin Yi. How could he dare to jump out and fight for power at this time? Even if he wanted to die, he shouldn't do it this way. Well, the position of the leader can't be left vacant. Let's take this opportunity to change the leader. I suggest Xianijia. Lin Yi said directly. It was in the plan to let Xianijia preside over the affairs of the sect. Although it was a bit abrupt to bring it up rashly, and Xianijia's original status and strength were far from enough, with Lin Yi's current deterrent power, who dared to say no? Sure enough, the crowd did not dare to oppose him directly. However, their expressions were a little strange. Although Xianijia was an elder in the gold core stage, it was like ascending to heaven in a single bound when an elder ranked at the bottom of the ranking suddenly became the sect leader. No one objects? Then it's settled. Lin Yi did not want to talk nonsense with them at all. He simply made a decision. Anyway, with him suppressing them, no one dared to oppose. It would be fine when they got used to it. The crowd was speechless. The saying, "the strong are respected," was true. No matter what decision Lin Yi made, they would not dare to show it even if they were dissatisfied. Moreover, they were familiar with Xianijia's character. Although they were dissatisfied, it was not a bad thing for most of them to let such a good guy take the position. They could reluctantly accept it. Thank you, Granduncle Master. I will do my best and go through fire and water. Xianijia suppressed the ecstasy in his heart and shed tears of gratitude. It was true that he was a good man who put his own safety before things went awry, but he was also an ambitious one. Of course, he would never have dreamed that he would one day become the leader of the sect. However, ambition would grow. All right, then I'll leave the rest to you. If there's anything, look for me at Climbing Heaven Cliff. Lin Yi did not stay any longer. He only needed to show his face in front of everyone today to shock them. As for how to deal with the aftermath, it was Xianijia's business. If Xianijia could not even handle this well, it would mean that he was in a difficult position and he would have to find someone else. As expected, Xianijia's performance did not disappoint Lin Yi. Although his strength was only at the early stage of the gold core stage, this good guy's ability to handle affairs was not to be underestimated. In just a few days, he had calmed the restless people and successfully gained the support of some of the local leaders and disciples. Of course, there was still a long way to go before he could really control the overall situation. However, it was a very gratifying step for Xianijia. With the protection of Lin Yi, he would become the real leader of Green Cloud sect in the North Island sooner or later. Chapter 5369. He had been missing for half a year. Before that, Xianijia hoped more than anyone else that the former head could come back to take charge of the situation. But now, everything was different. If Hong Zijuan came back, what should he do as the new head? Should he continue to be the head, or should he abdicate and return it to its rightful owner? If this matter was not handled well, the situation that Xianijia tried so hard to stabilize might be on the verge of losing control again. If the local factions split because of this, and the Qin family's faction fanned the flames again, things might get out of hand. The one who had the power to decide who should be the head was not the disciples of the Blue Cloud sect in the North Island, but Sky Climbing Cliff. Is this Hong Zijuan? Lin Yi sized up the middle-aged man brought by Xianijia. His face was fair and beardless and he looked honest and refined. His gestures occasionally revealed the aura of a superior, but it was not obvious. Instead, there was a hint of haggard and disheveled. Greetings, Granduncle Master. Hong Zijuan hurriedly bowed to Lin Yi. He did not act like a head at all in front of Lin Yi. He was not a fool. Lin Yi even killed Qinjiu, the highest elder, without hesitation, let alone a weak head like him. Most importantly, things were different now. Nominally, Xianijia had become the new head of the Blue Cloud sect in the North Island, and he was appointed by Lin Yi in public. It was a great risk for him to come back at this time. If Lin Yi and Xianijia felt that he was an eyesore, he would not end up well. Although Xianijia was a good person and Hong Zijuan had helped Xianijia before, it was about the head's position. Even brothers would fight to the death. Of course, the final decision was not up to him and Xianijia, but to Lin Yi. You've been missing for so long. Where have you been? Lin Yi looked at him and asked. I'm ashamed to say that I've been hiding outside for the past half a year and dared not to come back. If I came back, I would be dead. Hong Zijuan smiled bitterly. Why? Lin Yi and Xianijia looked at each other. As the head of a sect, Hong Zijuan's strength was certainly not weak. He was a real master in the peak of Gold Core. Moreover, he was in the territory of Green Cloud sect on the North Island. How could his life be in danger? That's because the person who wanted to kill me was Grand Elder Qinjiu. If it wasn't for my mount desperately protecting me and delaying me for a moment, I would have been a dead man. Hong Zijuan still had a lingering fear when he talked about this matter today. No one would have thought that his own sect's Grand Elder would actually directly make a move against his own sect's head, and there was only one purpose, which was to pave the way for Qin Dongqing. No wonder we haven't heard from him for half a year. Lin Yi nodded. That made sense. Since Hong Zijuan had taken action, as long as Qinjiu was there, Hong Zijuan wouldn't dare to come back to Green Cloud sect in the North Island. That would be courting death. That was why he suddenly showed up at this time. After all, Qinjiu had been killed by Lin Yi. For him, the biggest threat had disappeared. As the head of a sect, it was impossible for him to wander outside all the time. No matter what, he had to return to Green Cloud sect in the North Island. As the head of a sect, I only cared about my own safety. It's a great dereliction of duty. Please punish me personally, Grand Uncle. Hong Zijuan respectfully took the initiative to ask for forgiveness, and his attitude was very proper. It's not necessary. It's pardonable. Lin Yi waved his hand indifferently, but the way he looked at Hong Zijuan was a little more playful. This guy clearly knew that Lin Yi let Xianijia take his position, but from his attitude at this moment he didn't complain or resent at all. Instead, he seemed to have accepted it. Of course, Hong Zijuan didn't have the guts to question Lin Yi. It wasn't hard to understand. But it was a little interesting that he took the initiative to ask for forgiveness with such a proper attitude. Thank you for your understanding, Grand Uncle. But it's a fact that I haven't done anything in the past 6 months. As the head of a sect, I haven't been in contact with anyone for so long. I'm really not qualified to be the head of a sect, and I don't have the face to continue being the head of a sect. Therefore, this important task can only fall on the shoulders of sect leader Xan. Don't worry, Grand Uncle. I'll do my best to cooperate with you in Green Cloud sect in the North Island. I'll go through fire and water to protect you. Hong Zijuan hurriedly showed his loyalty. This guy was quite smart. Lin Yi suddenly understood why Hong Zijuan came. He knew that the matter was settled, and he didn't want to get himself killed for a sect leader's position that had already become a castle in the air. Therefore, he took the initiative to clarify himself. Apart from other things, this guy really knew how to adapt to circumstances. If that's the case, then how about this? You can be the vice head from now on. You have experience and strength. We still need your help on Xianijia's side in the future. I hope there will be no more factional disputes in Green Cloud sect in the North Island. I don't want to hear about anyone stirring up trouble. I have high hopes for both of you. Don't let me down. Lin Yi looked at the two of them and said, yes. Both of them were overjoyed. Xianijia was overjoyed because he had truly secured the position of the head. As for Hong Zijuan, it was already a great thing for him to get Lin Yi's approval. Moreover, although he lost the position of the head, at least he could be the vice head. This was already a pleasant surprise, and there was nothing to be dissatisfied about. Back then he was bullied so miserably by Qinjiu. This in itself had already proved that Hong Zijuan wasn't a tough person. If Qinjiu didn't want his life, he would have chosen to swallow his anger. Now that it was Lin Yi who was even more terrifying, his choice to lower his head seemed unexpected, but in fact it was completely reasonable. Very good. Lin Yi smiled. He had no choice but to push Xianijia into the position of the head, because he was only familiar with Xianijia in the whole Green Cloud sect in the North Island. He wouldn't rest assured if someone else took the position. However, it was a little unrealistic for Xianijia to really control the overall situation in a short period of time. Hong Zijuan came at the right time. By the way, Martial Granduncle, there's one more thing I need to report to you. Xianijia paused and said with a bit of shame, Qin Dongqing and Lu Pingan both ran away, and they took Qinjiu's body with them. Now Qinjiu's primordial spirit had been trapped in the space of the jade pendant by Lin Yi, and the rest of his body was no different from a corpse to others. Got it? Lin Yi didn't comment on this. In his opinion, it wasn't entirely a bad thing. After all, Qin Dongqing and Lu Pinggan were more or less hidden dangers in the sect. As long as they were there, the Qin family's faction wouldn't completely disperse, and the fight between the factions would continue. However, once the two of them left, the Qin family's faction would be completely leaderless, and it would collapse on its own. Chapter 5370. Xianijia was a little worried at first, afraid that he would be punished for not doing his job well, but he didn't expect Lin Yi to be like this. He breathed out in relief. Alright, you guys go. The most important thing right now is to take control of the big picture. Lin Yi waved his hand. Yes. Xianijia and Hong Zijuan immediately left with high spirits. Haha, fate really is messing with people. These two used to be Hong Zijuan's boss, but now he's going to be Xianijia's lackey, and he's still accepting it so calmly. His personality is amazing. Qintian and the others laughed. Birds of a feather flock together. They're actually the same kind of people. Their personalities are soft, and they look like good people who only care about their own safety, but they're ambitious as well. They'll only jump out and bite people when they're cornered. Now that Lin Yi bro has accepted them, of course Hong Zijuan won't go looking for trouble. Ziyu said with a face that could see through people. Face isn't important, life is more important. Lingshan nodded. Lin Yi couldn't help but laugh. You guys are quite good at reading people. Alright, stop slacking off here, go train hard. Alright, the group smiled. If it was their original temperament, they wouldn't have trained so diligently. However, Qinjiu and the others had given them a direct lesson. If they weren't strong enough, they wouldn't be able to move an inch in this small world. They were all ambitious people, and they didn't want to live under Lin Yi's wings forever. After all, even if they couldn't keep up with Lin Yi's footsteps, they couldn't be a burden to Lin Yi. Central Island, Keiluo Mountain. Since there were no sects stationed here and there were wild spirit beasts, there were very few people within 10 miles. Unless it was some sect training or something like that, this place was basically a no man's land. A giant eagle descended from the sky. This was the most symbolic flying spirit beast of the Blue Cloud sect in the North Island. It was a rare ferocious bird even in the small primitive Jianghu. Except for the sect leader, only the highest elder with a higher status could control it. On the back of this giant vulture was none other than Qin Dongqing, Lu Pinggan, and the unconscious Grand Supreme Elder Qinjiu, who had secretly escaped. Since he chose to sneak out of the Blue Cloud sect of the North Island, in essence, it was no different from betraying the sect. In this way, it was clear that they couldn't stay on the North Island any longer. The other islands were too far away and they weren't very familiar with them. Qin Dongqing and Lu Pinggan discussed for a long time and finally decided to escape to the Middle Island. The ungoverned Keiluo Mountain was a ready-made foothold. Although the Keiluo Mountain was dangerous. However, one of them was at the peak of the late stage of the Golden Core Realm, while the other was at the middle stage of the Golden Core Realm. As long as they were a little more cautious, they would be able to protect themselves. Old Lu, we have to figure out what to do next. After all, we can't really stay in this ravine all the time, right? Qin Dongqing frowned. He was from the Qin family of the North Island and had always been regarded as the successor. He was used to living in luxury since he was a child. Now he was forced to escape to the Keiluo Mountain. It was okay for a day or two, but he couldn't endure it for a long time. But now the Blue Cloud sect of the North Island has fallen into the hands of Lin Yi. Both of us may have been accused of betraying the sect now. If we go out rashly and are targeted by people with ulterior motives, we'll be in big trouble. Lu Pinggan also had a headache. No one would want to stay in this barren land, but the problem was that betraying the sect was a first-class felony in the small primitive Jianghu. Even if they walked out of the Middle Island, they would be beaten by everyone. What if they were encountered by the sects of the Middle Island that were on good terms with the Blue Cloud sect of the North Island? The consequences would be even more unimaginable. We still have to give it a try. We can't go on like this. If we really waste a few months, we won't be able to do anything. If it really takes a few months, just the cultivation resources for the two of us will be a big problem. Qin Dongqing shook his head. If it was an ordinary master of the foundation establishment stage, it would be possible to get some cultivation resources. But both of them were masters above the middle stage of the Gold Core realm. Almost all the cultivation resources of the Gold Core stage in the small primitive Jianghu were in the hands of various sects and families. Not to mention the sparsely populated Keiluo Mountain, it was difficult to buy them in the market. The path of cultivation was like rowing a boat against the current. After a long time, the strength of the two of them would inevitably decline, and then they would not be able to find peace even if they cried. How about? Lu Pingan pondered for a moment and suggested, let's simply go to another sect. With our strength, I believe that any of the primitive sects will be happy to accept us. At that time, we can spread the story of Lin Yi occupying the magpie's nest, which will inevitably attract the attention of the entire Primordial Alliance, and we will be in an invincible position. That sounds like a good idea. Qin Dongqing nodded in agreement. He was a master at the middle stage of the Gold Core realm, and Lu Pingan was a master at the peak of the late stage of the Gold Core realm. With such strength, if they went to any of the primitive sects, they would be treated well. Of course, the premise was that they could gain the trust of the other party. Fortunately, over the years, in order to help him rise, Qinjiu often took him to various primitive sects to show his face. Among them, there were a few who were on good terms, so it should not be a big problem to go and seek refuge. So let's go now? Lu Pingan looked at Qin Dongqing. Although his strength was higher, he still humbled himself in front of Qin Dongqing. After all, Qinjiu was not really dead. If they could find a way to cure him, they would not have a hard time with the protection of this Yuanying realm old monster. There is one more question. What about my ancestor? We can't just go and seek refuge behind his back, can we? Qin Dongqing was still frowning. Qinjiu was the greatest hope for him and Lu Pingan to turn things around. Unless it was confirmed that he was completely dead, it would be impossible to abandon him. Right now, how to settle him was a big problem. That's definitely not appropriate. Master's identity and strength are too sensitive. If we take him rashly, not to mention that few people dare to take us in, even if they do, it will inevitably give birth to all kinds of dirty ideas, which is not good. Lu Pingan shook his head. After all, if they really saved him, he would be a real Yuanying realm old monster. The Blue Cloud sect of the North Island had already staged a dove occupying a magpie's nest, and other primitive sects would not repeat the same mistake. In this case, we can only divide into two groups. One of us will go first, and the other will stay to take care of the ancestor. When everything is ready over there, we will find a way to secretly transfer the ancestor there. How about that? Qin Dongqing said. That's a way, but who will go and who will stay? Lu Pingan looked at Qin Dongqing. This was another problem. Although the two of them were now grasshoppers on the same rope, they could not be considered as confiding in each other. They did not know what kind of little schemes they had in their bellies. No matter who went and who stayed, there would always be various concerns. Chapter 5371. Just then a strange voice suddenly cut in. You two don't have to worry. As long as you join us, all your worries will not be a problem. Who's that? Qin Dongqing and Lu Pingan were shocked at the same time. Only then did they see several figures in the dense forest not far away. All of them were shrouded in black robes, looking extremely mysterious. Seeing this scene, the two of them suddenly felt their blood run cold. Although they were not nascent soul-old monsters, their strength was not low. They did not expect that they would unknowingly fall into the encirclement of these people. It was incredible. Hee hee, you can call me mysterious man, the black-robed man's tone was profound. If Bing Wuqing was here, she would know that this guy was the bespectacled professor. Mysterious man? What do you want? Qin Dongqing and Lu Pingan looked at each other, as if they were facing a formidable enemy. The other party had concealed themselves very well. They could not see their strength for a while, but they were sure that since these people could surround the two of them without anyone noticing, their strength was definitely not weak. Nothing. Since you've come to our territory as the host, we should come over and say hello, shouldn't we? The bespectacled professor smiled. Oh, the two of them could not help but be stunned. The reason why they chose the K Luo mountain in the middle island as their first stop was because it was an ownerless land. Otherwise they would not have rashly come in. When did such a group of mysterious hosts appear? We haven't been here for long, so it's normal that you haven't heard of us. After all, you're guests from the North Island, thousands of miles away. The bespectacled professor looked at the two's surprised expressions and became more and more playful. How do you know we're from the North Island? Qin Dongqing and Lu Pingan were shocked again. They had just missed the mention of the Blue Cloud sect from the North Island when they were talking just now. They did not say anything else at all. Could it be that these people had been guarding here from the beginning? Not only do I know that you're from the North Island, but I also know your identity. Qin Dongqing, the deputy leader of the Blue Cloud sect from the North Island, Elder Lu Pingan, and the one on the ground is Highest Elder Qinjiu. Am I right? The bespectacled professor smiled. Who on earth are you? The two of them were even more shocked. Didn't I say it just now? You can call me Mysterious Man, the bespectacled doctor paused and then said, Both of you are the victims of Lin Yi, and Lin Yi happens to be our enemy. It must be fate that you came all the way here to seek refuge. What? Do you also have a grudge with Lin Yi? The two of them were dumbfounded. They thought to themselves, what kind of people does Lin Yi have? He even has enemies in this godforsaken place. What a coincidence. Of course. Allow me to ask, do the two of you want to seek revenge on Lin Yi? Asked the bespectacled doctor. Qin Dongqing and Lu Pinggan looked at each other. Although they were full of fear towards the mysterious man in front of them, they still said truthfully, of course we want to, but we don't have the strength to do so. It's good that you have the heart. As for strength, as long as the two of you are willing to join us, you will soon have it, the bespectacled doctor persuaded. Join you? What do you mean? The two of them looked at each other. Until now, they were not even clear whether they were enemies or friends. How did they get to this point? The meaning is very clear. If the two of you join us, I can make you become old monsters in the Yuanying realm in a very short time. What do you think? The bespectacled doctor's words were shocking. Old monsters in the Yuanying realm. Hearing these words, Qin Dongqing and Lu Pinggan were completely shocked. When they came to their senses, they looked at each other as if they were looking at a monster. Was this guy's brain fried? Old monsters in the Yuanying realm were existences that could only be encountered by chance. With their qualifications, especially Qin Dongqing, even if they were given a few hundred years, they would not be able to reach the threshold. You don't believe me? That's simple. Anyway, you have come here. Just stay and have a look. It won't be long before you understand that what I said is true. The bespectacled doctor suddenly threw 2 elixirs to the two of them and said, this is a gift for you too. Golden elixir? This was Qin Dongqing and Lu Pinggan's first reaction, but then they shook their heads and denied it. This was definitely not a golden elixir, it just looked a little similar at first glance. Of course, it is not an ordinary golden elixir, but a special improved version. As for the effect, it is at least 5 times more than an ordinary golden elixir. The bespectacled doctor laughed. The two of them listened with bright eyes, but after all, they did not know whether the other party was an enemy or a friend. This elixir did not feel ordinary. From the appearance alone, it was even far above an ordinary golden elixir. However, who knew if it was poison? You still don't believe me? It's okay. There should be a way to test elixirs in this small ancient world. If you two are worried, you can go out and find someone to test it. I can wait. The bespectacled doctor loosened the reins. Thank you very much. Qin Dongqing and Lu Pinggan nodded quickly. At this moment, their minds were completely focused on the elixir. They could not wait. After the bespectacled doctor left with his people, the two of them did not hesitate to go out on the vultures to find someone to test the elixir. Soon the results came out. Although it was impossible to accurately identify what elixir it was certain that there was no poison in the 2 elixirs. They were very clean. This result was somewhat unexpected, but at the same time, it made the two of them overjoyed. Since it was not poison, it meant that there was no danger. In turn, it confirmed the mysterious man's words to a certain extent. The effect of this elixir was at least 5 times more than an ordinary golden elixir. Was this possible? Both of them had a bit of luck in their hearts. If this was the case, then they would be rich. They did not hesitate to find a place to start taking the elixir. 3 days later, the two of them rode the vultures back to K Luo Mountain. Sure enough, the bespectacled doctor was already waiting here with his people. How is it? Are you satisfied with the effect of the elixir? The bespectacled doctor smiled. Qin Dongqing and Lu Pinggan did not speak, but the momentum shown by the two of them at this moment was enough to explain everything. They were both in the golden elixir great perfection. In just 3 days, Lu Pinggan broke through from the peak of the golden elixir late stage to the golden elixir great perfection was understandable, but Qin Dongqing broke through from the golden elixir middle stage to the golden elixir great perfection, which was really incredible. Looking at the two of you, you should have discovered it, right? The bespectacled doctor continued to smile. Chapter 5372. Just as the bespectacled doctor had said, they had already discovered the faintly discernible poisonous gas in their bodies. This horrifying discovery was enough to completely extinguish their little bit of joy. Even if they were beaten to death, they would never have thought that after they had already found an appraiser and the result was that there was clearly no poisonous substance in their bodies, there would be such a terrifying and troublesome poisonous gas left behind after eating it. Little did they know that this was a method that was integrated with the top technology of the secular world. It would be a miracle if it could be identified by the conventional appraisal methods of the ancient Jianghu. What do you want? Qin Dongqing and Lu Pinggan were a little panicked. Their strength had skyrocketed, but the price they had to pay was poisonous gas in their bodies. This was equivalent to selling themselves alive. No matter who it was, they would not be happy. They would only panic. Nothing much. Don't worry. Although the poisonous gas can't be eliminated, it won't break out in a short time. Even if it takes a long time, as long as you take the antidote regularly, it can be effectively suppressed. There won't be any problems. The bespectacled doctor said lightly. The two looked at each other. These words did not make them feel much more at ease. Instead, they became more frightened. The more stable the poison was, the more firmly the other party controlled it. What did this mysterious man want? Still worried. The bespectacled doctor looked at the two's expressions and smiled. He comforted them. My purpose has been stated from the beginning. We have a common enemy, so I need you two to join our organization. As for the strength of our organization, I believe there is no need to say more. You two should have a deep understanding of it. As long as you two cooperate well, I can help you become Yuaning stage-old monsters in a very short time. Qin Dongqing and Lu Pingan had subconsciously regarded these words as a fantasy before, but now it was different. With the previous medicinal pills as a foundation, they could be said to believe it without a doubt. On one hand, there was the temptation of a Yuaning stage-old monster, and on the other hand, there was the threat of inexplicable poisonous gas. In the face of this carrot and stick, normal people would not have a second choice. Okay, I'll join. Qin Dongqing was the first to make a decision. I'll join too. Lu Pingan was not willing to be left behind. Very good. With the help of the two of you, it will be even more convenient for us to do things in the primordial underworld in the future. It's like adding wings to a tiger. Congratulations. The mysterious person was overjoyed when he heard this. Although these two people's surrender was completely within his expectation, it still made him very happy. After all, if the center really wanted to gain a foothold in the small Jianghu of the primordial era, it had to rely heavily on the local natives. These two people were the top executives of the Green Cloud sect of the North Island. Whether it was experience, connections, or influence, they were far from being comparable to ordinary people. Even if they had escaped from the Green Cloud sect of the North Island, they were still very useful. I will do my utmost and dedicate my life to you. Both of them were shrewd people. Since they had already reached this step, they naturally adjusted their mentality extremely quickly, making it impeccable. However, only they themselves knew what kind of thoughts they had in their hearts. Good. The two of you have just broken through, so you need to cultivate and stabilize your realm. After a while, I believe there will be good news, the bespectacled doctor said with a profound smile. What good news? Qin Dongqing and Lu Pingan looked at each other curiously. You'll know when the time comes. When saying this, the bespectacled doctor's eyes fell on Qin Jiao, who was unconscious. For him, the joining of Qin Dongqing and Lu Pingan was not the biggest gain. The biggest gain was the supreme elder of the Green Cloud sect of the North Island. The key to mass-producing nascent soul-old monsters in the future would fall on this guy. 3 months passed in a flash. Snow Sword School of the Middle Island. For Su Xiaodong, this was a special day, because her most valued pro-disciple Lung Lung had come out of seclusion. After a few months of seclusion cultivation, Lung Lung successfully crossed the barrier between the Foundation Establishment stage and the Gold Core stage. Now she was a real master in the early stage of the Gold Core stage. As a master, Su Xiaodong herself was only in the early stage of the Gold Core stage. Now she was actually caught up by her own disciple. According to the rules of the sect, they would be on equal footing in the future. This kind of thing would inevitably be a little awkward for others, but not for Su Xiaodong. Instead, she felt very proud. It had only been a mere 1.5 years' time, but Lung Lung had soared from an early-stage Foundation Establishment realm disciple to the early-stage Gold Core realm expert today. Even though such an amazing performance could not be compared to Xue Jianfeng, who had a cheat code, it was still considered as shocking. No matter who taught such a disciple, he or she would be extremely proud. Not only that, with Lung Lung's heaven-defying aptitude and the various elixirs given by Lin Yi, after crossing the huge barrier of the Gold Core stage, it was completely possible for her to return to the previous heaven-defying state of rapid breakthrough. It would take dozens or hundreds of years for others to go from the early stage of the Gold Core stage to the great perfection of the Gold Core stage, but for Lung Lung, even if she did not use the improved version of the elixirs with great side effects, it would not take that long. Perhaps in a few years, the Snow Sword School would have another great perfection of the Gold Core stage. However, before the master and disciple could have a few words, a familiar yet disgusting voice cut in. It was Xue Jianfeng. Yo, you've finally come out of isolation. It looks like you're already in the Gold Core stage. How rare. Xue Jianfeng walked towards the two with an evil smile on his face. It was obvious that he did not come with good intentions. Lung Lung and her master, Su Xiaodong, looked at each other and could not help but feel a little surprised. Ever since this fellow's legs were destroyed by Bing Wuqing in public, not long after that his father, Xue Liping, sent him out to seek medical treatment. There was no news of him for a few months. They did not expect him to appear again today. There was something strange about this matter from the beginning. Logically speaking, with the injuries on his legs, the doctors in the Snow Sword School might be able to cure him. Even if they did not have the ability, they could at least give it a try. There was no need for him to go out to seek medical treatment, let alone stay out for a few months. Seeing that Lung Lung and Su Xiaodong did not speak, Xue Jianfeng did not mind. He walked closer and reached out his hand to touch Lung Lung's cheek. He continued with an evil smile. He said, "I haven't seen you for a few months. Junior sister, you've become more and more attractive. I can't help but feel sorry for you. Initially, I wanted to continue to pursue your past deeds, but I've changed my mind now. As long as you repent and mend your ways, I can let bygones be bygones. How about that?" Repent and mend my ways? Lung Lung took a step back and avoided his lecherous hand. She had already advanced into the gold core stage. Even if she was only in the early stage of the gold core stage, she was at least at the same level as the other party. She would definitely not be able to defeat him, but she would not be helpless to the extent that she could only wait for death. Chapter 5373. Lung Lung frowned and immediately prepared to use the ice prison mirror. The power of this move was enough to threaten beginner Golden Elixir Realm experts when she was in foundation building consummation. Now that she had advanced to beginner Golden Elixir Realm, its power had increased tenfold or even tenfold. It was enough to threaten any Golden Elixir Realm experts, including those in Gold Elixir Realm consummation. Especially since this was the Snow Sword faction, where she did not need to deal with Xue Jianfeng alone. Once they started fighting, they would quickly attract onlookers, and if things got out of hand, it would no longer be her problem. However, before Lung Lung could make her move, a bone-chilling coldness had already enveloped Xue Jianfeng. Bing Wuqing's voice followed. "Who are you talking about when you don't know what's good for you?" "I knew it. When Lung Lung is in trouble, you Lin Yi's damned lackey would definitely jump out and bare your teeth." I was right. Not only was Xue Jianfeng not shocked, but the corner of his mouth curled into a smug and mocking smile, as if he had forgotten the painful lesson from last time. "So you're saying that you came prepared?" Bing Wuqing looked at him again. Although he did not make a move, nor did he release any terrifying aura, her intuition told her that he was no longer the same as before. Thinking of the few months that he had disappeared, anything was possible with the nature-defying skills of the core. Maybe he had already advanced to the nascent soul realm. Otherwise, with Xue Jianfeng's character of bullying the weak, he would never dare to come back to pick a fight at this time, and in such an open and above-board way. Thinking of this, Bing Wuqing suddenly understood. Provoking Lung Lung to lure her out on purpose, could it be that this guy wanted to seek revenge on her? "What do you think?" Xue Jianfeng did not hide it, and a ferocious look flashed across his eyes. "Someone asked me to bring you a message. There is a price to pay for betrayal, and traitors will never have a good ending. I hope you are mentally prepared." "Is that so?" Bing Wuqing's expression did not change at all. It was needless to say who the person he was talking about was. From the day he attacked Xue Jianfeng, she had already been prepared for this. She was not afraid at all. It was true that the center was unfathomable, but did that mean that Lin Yi was weak? The fact that the higher-ups in the center had repeatedly instructed their subordinates not to provoke Lin Yi was proof of Lin Yi's fearsomeness. Bing Wuqing believed that Lin Yi and his backer must have the profound strength to contend with the center. This was the most logical explanation. Otherwise, he would not have joined Lin Yi's side so easily. This was a huge gamble, and a smart person like him would not bet easily. "You seem to be fearless? Do you really think that you're invincible just because you've become a nascent soul cultivator? Do you think that no one can deal with you?" Looking at his expression, Xue Jianfeng couldn't help but laugh. He looked at Bing Wuqing as if he was looking at a clown who was about to be avenged by him. "So what you're trying to say is that you can deal with me?" Bing Wuqing's lips curled into a grin. "Of course. Otherwise, wouldn't all my saliva have been wasted?" Xue Jianfeng's expression became more and more smug. However, before he could make a move, his body suddenly sank. A thick layer of ice suddenly covered his entire body. Not only was it difficult for him to move, but it was also impossible for him to even lift his hand. The merciless ice aura this time was much more powerful than before. Bing Wuqing's cultivation level had not improved in the past few months, and she had not taken the 2 supreme-grade golden nascent gathering pills that Lin Yi had given her. Everyone knew that more haste, less speed. However, some people could restrain themselves while others could not. Bing Wuqing, who was an absolutely rational person, naturally belonged to the former category. In terms of direct effects alone, apart from the poisonous gas, the improved version of the core elixir was indeed much more powerful than ordinary elixirs. Even the supreme-grade elixirs that Lin Yi had personally refined could not compare to it. However, there was a huge drawback, and that was that it greatly depleted one's potential. The direct consequence of this was that it would be very difficult for one to achieve breakthroughs in the future, and one's foundation would be severely lacking. Although Bing Wuqing didn't rely on the core elixir to increase her strength like Shui Jianfeng, she had still taken it once. If it weren't for the fact that her natural endowment was so strong that it defied the natural order, no matter how many supreme-grade elixirs Lin Yi gave her, it would have been useless. To be honest, the fact that she was able to overcome the side effects of the core elixir in such a short period of time and successfully break through to the nascent soul realm was a result that shocked not only the outsiders, but even Lin Yi himself. However, no matter how strong and heaven-defying Bing Wuqing's natural endowments were, the side effects still existed. This was not obvious when she was in the nascent soul realm, but it gradually became apparent after she advanced to the nascent soul realm. The most direct manifestation was that it was no longer as easy to achieve breakthroughs as before. With her natural endowments, she could easily achieve breakthroughs with just a few elixirs in the past, but it was not realistic now. Of course, part of the reason was that it was more difficult to achieve breakthroughs in the nascent soul realm, but the side effects were still there. Fortunately, she had that half a stalk of divine knowledge grass as a foundation, which largely mitigated this side effect. Now that she had specially stabilized it for a few months, it could basically be considered to have offset the side effects. As her strength and realm became more stable, even though they were both in the early stage of the nascent soul realm, Bing Wuqing's real strength had increased a lot compared to a few months ago. Even if she were to face a more experienced early-stage nascent soul expert of the same level, she would only be stronger. Therefore, Shui Jianfeng was very confident when he returned this time. Bing Wuqing, who had expected this, was also very confident. Humph, with such insignificant skills, you have the nerve to repeat the same trick in front of me? Shui Jianfeng, who was trapped in the ice, suddenly snorted coldly. An extremely powerful burst of vital energy erupted from his body, and the ice instantly shattered to the ground. There was no longer any obstruction. Seeing this, the expressionless Bing Wuqing's eyes suddenly widened. This guy was not in the early stage of the nascent soul realm, but the peak of the early stage. Are you scared? Shui Jianfeng was very pleased with her shocked expression. He said proudly, "How about it? Do you feel a little regretful now? Unfortunately, even if you regret it, it's too late. Once you took this step, there's no turning back. To be honest, I really didn't expect that a rational person like you, Bing Wuqing, would be so hot-headed that you would actually take this path of no return. Before I really make a move, why don't you share your thoughts?" The peak of the early stage of the nascent soul realm was his greatest source of confidence. In these few months, he wasn't recuperating from his injuries. Instead, he was undergoing further strengthening and upgrading. The peak of the early stage of the nascent soul realm was the result of this strengthening and upgrading. Chapter 5374. However, the key that restricted them was the sample. Not only did they need a ready-made sample source, but they also needed a strong sample recipient. In the beginning, the strongest sample in the secular world was a heaven-level paragon, so the center of the secular world could only produce heaven-level paragon experts. However, when the people of the ancient underworld appeared, foundation establishment and golden core experts were no longer a problem. Now that Qin Dongqing and Lu Pinggan had brought the half-dead Qinjiu, it was only natural that they could produce nascent soul experts. Shui Jianfeng was the first test subject. As for why he could reach the peak of early-stage nascent soul, there was only one reason. Qinjiu, who was the sample source, was at the peak of early-stage nascent soul. Path of no return? Looks like you're really confident. Bing Wuqing's eyes narrowed into slits. This was a sign that he was serious. No matter how much she looked down on Shui Jianfeng, now that he had become a peak early-stage nascent soul expert, he was definitely a formidable opponent. I'm a whole level stronger than you now. Why don't you give me a reason not to be confident? Shui Jianfeng grinned coldly and suddenly drew his sword. The speed of his sword was more than 100 times faster than when he was at Golden Core Paragon. At first glance, it looked like a beam of cold light, and in the next instant, it was already at Bing Wuqing's throat. No one could have imagined that Shui Jianfeng would so openly kill Bing Wuqing in broad daylight. One must know that even when Bing Wuqing had seized the opportunity to turn against him previously, it was only to punish him. This fellow was a classic example of a vile person who would seek revenge whenever he had a grudge. Cold and Su Xiaodong's eyelids twitched at the sight, and they immediately broke out in cold sweat for Bing Wuqing. However, this was a battle between nascent soul experts, and they were only at the early stage golden core experts, so they could not interfere at all. Fortunately, Xue Jianfeng's sword stopped at the last moment. It was not that he had deliberately withdrawn his strength, but that there was an additional layer of ice between the tip of his sword and Bing Wuqing's throat. What was different was that this layer of ice was an eerie black clang. With a crisp sound similar to metal colliding, Xue Jianfeng's sword was deflected by this layer of black ice, which shocked the arrogant Xue Jianfeng. He was now a peak early-stage nascent soul expert. How could he not break the defense of an early-stage nascent soul expert when he went all out? Especially when this layer of black ice appeared, it made people's hair stand on end. What kind of evil technique was this? Your level has indeed increased by quite a bit, but unfortunately your strength has not increased by much. Your sword is a bit unsteady. Bing Wuqing said calmly. Not only was there not the slightest hint of panic in her expression, it was as if she had seen through her opponent's background with this sword strike and regained her confidence. Xue Jianfeng's attack was indeed fast, so fast that he couldn't even react in time. However, the tip of the sword began to drift in the end. This was a sign of an unstable realm and insufficient foundation. No matter how nature-defying the technique was, it was not surprising that Xue Jianfeng would suffer from this after forcefully turning him into an expert at the peak of the early nascent soul realm in such a short period of time. Otherwise, it would not have been easy for Bing Wuqing to block his sudden attack. Humph! Stop putting on an act. Although that was what he said, Xue Jianfeng began to feel a little diffident. All this while, Bing Wuqing had always been superior to him. Even though she was superior to him now, he actually did not have much confidence. After all, he was not a fool. He knew better than anyone the drawbacks of the improved elixirs, especially when he had just become an expert at the peak early-stage nascent soul realm. Against Bing Wuqing, an expert at the early-stage nascent soul realm, there was a risk that he would fail miserably. At the end of the day, Xue Jianfeng would always feel inferior in front of a true peerless genius like Bing Wuqing. It was just that he was deceiving himself and refused to admit it no matter what. Whether I'm putting on airs or not, we'll know once we fight. Bing Wuqing's tone was very unyielding. Unlike the shock she had shown just now, the way she looked at Xue Jianfeng now was filled with aggression, just like how a vicious wolf would look at an injured leopard. Before the leopard was injured, the vicious wolf might have retreated, but now that it had seen through the leopard, the tables had turned. Being stared at like that, Xue Jianfeng felt his scalp go numb for a moment, and he even took half a step back subconsciously. However, he quickly regained his senses and forced a cold laugh. Humph, you sure sound arrogant. Let's see if you have what it takes. Bing Wuqing did not speak, but answered him with her actions. A pitch-black ice sword appeared soundlessly in her hand, emitting an unparalleled mysterious aura. It seemed sacred and solemn, yet evil and ruthless at the same time. It was hard to fathom, but it made one's heart palpitate. Xue Jianfeng's heart skipped a beat when he saw this. Black ice again. Before today he had never seen such a move from Bing Wuqing. Judging from the situation just now, this was obviously her trump card, and its power must be extraordinary. Just as they were about to fight, a group of people hurried over from afar, and Hong Qingyuan's voice rang out. Wait, let's talk this out. It was not just sect leader Hong Qingyuan who had come. Great Elder Qi Qianxiu and the other members of the Elders Guild had arrived as well. They could not help but feel nervous. This was a battle between two nascent soul realm old monsters, and once they got serious, it would be a huge disaster for the entire Snowsword sect. Not to mention that Xue Jianfeng and Bing Wuqing were both members of the Snowsword sect. To a primordial sect, every nascent soul realm old monster was an invaluable asset. They did not want the Snowsword sect to lose any of them for nothing, especially if both sides were to suffer heavy losses. Humph, your reinforcements are here. Xue Jianfeng was already in a difficult position, and he was clearly frightened by Bing Wuqing's stance. Now that he had found a way out, he pretended to be magnanimous and said, considering that you and I are from the same sect and considering the bigger picture, I'll remember what you did last time. You'd better know your place in front of me in the future. Pretentious. Bing Wuqing looked at him as if she was looking at an idiot, but she did not make a move forcefully. Her priority was to protect Cold Lung, and it would be detrimental to Cold Lung's safety if they really fought here. Hong Qingyuan and the others breathed a sigh of relief when they saw this. On one hand, they were still shocked by Xue Jianfeng's strength, and on the other hand, they were genuinely worried. If the two of them were to really fight without a care in the world, they would not even dare to stop them. If they dared to interfere in the battle between two nascent soul realm old monsters, even Hong Qingyuan, who was at golden core great perfection, would only end up as cannon fodder. Chapter 5375. Hong Qingyuan and the others looked at each other. Last time, Bing Wuqing had taken matters into her own hands and got herself a permanent Great Supreme Elder, and they hadn't even had the time to report it to the Great Supreme Elder. Now she had gotten herself a permanent Great Supreme Elder. What the hell was this? Although they criticized her in their hearts, she was now an expert at the peak of the early nascent soul realm. They, including Hong Qingyuan, had no room to bargain. No matter what she asked, the only thing they could do was to listen obediently. Alright, it's settled then. Shui Jianfeng made his decision. Hong Qingyuan and the others all looked at Bing Wuqing. He was the only one who had the right to speak up and object at a time like this. Shui Jianfeng, the first executive Grand Supreme Elder, was obviously trying to ride on his head. The one who had the biggest reaction to this was definitely him. However, Bing Wuqing was completely indifferent. She didn't even have the intention to speak. She just looked at Shui Jianfeng with a sneer in her eyes, as if she wasn't interested. Soon, Shui Jianfeng, Hong Qingyuan, and the others left one after another. When they were far away, Bing Wuqing turned to Leng Leng and reminded, based on this guy's character, he won't let this go easily. Be careful for the next few days and avoid him if you can. Got it. Leng Leng nodded. Because she had just advanced to the Golden Core realm, she needed to stabilize her realm. She just needed to find a slightly more secluded place. Moreover, with Bing Wuqing as a deterrent, Shui Jianfeng didn't dare to be too unbridled. Little did he know that Bing Wuqing herself was feeling very weak at this moment. Although she looked like she was going to defeat Shui Jianfeng, it was actually just a bluff. The sudden appearance of Hong Qingyuan and the others was not so much to give Shui Jianfeng a way out, but to say that it had helped him out of his predicament. The black ice that Shui Jianfeng was most afraid of was indeed a killer weapon that he had recently cultivated. Unfortunately, it was far from being fully formed. Its effect in actual combat was very limited, which could not be concealed once they started fighting. Fortunately, Shui Jianfeng was frightened. Bing Wuqing had originally planned to continue stabilizing her realm for a while, but now she couldn't. Facing Shui Jianfeng, a peak early nascent soul realm expert who had suddenly appeared, she had to improve her strength as soon as possible. She was very clear that Shui Jianfeng wasn't someone who could be easily fooled. He might be able to scare them this time, but he might not be able to do so the next time. Fortunately, she still had the 2 supreme-grade golden nascent condensation pills that Lin Yi had given her. In addition, she had been stabilizing herself during this period of time. As long as she went into seclusion for a period of time, Bing Wuqing was confident that she could elevate her realm by 1 level. If she was lucky, she might even elevate 2 levels in a row. At that time, he would have enough strength to use the black cold ice. Shui Jianfeng would naturally not be a threat to him. Bing Wuqing was never one to procrastinate. Once she had made up her mind, she immediately went into seclusion. For 3 consecutive days, everything was peaceful. However, this peace was soon broken. Shui Jianfeng took much earlier than Bing Wuqing had expected, and he did not manage to see through the black ice. But he could tell that Bing Wuqing was putting on an act. Otherwise, with Bing Wuqing's extremely pragmatic nature, as long as she had enough power, she would not have swallowed her pride like this. Especially when he realized that Leng Leng had disappeared without a trace and Bing Wuqing had gone into closed-door cultivation. Shui Jianfeng felt even more strongly that he had been tricked. His first reaction in anger and humiliation was to barge into Bing Wuqing's cave abode. Anyone who went into closed-door cultivation would activate a defensive formation to prevent outsiders from invading, and Bing Wuqing's cave abode was no exception. Unfortunately, the defensive formation here was not of a high level. At most, it could withstand the attack of a golden core perfected expert. In front of a nascent soul old monster, it was practically non-existent, let alone Shui Jianfeng. Shui Jianfeng's sudden barge was far beyond Bing Wuqing's expectations. He was at a crucial point in his closed-door cultivation. He had suffered a great loss in just one encounter. If he had not barely released the Heartless Ice Force at the last moment to delay the other party for a moment, he would have been killed instantly. Otherwise, he would practically be killed in an instant. This time, Shui Jianfeng had truly unleashed his killing intent. However, Bing Wuqing was Bing Wuqing after all. Even though she had been viciously tricked by Shui Jianfeng, she was still able to escape death by herself and escape with serious injuries. The Snow Sword School was in an uproar when the news came out. Hong Qingyuan and the others almost went crazy when they heard about it. Many of them were people who prioritized the interests of the school above everything else. Before this they were all looking forward to a glorious future. Shui Jianfeng, Bing Wuqing, and the original Grand Supreme Elder made up a total of 3 nascent soul-old monsters. Such a luxurious top-notch configuration had already surpassed the level of all the 10 small sects and families. They could even begin to challenge the legendary 4 big sects, which were the true supreme rulers of the ancient underworld. Once they became one of the 4 big sects and families, it would be a brand new era for the entire Snowsword School. They were about to make history. Little did they expect that before they could realize this beautiful dream, Shui Jianfeng and Bing Wuqing would start fighting again. This time, Bing Wuqing was seriously injured, so much so that she finally escaped from the Snowsword School with all her might. Her whereabouts were unknown. Elder Shui, can you please explain to us what is going on? Hong Qingyuan asked, suppressing his anger. If the other party was not a nascent soul-old monster, he would not even want to speak right now. He would have been punished according to the school rules. Unfortunately, all the school rules were set for those below the sect leader. For a nascent soul-old monster like Shui Jianfeng, all the school rules were nothing but a fart. What is going on? Do you even need to ask? Bing Wuqing betrayed the school. It's that simple. Because of his strength, Shui Jianfeng no longer cared about Hong Qingyuan and the others. He did not even bother to make up an excuse for this kind of thing. He could deal with it with just a few words. Hong Qingyuan and the others all had a strange expression, as if they were constipated. Even if 10,000 alpacas were galloping in their hearts, they would not dare to refute him directly. Also, where did Cold go? Find her at all costs. Shui Jianfeng directly ordered everyone, then added, spread the word. If I don't see her by sunset today, then I will punish her master, Su Xiaodong. His words caused the expressions of Hong Qingyuan and the others to change drastically again. Not only did they not feel the joy brought about by 3 nascent soul-old monsters, but they were all anxious. Shui Jianfeng was acting so unbridled. He was prepared to become the local tyrant of the entire Snow Sword School. Chapter 5376. Under Shui Jianfeng's tyrannical power, everyone from sect leader Hong Qingyuan to ordinary Snow Sword sect disciples could only look at each other in silence. Su Xiaodong was captured and tied to the execution platform in public. The result was not out of Shui Jianfeng's expectations. Lung Lung, who had disappeared after hearing that her master was in trouble, appeared before the sky turned dark. I'm here. Can you let go of my master now? Lung Lung looked straight at Shui Jianfeng on the platform. Haha, the relationship between master and disciple is really touching. But when did I say that I would let go of your master if you came? Shui Jianfeng smiled evilly. What do you want? Lung Lung was not surprised. Nothing much. Even if I told you to give in right now, I don't think you'd agree to it. But it's fine, I'm patient. You'll understand when Lin Yi's unlucky, and I won't have to say anything then. Shui Jianfeng looked very confident and then sneered, what you have to do now is very simple. Stand with your master. If Bing Wuqing still remembers the mission Lin Yi gave her, I think she'll show herself. Compared to Lung Lung, Shui Jianfeng paid more attention to Bing Wuqing. After all, she was the one who could really pose a fatal threat to him. Now that he had managed to seriously injure her, he had to take this opportunity to eliminate her. Lung Lung was nothing in comparison. Although that was what he said, Shui Jianfeng had no idea whether Bing Wuqing would show up or not. He knew very well that she was an extremely rational and realistic person. Since she knew that she would be courting death by coming back, the possibility of her showing up on her own was really not high. The result was out of Shui Jianfeng's expectation. Bing Wuqing appeared before his patience had even begun to wear off. How rare, how rare. I didn't think that a cold-faced guy like you would be so loyal to Lin Yi, coming back to die for his woman. Should I say that you're noble or should I say that you're stupid? Shui Jianfeng couldn't help but be overjoyed. Lung Lung was also very surprised by this. Although she already knew that Bing Wuqing was one of them, there was not much substantial interaction between them. She never knew that Bing Wuqing's loyalty to Lin Yi was to such an extent. It was truly impressive. I'm not noble or stupid, Bing Wuqing answered. Oh? Why did you come back when it was clearly a suicide mission? Don't tell me you think you can escape alive? Shui Jianfeng did not hide his murderous intent at all. Now that Bing Wuqing was severely injured, no one else from the Snow Sword faction dared to stop him. Today was the day Bing Wuqing would die. Yes. Bing Wuqing's answer was short and forceful. Interesting, let's give it a try. The corners of Shui Jianfeng's lips curled up. It was true that he had been intimidated by the other party previously, but now he had seen through the other party's false bravado. Furthermore, Bing Wuqing was seriously injured. If he couldn't kill her even with this, he might as well find a piece of tofu and kill himself. Sure, let's give it a try, someone responded, but it wasn't Bing Wuqing's voice. Hearing this voice, Shui Jianfeng's expression instantly changed. Lung Lung's expression also changed greatly. However, the former's expression became extremely unsightly, while the latter was overjoyed. No one would have thought that Lin Yi would actually show up at Middle Island at this time. This was purely a coincidence. The reason why Lin Yi appeared here was purely because the situation at Blue Cloud Sect in the North Island was almost under control, so he came to Middle Island to visit Lung Lung. He didn't expect to run into this matter. I didn't expect that after not seeing you for just a few months, your wings have hardened. You're not simple. Lin Yi looked at Shui Jianfeng, who was standing on the high platform. His expression was neither happy nor sad, making it impossible for others to guess what he was thinking. Because the lesson from last time was still fresh in his mind, even though Shui Jianfeng had now become a peak early-stage nascent soul expert, which was completely different from how he used to be, he still subconsciously trembled when he was looked at by Lin Yi. However, this instinctive and inexplicable uneasiness was quickly suppressed by Shui Jianfeng. Now that he was already at the peak early-stage nascent soul, if he was still afraid of Lin Yi, who was merely in the foundation-building stage, wouldn't he be laughed at by others? Ha ha, what a good day today. I can't believe there's such a pleasant surprise. Bing Wuqing, you've done a good job. You're really a guy who knows how to adapt to the circumstances. You're really good at changing the rudder when the wind blows. Shui Jianfeng laughed and looked at Bing Wuqing with a face full of praise, giving people the impression that Bing Wuqing had listened to his instructions and deliberately led Lin Yi to his death. He had never forgotten the great shame that Lin Yi had brought him before. Originally, he thought that he would at least have a chance to avenge himself when he went to the North Island, but he didn't expect that the other party would take the initiative to come to his door at this time. That being said, Shui Jianfeng didn't have the guts to really kill Lin Yi in broad daylight. After all, it was a serious matter. Not only he but even the bespectacled doctor above him couldn't bear it. But as long as no one was killed, it shouldn't be a problem to give him a good punishment. Bing Wuqing ignored him. She didn't even have the mood to talk to such a low-level person who was trying to drive a wedge between them. If Lin Yi took the bait so easily, it could only mean that he was blind. Bing Wuqing had never thought of herself as a blind disabled person. Lin Yi also ignored him and walked directly toward the other party. Bing Wuqing wanted to follow him, but he waved his hand to stop her. Just watch the show. There's no need to be so nervous when dealing with this kind of trash. Shui Jianfeng didn't get angry. Instead, he laughed and snorted. You talk big. People who don't know you might think you're some old nascent soul realm monster. There's really no one who can act like you. To tell you the truth, I'm not a person who likes to show off. Most of the time, I'm just doing normal things like killing an ant with a wave of my hand. But in the eyes of people like you, I'm just showing off. Don't you think that's unfair? Killing an ant? Who's an ant? Do you mean that I, an expert at the peak of the early nascent soul realm, am just an ant in your eyes? Ah. Shui Jianfeng laughed maniacally at the sky, laughing so hard that he couldn't catch his breath. After a long while, he finally straightened his body and mocked, "Looks like I wasn't wrong at all. You're not just acting cool, you're even acting swollen." Whatever you say. Now you can kneel. Lin Yi's tone wasn't aggressive at all. It was calm as usual, as if it was a matter of course. Chapter 5377. Lin Yi had inexplicably asked Shui Jianfeng, a peak early-stage nascent soul expert, to kneel. Was this guy an idiot? Where did his confidence come from? At this time, Lin Yi was only 5 steps away from him. Shui Jianfeng had already made up his mind to make Lin Yi suffer. In a fit of rage, he unsheathed his snow sword without hesitation. With a flash of sword light, it was pressed against Lin Yi's throat. The scene was exactly the same as when he was dealing with Bing Wuqing. Lung Lung and Bing Wuqing's eyelids twitched when they saw this scene. They had to admit that this guy's sword speed after advancing to the peak early-stage nascent soul realm was a little too fast. Although there were other drawbacks such as the tip of the sword being shaky and the lack of power, the speed of the sword itself was extremely terrifying. When one's speed reached a certain degree, it would become an unbreakable technique. Even though Shui Jianfeng's sword had yet to reach the pinnacle of speed, it had undoubtedly reached the pinnacle in the eyes of the minor pugilistic world. After all, this fellow could be considered a genius. His aptitude was not fake. Shui Jianfeng had never thought of finishing off Lin Yi with a single strike. This was actually just a test. He wanted to let Lin Yi have a taste of the feeling of brushing shoulders with the god of death. He wanted Lin Yi to make a fool of himself in front of everyone. In his opinion, the show had only just begun. Unfortunately, the show that he had anticipated had only just begun. To be precise, it had already ended before it had even begun. Shui Jianfeng's sword was fast, but Lin Yi's soul-reaping hand was even faster. At the moment when he struck, a soul-reaping hand with black gas had already appeared above his head. His entire primordial spirit was instantly controlled, and then slowly pulled out of his physical body. One had to know that even Qinjiao, the sample source, could not resist Lin Yi's soul-reaping hand, not to mention Shui Jianfeng, a peak early-stage nascent soul expert who relied purely on imitation. In front of the soul-reaping hand he was nothing but a fart. Plop. Before his primordial spirit was completely pulled out of his physical body, Shui Jianfeng hurriedly knelt down without hesitation. In the face of death, faith and hatred were all meaningless. Begging for mercy was the most important thing. Everyone was speechless. At this time Hong Qingyuan and the others had already rushed over after hearing the news. It was just that they had no way of interfering in Shui Jianfeng's matter, nor did they feel that with Shui Jianfeng's strength, he would be at a disadvantage. They never imagined that it would actually be such an outcome. Shui Jianfeng actually really knelt down. Everyone looked at Lin Yi with incomparable shock and doubt. Who exactly was this person? In fact, even Bing Wuqing was shocked at this moment. She had thought that Lin Yi would be able to deal with Shui Jianfeng. Otherwise, with Lin Yi's style, he would not have come forward so rashly if he did not have enough confidence. However, the scene of him forcing Shui Jianfeng to his knees with such ease really refreshed Bing Wuqing's worldview. Wasn't this boss of hers a little too strong and unreasonable? Hey, you're quite sensible in the face of death. Seeing this, Lin Yi smiled. Seeing that Shui Jianfeng had been scared to the point of wetting his pants, he then released his primordial spirit, allowing him to escape. After all, this was the territory of the Snow Sword faction. Even if it was for Lung Lung's sake, Lin Yi could not directly kill Shui Jianfeng as soon as he arrived. Moreover, the unfathomable core was involved. Lin Yi did not plan to take the initiative to fire the first shot yet. Naturally, he would not mess up his rhythm just because of a mere Shui Jianfeng. When the primordial spirit returned to his physical body, Shui Jianfeng's face turned pale. Although he did not seem to be injured at first glance, in fact, having the primordial spirit forcibly extracted from the physical body was a very damaging thing to his vitality. Especially since Shui Jianfeng was an expert who relied on the core's techniques to forcefully reach his current level. In this aspect, primordial spirit was completely weak, so the impact was even greater. Without a few months' time, Shui Jianfeng would not be able to recover to his peak state. I have eyes but fail to see. Please be magnanimous and let me go. I won't dare to do such a stupid thing again. I won't dare to do it again. Shui Jianfeng hurriedly begged for mercy while trembling with fear. He almost buried his head into the ground. After all, he was not a fool. Although Lin Yi had released his primordial spirit with Lin Yi's technique just now, killing him was almost a matter of a thought. In order to live, he had no choice but to beg for mercy. Is that so? But why do I remember that I just taught you a lesson a few months ago? Now you don't recognize me anymore. What if you go back on your words in the future? I don't trust a guy with a criminal record like you. Lin Yi looked down at him from above. This. Shui Jianfeng crawled on the ground. Instantly he was sweating profusely. He did not even have the chance to refute this kind of thing. He could only beg with all his might, please believe me. I really won't dare to do it again. I won't dare to do it again. Elder Shui, please forgive me if I have offended you in any way. I represent all the disciples of the Snow Sword sect in gratitude. Hong Qingyuan also came forward with a group of elders to plead for mercy. No matter what, Shui Jianfeng was still a member of the Snow Sword sect. Moreover, he was a nascent soul realm old monster that they needed to rely on in the future. If he were to die in the hands of Lin Yi, it would be an incomparably huge loss to the entire Snow Sword sect. They could not afford it. Lin Yi glanced at them, then pouted at Shui Jianfeng on the ground and said, "They are pleading for you. This is a way to step down. Aren't you going to do something?" Do something? Shui Jianfeng was stunned. Nonsense. You went back on your words and went against me. You want me to let you go without paying a price? Do you really think I'm easy to fool? Or do you think I won't kill you? Lin Yi snorted coldly. Feeling the murderous intent that was gradually being released from the other party, Shui Jianfeng could not help but shrink his neck. People's minds always turned especially fast in this kind of life and death situation. He immediately understood what Lin Yi meant. Last time, Lin Yi let him go because he handed over half of the divine sense grass. So, it was clear that if he wanted to live this time, he would have to pay a sufficient price. But, I don't have the divine sense grass anymore, Shui Jianfeng said bitterly. Then change to something else. If you don't have anything decent, then cripple one of your arms. It'll be a good lesson for you, Linny said casually. Shui Jianfeng's face was bitter. If he wanted to satisfy Lin Yi, he needed at least a treasure on the level of the divine sense grass. How could he take it out in such a short time? I never repeat myself. If you can't take out something decent, then cripple one of your arms. Otherwise, if I do it myself, you won't be able to get away so easily, Lin Yi said indifferently. Chapter 5378. Under the watchful eyes of the crowd, Shui Jianfeng's face turned red. Seeing that Lin Yi's murderous intent was getting stronger and stronger, he had no choice but to clench his teeth and cripple his left arm. This should be enough, Shui Jianfeng said, enduring the pain. Scram. If there's a next time, you won't have to kneel. As Lin Yi spoke, he sent Shui Jianfeng flying with a kick in front of everyone. If this happened again, it would be Shui Jianfeng's death date. At that time, even if he didn't want to start a war with the center, he definitely wouldn't let this scourge live. Shui Jianfeng retreated in a hurry with the help of Shui Liping. Everyone's attention once again fell on Lin Yi. Witnessing this scene, Hong Qingyuan and the others were shocked and in awe. They did not dare to have any other thoughts. This person was too terrifying. I am the sect leader of Snow Sword Sect, Hong Qingyuan. May I know your name, and what orders do you have for my sect? Hong Qingyuan braced himself and asked on behalf of the crowd. My name is Lin Yi. As for my identity, I am now the Grandmaster of the Blue Cloud Sect in the North Island. You don't have to restrain me like this. I'm here to visit Lung Lung and Wu Qing. There's nothing else, Lin Yi answered casually. Although they had already guessed it, hearing it from Lin Yi's mouth still shocked everyone. The way they looked at Lung Lung and Bing Wu Qing changed a little, thinking to themselves that it was no wonder these two had improved so much in such a short period of time. It turned out that they had found such a powerful backer outside. This was incredible. At this moment, the elders, including Hong Qingyuan, could not help but break out in a cold sweat. It was fortunate that they did not offend Lung Lung before. Otherwise, if they had been like Shui Jianfeng and called him a traitorous disciple, they would have followed in Shui Jianfeng's footsteps, or even worse. After all, they did not have Shui Jianfeng's strength. If Shui Jianfeng was an ant in front of Lin Yi, then everyone present was not even an ant. They could only be regarded as dust. So it's the martial granduncle of the Blue Cloud Sect of the North Island. It's an honor to meet you. Please forgive us. Hong Qingyuan and the others hurriedly saluted to Lin Yi together. Their attitude was even more humble than that of the people of Green Cloud Sect in the North Island. Although they were from the Blue Cloud Sect in the North Island, and had nothing to do with the Snow Sword Sect in the Middle Island, they should have the awareness of dust. Not to mention other aspects, at least they had to show their attitude on the surface. Ignorance is not a crime. Besides, I'm here as a private person, so there's no need for all these formalities. Lin Yi paused for a moment before saying, as an outsider, I shouldn't be able to comment on the matters of your Snow Sword School. However, since it's related to cold, I still have to ask. Is she a traitor disciple of your school? Of course not, Hong Qingyuan and the others hurriedly denied. If she's not, then why didn't anyone stand up to stop Shui Jianfeng from treating her like this? Does the Snow Sword School not even have this basic rule? Lin Yi frowned and said, this. Hong Qingyuan and the others could only look at each other and smile bitterly. If they had the strength to stop Shui Jianfeng, they would not have allowed Shui Jianfeng to be so unscrupulous. But he was a nascent soul-old monster, and even Bing Wuqing was seriously injured. What could they do? You're one of the 10 small sects and families after all. It's a bit embarrassing for you to act like this. Lin Yi taunted them mercilessly. To be honest, he was suppressing his anger at the moment. Luckily he happened to be here. Otherwise, if something really happened to Cold, Shui Jianfeng would naturally be the culprit, but these incompetent higher-ups of the Snow Sword School would not be able to escape the title of accomplice. At that time, the entire Snow Sword School would have to bear his anger. We've embarrassed ourselves in front of you, senior? Hong Qingyuan and the others collectively sweated. Although the other party's words were unpleasant, they indeed could not refute. No matter how powerful Shui Jianfeng's strength was, they were the actual decision-makers of the sect's affairs. According to the ancestral teachings, unless it was a major event that concerned the survival of the sect, the supreme elders could not interfere with the sect's affairs. Just from this point alone, the entire higher-ups of the Elders Guild were collectively derelict in their duties. Logically speaking, I shouldn't say this as an outsider, but Cold and I have a special relationship. I don't want anything to happen to her, otherwise. He did not finish his words, but the meaning was clear. Lin Yi smiled and said, speaking of which, I have a bit of a relationship with your Snow Sword School. Unless it's absolutely necessary, I don't want to make things unpleasant. Is that okay? Yes. We'll keep your instructions in mind, Senior. Hong Qingyuan and the others hurriedly responded, but they were a little confused. This senior granduncle of the Blue Cloud sect in the North Island actually said that he had a bit of a relationship with our Snow Sword School. What did that mean? Little did they know that the so-called relationship Lin Yi mentioned was actually with the Snow Sword School on the Heaven Island. After all, Sydney had stayed in the Snow Sword School before, and even Wei Xinjin was a member of the Snow Sword School. Lin Yi was treated as a distinguished guest by Hong Qingyuan and the others. They were all extremely respectful, even more humble than when they were facing Xue Jianfeng. This not only showed that Xue Jianfeng's popularity was too poor, but it also fully reflected the philosophy of the ancient Jianghu, which was to respect the strong. On the other side, Xue Jianfeng, who had escaped a calamity, did not hide away to heal his wounds, nor did he go to find the glasses doctor and the others. Instead, he went straight to the forbidden area of the Snow Sword School, the Snowy Peak. As one of the 10 small sects and clans, the territory controlled by the Snow Sword School was naturally not small, and the Snowy Peak was the highest peak within a radius of 100 miles. Strange mountains and rocks towered into the sky. The peak was covered in snow all year round, and the temperature was extremely low. Let alone ordinary people, this place was definitely a forbidden area for Foundation establishment experts. Even the Golden Core experts could not last long. This place was the activity territory of the nascent soul old monsters. Before the rise of Xue Jianfeng and Bing Wuqing, there was only one nascent soul old monster in the entire Snow Sword School, and that was the Grand Elder Yu Taizong. Without Yu Taizong's approval, other than the sect leader Hong Qingyuan, no one dared to trespass the Snowy Peak. However, Xue Jianfeng clearly did not care about this little rule. He did not come before because he did not want to. After all, the environment on the Snowy Peak was so harsh, and it was better to be tyrannical down there than to come up and suffer. But now the situation was different. Because of the existence of Lin Yi, this place was probably the safest place in the entire Snow Sword School for him. Unless Lin Yi deliberately wanted to shed all pretenses of cordiality with Xue Jianfeng, he could not possibly barge into the forbidden area to find trouble with him, right? Chapter 5379. Xue Jianfeng's main mission this time was to execute the traitor Bing Wuqing. But now that Bing Wuqing was not dead, he was forced to cripple his own arm. How was he going to explain this when he returned? Lin Yi can't stay here forever. I'll hide first. When he leaves, I'll settle the score with that dead face in Lung Lung. Xue Jianfeng gritted his teeth. Although he was extremely unwilling in front of Lin Yi's tyranny, he could only choose to endure the humiliation. However, before Xue Jianfeng could properly rest, a powerful aura from the top of the mountain had already enveloped him. Xue Jianfeng's heart suddenly trembled. This aura was actually stronger than his. It seemed to be at least mid-stage nascent soul. No, it should be mid-stage peak. Yu Taizong? After seeing the appearance of the person, Xue Jianfeng almost blurted out. This person was the great elder Yu Taizong. But wasn't this old man always in seclusion? Why did he suddenly come out? Nascent soul old monster? Who are you? How dare you break into my Snow Sword sect's forbidden area? Yu Taizong was equally shocked after sensing the other person's aura. His first reaction was that the Snow Sword sect had been invaded and even exterminated. After all, the other party had even sent out a nascent soul old monster. That was definitely a situation where they would not rest until they were dead. In the entire Snow Sword sect, who else but him could deal with a nascent soul old monster? But after being stunned for a moment, Yu Taizong quickly reacted. This person in front of him was not an outsider. After all, Xue Jianfeng was once a representative figure of the Snow Sword sect. As a great elder, he had seen him several times and could not completely not recognize him. Elder Yu, you've come out of seclusion? Xue Jianfeng also reacted and quickly corrected himself. His strength was only at the bottom of the early-stage nascent soul realm, but this person in front of him was a true mid-stage nascent soul realm expert. How would he dare to be the slightest bit disrespectful? You are Xue Jianfeng? What's going on? How did you suddenly become a peak early-stage nascent soul realm expert? Yu Taizong was dumbfounded. In less than 2 years, he had gone from Foundation establishment great perfection to nascent soul realm peak. This kind of thing really overturned his worldview. Normal people would not be able to accept it. This is a long story. There are some fortuitous encounters that ordinary people can't imagine. Of course, the most important thing is still my own extraordinary talent. I'll tell Elder Yu in detail in the future. Xue Jianfeng evaded the important and dwelled on the trivial. Super talent? Yu Taizong didn't hide his suspicions at all. Shui Jianfeng's natural endowments were indeed not bad, but in his eyes he was far from being nature-defying. At least he couldn't be compared to Bing Wuqing. What kind of nature-defying opportunity did this brat get? Let's not talk about this first. Elder Yu, our snow sword school is in big trouble. Shui Jianfeng rolled his eyes and pretended to be anxious. What big trouble? Yu Taitsong was originally prepared to question Shui Jianfeng, but his attention was immediately diverted. After taking a look at Shui Jianfeng's left arm, he asked in a deep voice, "You were injured by someone?" To be able to injure Shui Jianfeng, an existence at the peak of the early nascent soul realm, that person's strength absolutely could not be underestimated no matter how one looked at it. If they were not careful, it might be a great crisis that could lead to the annihilation of their clan. Yes, the one who injured me was the newly emerged immemorial Grand Master of the Blue Cloud clan in the North Island. This person is called Lin Yi. He colluded with the traitorous disciples of our Snow Sword School, Lung Lung and Bing Wuqing. Not only did they find an opportunity to injure me, but they also worked from the inside and outside to control the entire sect. Shui Jianfeng took the opportunity to fan the flames. His plan was very simple. Since he couldn't defeat Lin Yi, then he might as well provoke this peak of the middle nascent soul realm Yu Taitsong into action. It would be best if he won, but there was no loss if he lost. There's actually such a thing. Yu Taitsong fell for it as expected. Hearing that, he was instantly enraged. There was actually someone who dared to collude with the traitorous disciples to control the Snow Sword School. How could this be tolerated? However, before Shui Jianfeng could rejoice, Yu Taitsong immediately retracted his anger. Looking him up and down, he said in an unfathomable tone, "You can't be deceiving this old man, right?" How could that be? Whether what I said is true or false, with Elder Yu's intelligence, you only need to go down and casually walk around. What's the point of me lying to you here? Shui Jianfeng said without changing his expression. Is that so? Yu Taitsong was skeptical. After all, he was an old monster who had become shrewd with age. No matter how good Shui Jianfeng's expression was, he could not hide some extremely minute flaws. However, Yu Taitsong could also feel that the other party's words were half true and half false. At least he could be sure that the strength of that Blue Cloud clan in the North Island, Lin Yi, was definitely not to be underestimated. Otherwise, it would be impossible for him to injure Shui Jianfeng's arm. It's absolutely true. If this goes on, our Snow Sword School will completely fall into the hands of outsiders. You, the pillar of stability, must not ignore this. Shui Jianfeng hurriedly advised. Even if it's really as you said, I'm afraid I'm also powerless right now. Yu Taitsong laughed bitterly. If he heard these words under normal circumstances, regardless of whether it was true or false, he would definitely go down the mountain to verify it. But now was really not the time. Shui Jianfeng suddenly choked. In fact, he was not so naive as to think that he could completely bluff Yu Taitsong with just a few words. In his plan, as long as Yu Taitsong went down the mountain and saw him, he would definitely fight with Lin Yi. After all, no matter what, it was an undeniable fact that Lin Yi had interfered with the internal affairs of the Snow Sword School. It was also a fact that he had colluded with Lung Lung and Bing Wuqing. And in the eyes of the people in charge of the school, either one of these two things was an unforgivable felony. What? Shui Jianfeng asked unwillingly. It was rare for a fighter to come to his door. He did not want to let it go so easily. Because I've just come out of seclusion. Yu Taitsong glanced at him. Isn't this just right? Let Elder Yu exercise your hands and feet, and let everyone have a good look at your newly increased strength? Shui Jianfeng still did not give up. The problem is that my seclusion this time failed. Not only did I not advance to the next level, but I also suffered a not light backlash. Yu Taitsong shook his head with a bitter smile. He had already been in seclusion for a full 3 years. The effort he had put in was not little. His goal was to break through to the late nascent soul stage. But the result was that he failed to break through and was injured by the backlash. It really made him feel depressed and want to vomit blood. Although he had not met Lin Yi face to face, since the other party could cripple Shui Jianfeng's left arm, it could be imagined that his strength must be above the peak of the early nascent soul stage. Even the most conservative would be the middle nascent soul stage. With his current state, he might not be able to gain an advantage and might even suffer a big loss. The older one was, the more they cherished their life. Yu Taitsong was a typical example. Unless it was absolutely necessary, he would absolutely not take any risks. Chapter 5380. Of course he could lie through his teeth, but how could it be easy to deceive an old fox like Yu Taitsong? If he was not careful, it would backfire on him. If Yu Taitsong saw him as an enemy with ulterior motives, then he would be screwed. The Lin Yi you mentioned is from the Blue Cloud sect of the North Island? I haven't heard of him before? Yu Taitsong frowned and asked. There was no need for Shui Jianfeng to continue to sow discord. From the moment he heard that Lin Yi had intervened in the Snow Sword sect, they were basically destined to be enemies. He was originally a primordial spirit left in the secular world. Because of this experience in the secular world, he had the opportunity to return to the Blue Cloud sect of the North Island. In just a few months he had already killed Qinjiu, the highest elder, and became the real new master of the Blue Cloud sect of the North Island. Now he wants to extend his hand into our Snow Sword sect. This guy's ambition is not ordinary. Shui Jianfeng explained while continuing to add oil to the fire. He knew from the beginning that Qinjiu was killed by Lin Yi. After all, Qinjiu was the source of his strength. But from what Qin Dongqing and Lu Pinggan said, Qinjiu was killed by Lin Yi, so he did not take it to heart. Otherwise he would not dare to show off in front of Lin Yi even if he was beaten to death. Unfortunately it was too late to know now. His left arm was crippled. Preposterous. Yu Taitsong was provoked again. Because he failed to break through to the late Yuanying stage, he was already full of anger. At this time it was easier to be irritable. But it was limited to irritation, not to the extent of losing his mind. In fact, Shui Jianfeng's words were self-defeating. If Yu Taitsong still had doubts about Lin Yi's strength, then when he heard that Qinjiu was killed by Lin Yi, the last bit of doubt suddenly disappeared without a trace. It should be known that he had dealt with Qinjiu of the Blue Cloud sect of the North Island many times, and was well aware of Qinjiu's strength. Although Yu Taitsong's current strength was far above Qinjiu's, in terms of Yuanying Old Monster's experience, Qinjiu was much deeper than him. Back when he was still at the peak of the Gold Core realm, Qinjiu was already a well-known nascent soul realm Old Monster. Now that he had surpassed Qinjiu, other than proving that Qinjiu's aptitude and opportunities were not as good as his, it also proved that Qinjiu's foundation was absolutely sufficient. In the entire primordial underworld, if Qinjiu claimed to be number 2 in the early nascent soul realm, no one would dare to claim to be number 1. The likes of Shui Jianfeng simply couldn't be compared to him. Since this Lin Yi, who he had never met before, was able to kill Qinjiu, then his strength was at least at the middle stage of Yuanying. There was no doubt about this point, and he might even be stronger than this. Especially since this guy was an ambitious person, then he, Yu Taitsong, could not rashly leave the mountain at this time. At the very least he had to wait until his injuries were healed. After waiting for a long time, seeing that Yu Taitsong didn't continue after saying, preposterous, Shui Jianfeng was instantly dumbfounded. Frowning, he glanced at this grand elder and said, Elder Yu, you wouldn't be afraid, right? Nonsense. Yu Taitsong couldn't help blushing, glaring. This old man is a dignified middle-stage Yuanying expert. Looking at the entire primordial underworld, the number of people that can defeat this old man can be counted on one's fingers. Why would I be afraid of an insignificant nobody? Then you are. Although Shui Jianfeng didn't say anything unpleasant, his expression had already explained everything. But that expression had already explained everything. Within the suspicion there was clear disdain. Being looked at with such a gaze, anyone would be enraged, let alone Yu Taitsong, who had always been high and mighty. However, Yu Taitsong ultimately still endured. Everything cannot be impulsive, one must think thrice before acting. This old man is currently injured. If I rashly go down, other than putting myself in a passive position, there is no benefit. As you said, this Lin Yi won't start a massacre at my Snow Sword sect for a while. Why don't we wait for a while and wait for this old man to recover before leaving the mountain? Then when do we have to wait? Shui Jianfeng couldn't help but frown. Things can be done slowly. In any case, you are now a peak early Yuanying expert. Why don't you even have this little bit of patience? Yu Taitsong looked at him with some dissatisfaction. He paused and said, according to what you said just now, that Lin Yi wants to dip his fingers into Snow Sword sect, he won't leave for a while. What's the harm in waiting for a month or so? This. Shui Jianfeng choked. He couldn't help but think that he had miscalculated. If he had known earlier, he would have changed to a more urgent way of speaking. He was very clear that Lin Yi definitely wouldn't have the leisure to dip his fingers into Snow Sword sect. If he waited for a month or so before leaving the mountain, he would have long disappeared. What? Don't tell me you have something to hide from this old man? Yu Taitsong said suspiciously. He was originally a fellow who had become shrewd with age. His vigilance was naturally unquestionable. Although Shui Jianfeng could be considered as someone on his side, suddenly becoming a peak early Yuanying was really full of strangeness. With Yu Taitsong's suspicious nature, it wouldn't be easy for Shui Jianfeng to completely gain his trust. No, Absolutely not. Shui Jianfeng jumped in fright. If he were to fall out with Yu Taitsong, he wouldn't have a good ending. He quickly changed the topic and said, "Actually, I know of a good place. Not only can it let Elder Yu quickly recover from your injuries, it can also let you advance a level in a short period of time." What place? Yu Taitsong was startled, his expression showing some disbelief. Speaking of this, in less than 2 years I broke through from foundation perfection all the way to today's peak early Yuaning. Elder Yu, don't you think it's strange? Shui Jianfeng said with a flash of inspiration. Of course it's strange. Yu Taitsong's interest was instantly aroused. His first question just now was about this matter. It was just that Shui Jianfeng had laughed it off temporarily. Looking at his posture, could it be that this brat was willing to say the real reason? The reason is very simple. Because I joined an unfathomably powerful organization. It's precisely by relying on the organization's power that I completed my current world-shaking transformation. Shui Jianfeng's tone was filled with pride. Joining the center could be said to be a turning point in his fate. Although he couldn't avoid being controlled by the poisonous gas, compared to the supreme strength he could easily obtain, this little regret was nothing. Organization. Yu Taitsong's eyelids twitched when he heard this. His entire aura immediately became somewhat unfriendly, his tone unfathomable as he said, "You joined another organization? In other words, you've already betrayed the Snow Sword sect?" As long as one joined another organization, regardless of whether it was a sect or a family, they would naturally be seen as betraying the sect. This was an undeniable point. Chapter 5381. He had long been mentally prepared for this. Since he dared to say these words, he naturally had a certain degree of confidence in his heart. After all, through the conversation just now and his previous understanding of Yu Taitsong, this great elder was not an inflexible person who didn't know how to adapt. Oh, then this old man will listen respectfully. Yu Taitsong was indeed just putting on a show. Clearing the house was just a slogan to deceive people's hearts. When it was needed, he would use it to shout. As for now, it clearly hadn't reached that step. With the power of the organization, since it can make me a peak early Yuaning stage expert in less than 2 years, then naturally it can also easily make Elder Yu a level higher. At that time, let alone late Yuaning stage, even the unprecedented great perfection of Yuaning stage is not impossible. Elder Yu, don't you want to give it a try? Shui Jianfeng tempted. Although these words were a spur-of-the-moment idea, it wasn't entirely his own idea. Before this, the bespectacled doctor had mentioned the possibility of recruiting Yu Taitsong, but firstly, this person had always been in a state of closed-door training. Secondly, this person's strength was too high. Without a suitable opportunity, it would be difficult to recruit him. Therefore he had never tried it. Now, because of Lin Yi's pressing, it could be considered a rare opportunity. It was just right to push the boat with the current. Great perfection of Yuaning stage. These words to any Yuaning stage old monster was a fatal temptation. Yu Taitsong was naturally no exception. Especially at this juncture where he had just failed to break through to the late Yuaning stage, the impact of this temptation was almost invincible. Unsurprisingly, Yu Taitsong fell into silence. If it was anyone else who said this, he would definitely scoff at it. But Shui Jianfeng, a living example, was standing in front of him. He couldn't help but believe it. After a long while, Yu Taitsong's breathing was somewhat rough as he raised his head. You really have a way to let this old man touch the great perfection of Yuaning stage? Of course, I have never had the habit of wasting my saliva. Right now, I am formally extending an olive branch to you on behalf of the organization. Whether or not you want to become the #1 person in the entire immemorial small Jianghu will depend on Elder Yu's decision. Shui Jianfeng was all smiles as he continued to persuade Yu Taitsong, but he was secretly calculating in his heart. If he could convince Yu Taitsong to join them this time, it would definitely be a great merit. At that time, not only would the bespectacled doctor not punish him, he would even be heavily rewarded. As for the so-called #1 person of the immemorial small Jianghu, this was just to fool Yu Taitsong who didn't know the inside story. When the center really grasped that technology, he, Shui Jianfeng, could become a nascent soul great perfection expert in minutes. Under focused nurturing, he might even be stronger than this. The so-called #1 person was nothing. Silence again. At this time, silence in itself was already a kind of attitude. Yu Taitsong was clearly moved. However, in the end he was still an old monster with a suspicious nature. If he wanted to make Yu Taitsong take the bait with just a few words, he was still lacking by a bit. Elder Yu, there is one more thing that I have to remind you of. That Lin Yi's strength is not to be underestimated. Do you know how many moves he used to turn me into this state? Shui Jianfeng continued to strike while the iron was hot. How many moves? Yu Taizong asked subconsciously. One move. I had no power to resist in front of him. My left arm was forced to be crippled. In order to lure the other party to take the bait, Shui Jianfeng spoke the rare truth this time. He smiled bitterly. Although your strength is much stronger than mine, to tell you the truth, even if you completely recover your strength at the peak of the middle nascent soul stage, you still may not be that Lin Yi's opponent. At that time, no matter what you do, you will have to look at an outsider's face. Can you bear it or not? Is this true? Yu Taizong immediately sucked in a breath of cold air. Easily finishing off a peak early nascent soul stage expert in one move, and moreover making the other party unable to resist, even if he recovered to his peak state, he still wouldn't be able to do it. Absolutely true, you will know once you ask. Shui Jianfeng spoke with certainty. Although family scandals should not be spread, this matter had after all happened in public. There were too many people who knew, and Yu Taizong was not one of them. In this way, the last line of defense in Yu Taizong's heart finally loosened. On one hand, there was the temptation of a nascent soul stage expert, and on the other hand, there was the unfathomable threat of Lin Yi. There was no use for him to continue staying on the snowy peak. After all, what was the use of recuperating? Alright, this old man agrees. Yu Taizong quickly made a decision. Great, let's go down the mountain quietly now. I will bring you to my superior. Shui Jianfeng was instantly overjoyed. This time he could finally atone for his mistake. Coming down from the snowy peak, the two concealed their auras and quietly left the territory of the Snow Sword faction, heading straight for K Luo Mountain. The entire Snow Sword faction was completely unaware of this. As for Lin Yi, he was personally treating Bing Wuqing's injuries. Previously, when she was in seclusion, she was ambushed by Shui Jianfeng. Bing Wuqing's injuries were too serious. This was no longer something that could be cured with a recover pill. If it was not treated carefully, it was very likely that there would be repercussions. Fortunately, Lin Yi was here. This little injury was nothing to him. After the treatment, Bing Wuqing went into seclusion again. With the effects of the supreme-grade condensing nascent pill, she quickly advanced to the next level and became a peak early nascent soul stage expert. In this way, he once again stepped on Shui Jianfeng. With the gap between their innate talents and foundations, it was impossible for Shui Jianfeng to be a match for him at the same level. There was no doubt about this. Bing Wuqing's successful advancement made Lin Yi feel slightly relieved. He had been accompanying Lung Lung all this while. Other than the first few days when the two of them had fun, it was Lin Yi who guided Lung Leng in her cultivation. It was not just about the realm level but more importantly, the development of the Shattered Ice physique. After all, the two trump cards, including the prison drawing and the Shattered Ice prison mirror, were developed by Lin Yi's help. Of course, with Lung Leng's level of comprehension, she could explore on her own. However, she did not have Lin Yi's experience and vision, so it was inevitable that she would take some detours. Moreover, it was difficult to see any immediate results in a short period of time. Therefore, even if there was some suspicion of spoiling things through excessive enthusiasm, Lin Yi still took the job of guiding and coaching her step by step. The center was watching covetously, and it was impossible for him to stay by Lung Leng's side all the time. Finding a way to improve Lung Leng's strength as much as possible was the only way. However, even so, Lung Leng's strength could not be improved to a level where she could truly protect herself in a short period of time, especially when facing an opponent like Shui Jianfeng who was in the nascent soul stage. She really did not have many choices. It could only be said that she had Bing Wuqing by her side to take care of her. Unless the other party had some explosive improvement in strength, Bing Wuqing's current strength should be enough. Chapter 5382. It wasn't that Lin Yi was in a hurry to leave, but as an outsider staying in Snow Sword Sect for such a long time, it was inevitable that people would criticize him. In particular, the way he appeared was too eye-catching. It was only natural that people would say that he had ulterior motives. Don't look at how Hong Qingyuan and the others were all respectful like grandsons in front of him. In fact, they were all on guard in private, afraid that Lin Yi would have any ill intentions. With their strength, they wouldn't be able to withstand it. Looking at the way Tian Shui Jianfeng was dealt with, even Grand Elder Yu Taizong might not be able to handle it. They still didn't know that Yu Taizong had already followed Shui Jianfeng to K Luo Mountain. At this time, if Lin Yi had any bad intentions, no one in Snow Sword Sect would stop him. Fortunately, Lin Yi didn't think about that at all. Apart from dealing with the expansion of the center, he basically came to the ancient small Jianghu as a tourist. If it weren't for Qin Jiao and Qin Dongqing who were so stupid, he didn't even think about controlling the Green Cloud sect in the North Island, let alone the Snow Sword sect. After leaving Snow Sword sect, Lin Yi didn't directly return to the Blue Cloud sect in the north. With Xan Yijia controlling the situation, plus Hong Zijuan's assistance, especially since the biggest variable, Qinjiu, had been eliminated, the Qin family's high and mighty faction had now fallen apart. Even if the remaining people wanted to cause trouble, they didn't have the strength to do so. There was nothing to worry about the Blue Cloud sect in the north. Since it was rare for him to come to Middle Island apart from visiting Cold, Lin Yi also planned to take a look around. He wanted to experience the customs of this Jianghu, as well as investigate the strength of the top figures, so that he could make corresponding countermeasures in the future. As for Lin Yi's next destination, it was Yiling sect. He was going to Yiling sect to see Duanmuyu. After the wonderful experience in the ancient trial, their relationship had far exceeded the scope of ordinary friends. Now that he had come to Middle Island, he should go. Luo Mountain was originally an ownerless land, but now it had been turned into a central base by Dr. Glasses and the others. Although it was still in its embryonic form, it was already beginning to take shape. It was just like a replica of the central headquarters in the secular world, but the overall structure was very secretive. If they didn't know about the Dark Clan's inner circle, even if there were disciples from the far ancient era who barged into the Dark Clan, they wouldn't be able to notice anything amiss. In a huge underground chamber, there were 5 ice coffins neatly arranged. Each ice coffin had a person lying in it. From left to right they were Qin Jiu, Qin Dongqing, Lu Pinggan, and Shui Jianfeng. The last one was Yu Taitsong. Snow Sword Sect's Grand Elder Yu Taitsong was now like Shui Jianfeng, already a member of the core. Actually, when he had first followed Shui Jianfeng to Luo Mountain, Yu Taitsong hadn't completely made up his mind to join the center. Although he was indeed a little moved after hearing Shui Jianfeng's words, his attitude at that time was still mainly half-believing and half-doubting. However, when he saw Qin Jiu and the other 2 lying in the ice coffins, especially when he found out that Qin Dongqing and Lu Pinggan, the 2 high-level gold core cultivators of the Blue Cloud sect in the North Island who he had dealings with before, had now stepped into the peak of the early Yuanying stage, Yu Taitsong was completely shocked. After the shock, the next thing was simple. Since the center had proved that they had the ability to produce Yuanying stage old monsters in batches, then it was naturally not difficult to imagine that they could promote people to the peak of Yuanying stage. Yu Taitsong didn't hesitate for too long and quickly accepted the invitation of the Glasses doctor. On the surface it was like this. In fact, if people like Yu Taitsong said that they would completely submit to the center all at once, the probability of this happening was not to say that it was impossible. But it was absolutely negligible. This was a mutual use. When he reached the peak of Yuanying stage, there would be no one stronger than him in the world. At that time, no one could stop him from leaving this mysterious organization. This was Yu Taitsong's real thoughts. After all, the center was too secretive. Even if they had agreed to join on the surface, it could not be said that there was any degree of recognition in private. At most, it was just an organization with great value. Someone like Yu Taitsong, who was used to being aloof and powerful, would not easily surrender. Little did he know that from the moment he agreed, Yu Taitsong was destined to be unable to get rid of the shadow of the center. How could the benefits of the center be so easy to take? Looking at the 5 ice coffins in front of him, the Glasses doctor was in a good mood. The expansion plan to enter the small ancient underworld, although it was still in the early stage of preparation, was unexpectedly smooth. If this development continued, it would not take long to replicate the successful precedent of Heaven Stage Island, and it could be foreseen that this side would definitely be able to control the overall situation faster than Dr. Luan. After all, the strength level of the small ancient underworld was far worse than that of Heaven Stage Island. With a great contribution from now on, he would be able to truly rise to the top of the center. The Glasses doctor thought happily, Shuanya Lake. This was not the largest lake in the Middle Island, but it was definitely the most famous lake in the entire Middle Island and even in the small ancient underworld. At the same time, it was also recognized as one of the most unfathomable places. The reason was very simple, because this was the base of the Yiling sect. A large number of pavilions were all built in the middle of the lake. This was the most unique aspect of the Yiling sect. This alone was enough to show that its foundation was extraordinary. After all, this not only required a lot of manpower and financial resources, but also a series of special protective formations and other supporting facilities. This kind of extravagance was not something that an ordinary sect could afford. Although the Yiling sect had been passed down for thousands of years, it had always been lacking in disciples. Compared to the other large ancient sects, the number of disciples was at most 1/3 or even less. However, It had always firmly occupied the position of one of the 10 small sects, which was enough to show that its foundation was extraordinary. The scenery is really good. It's a good place to play. Lin Yi reclined in a small boat and slowly approached the pavilion in the middle of the lake. He could not help but feel relaxed and happy as he looked at the surrounding scenery of the water and sky. Duanmuyu had not mentioned much about the Yiling sect before, but he had more or less mentioned it when they were chatting. Xuanya Lake was one of the famous places in the small ancient underworld, and this reputation was not given for nothing. The person driving the boat was a middle-aged man. When he saw Lin Yi's relaxed expression, he could not help but ask, "Sir, are you just a tourist?" "You can say that, but I'm mainly here to see a friend. Judging from your attire, you should be an outer disciple of the Yiling sect. You know Duanmuyu, right?" Lin Yi asked casually. Chapter 5383. Now he was only at the peak of the early stage of foundation establishment. His strength and aptitude were not good enough. He didn't even have the chance to go to the secular world and the primordial trial. According to the rules, he naturally had to call Duanmuyu eldest senior sister. Lin Yi nodded. The man's surprised reaction was not strange. Duanmuyu was a famous person in Yiling sect, and she was recognized as the person who would take over the sect in the future. Ordinary people probably couldn't get close to her even if they wanted to. "May I know your name?" the middle-aged man asked quickly after the surprise. Lin Yi. Lin Yi said his name, and after thinking about it he added his background, North Island Blue Cloud Sect. As one of the 10 small sects and families, North Island Blue Cloud Sect and Yiling Sect didn't have a good relationship, but they still had some connections. It should be more convenient to use this identity. "You're Lin Yi?" The middle-aged man's reaction was even more strange. "What? Have you heard of me?" Lin Yi was stunned, but then he felt relieved. After experiencing those things in the secular world, his name had long been known to everyone. After these people came back, they inevitably talked about some interesting things with their fellow disciples. It was not strange that the man had heard of his name. "Well?" The middle-aged man nodded with a strange expression, and then didn't say anything more. When they reached the shore, he led Lin Yi to the door of the pavilion on water. After telling Lin Yi to wait at the door, he quickly went in to report. After a while the middle-aged man came out, but Lin Yi didn't see Duanmuyu. "Come with me." The middle-aged man glanced at Lin Yi, and then led him into a small path next to the pavilion. Lin Yi looked around and couldn't help but be surprised. At the end of the path was a long staircase. It didn't lead up but down. The key was that it was extremely deep, dozens of meters deep. It should have reached the bottom of the lake. That was not all. After reaching the bottom there was another long tunnel. After walking in the tunnel for 2 hours, the middle-aged man suddenly stopped. "Eldest senior sister is in front. You can go in." "She lives here?" Lin Yi frowned a little. There was an iron gate in front of him. He didn't know what was behind the iron gate for the time being, but normal people wouldn't like to live in such a deep and secluded place. He didn't notice that Duanmuyu had such a hobby after getting along with her before. "For now." The middle-aged man was non-committal. "Thank you very much." Lin Yi nodded. Of course he sensed that something was amiss, but he came here to see Duanmuyu. Since the other party said that Duanmuyu was inside, there was no reason for him to shrink back at this time. Without thinking too much, Lin Yi immediately pushed open the door and strode in. As soon as he stepped over the threshold, Lin Yi immediately understood what was going on. It was a formation. There was no doubt that this was a formation, and it should be a special formation for trapping people. After discovering this, Lin Yi's first reaction was not to frown. Instead he couldn't help but want to laugh. As soon as he arrived at the Blue Cloud sect in the North Island, he was tricked into entering the heaven-climbing formation. Now he came to Yiling sect and entered another formation. It seemed that the level was also not low. What kind of fate was this? "Lin Yi? Why are you here?" Soon Duanmuyu's joyful voice came from the front. This was a medium-sized secret room, complete with tables and chairs. At this time Duanmuyu was sitting on the bed in a daze. When he heard the door open, he thought it was another fellow disciple of the same sect. It wasn't until he saw Lin Yi's appearance that he realized it was him. He was overjoyed. "It's rare for me to come to Middle Island. I came to see you." Lin Yi smiled casually. He looked at the iron gate that was closed again behind him, and then carefully looked at Duanmuyu. He sighed with emotion. "I haven't seen you for a few months and you've lost a lot of weight. Are you losing weight in seclusion?" Duanmuyu originally had a lot to say, but she burst out laughing when she heard this. "Losing weight is losing weight. Why would I need to go into seclusion? Besides, how am I fat?" No matter how much of a tomboy she was, she still couldn't escape the nature of a woman. Duanmuyu wouldn't tolerate herself becoming a fat girl. Moreover, she had nothing to do with the word fat. At most, her figure was more fit and beautiful. Moreover, it was the light and graceful kind of fit and beautiful. Then why did you find such a strange and weird place to go into seclusion? Or is this where you usually live, your boudoir? Lenny smiled. Their relationship had unknowingly become very close after going through the primeval trials. Although it wasn't quite the same as Cold and the others, they spoke as if they were old friends. There wasn't a need to be too particular. Do you think so? Duanmuyu rolled her eyes in amusement. Although this place had all kinds of furniture, there were no small decorations that a girl's boudoir should have. There wasn't even a decent mirror. No matter how much of a tomboy she was, Duanmuyu would not need a mirror. Which girl's boudoir didn't have a mirror? Not really, but with your style it's not impossible. Lenny grinned. I'm not that careless. Duanmuyu snorted and then explained, this is a detention room. It's specially used for disciples who have committed crimes. What crime did you commit? Lenny asked. Divine knowledge grass. Duanmuyu spat out 3 words. What crime did you commit? Lenny was even more puzzled. I don't know why, but the higher-ups of the sect found out that I obtained the divine knowledge grass. Moreover, someone asked me to hand over the divine knowledge grass in public, but I refused, Duanmuyu said calmly. Hand over the divine knowledge grass? Your Yiling sect has such a rule? Lenny frowned. Usually, no matter what kind of treasure the disciple got during the test, it belonged to the disciple himself, and there was no such thing as handing it over to the sect. There was no such thing in the common world, and there was no such thing in the heavenly island, and it was the same in the ancient small world. Otherwise, it would be a huge blow to the disciples' enthusiasm. Who would be willing to risk their lives for treasures then? No, but the situation this time is special. After all, the divine knowledge grass is not an ordinary treasure. Duanmuyu shook her head. That was what she said, but it was impossible for her to hand over the divine knowledge grass just like that. It was one thing to be loyal to Yiling's sect, but it was another to hand over something that belonged to her without any principles. Speaking of which, who did you hear about the divine knowledge grass from? Lenny suddenly asked. Chapter 5384. There are not many people who know that the divine knowledge grass is produced in the primordial trial land, and there are even fewer people who know that you have obtained the divine knowledge grass. If there is really someone behind this, the only people who are really suspicious are these few people. Lenny nodded. That's impossible. My master had been in retreat long before I participated in the secular world experience and has not come out until now. He doesn't know that I have obtained the divine knowledge grass at all. What's more, he has always treated me like his own daughter. He would never target me in this kind of thing. Duanmuyu shook his head decisively. That's easy to say. If I remember correctly, there are only 3 people from your Yiling sect participating in the secular world experience this time, including you, right? Lenny asked. And apart from me there are only 2 junior brothers, Chiao Mingchong and Su Fei. Duanmuyu nodded. Yiling sect had a small population and there were many thresholds for participating in the primordial trial. This time they only sent 3 people, which was the least among all the 10 small sects and families participating. How strong are these 2 people? Lenny continued to ask. Chiao Mingchong is at the peak of the foundation establishment late stage, and his strength is quite good. As for Su Fei, although his talent is good, he has only joined the sect for a short time and is currently only at the foundation establishment early stage. At this point, Duanmuyu had somewhat understood what Lenny meant, and his eyes suddenly lit up. You mean, when I gave you the half of the divine knowledge grass, although there were only a few of us present, after all, there were too many people. It is not surprising that some people inadvertently leaked the news. In your sect, the most likely people to know about this situation are your 2 junior brothers. Of course, we cannot rule out the possibility that they will leak it to others after they return, but the biggest suspects are definitely the 2 of them. Lenny analyzed. So you think the biggest suspects are Chiao Mingchong and Su Fei? Duanmuyu pondered. Yes, there is no love without reason in this world, and naturally there is no hatred without reason. If someone is really scheming against you behind your back, then they must be plotting something. Through this method, they shouldn't be able to obtain the spiritual knowledge grass for the time being, so it must involve other interests. Lenny didn't need to say anything else. Su Fei's strength is too low, and he has no enmity with me, nor does he have any conflict of interest with me. He can basically be ruled out as a suspect. As for Chiao Mingchong, Duanmuyu frowned and said slowly, he's actually much more experienced in Yiling sect than I am. When I first joined the sect he was already the second senior brother. It's just that he hasn't had a breakthrough all these years, so I've caught up to him. But in private I'm afraid he still has some thoughts. In that case this Chiu Mingchong is indeed suspicious. He instigated you to hand over the spiritual knowledge grass. If you compromised and handed it over, then even if there was no substantial benefit to him, at least you would suffer a big blow, lest the gap between you widen. If he refused to hand it over as he was doing now, he would gain even more benefits. As long as the matter was blown up, he could plan well. It's not impossible to take over eldest senior brother's position. Linny nodded. Just like now, Duan Muyu was put in confinement. For a leading figure in the sect, this was already a very serious punishment, especially since this might just be the beginning. Maybe. Duan Muyu sighed. Although she sat in the position of Yi Ling sect's eldest senior sister, she always knew that sooner or later she would become a very important member of the sect's senior management. If everything went well, she might become the successor of the sect leader in the future. At least on the surface, this was how the senior management cultivated her. However, she did not have much desire for power. Even the masculinity she usually showed was inclined towards the chivalrous style of wielding a sword and singing. She never thought of becoming a scheming sect leader. Unfortunately, this kind of thing was not something that she could ignore. If she did not think about it, others would think about it. For example, if Chiu Mingchong, who was suppressed by her, was a guy who deliberately wanted to rise to the top, then he would definitely regard her as a thorn in his side. In this situation, it was almost natural for him to take advantage of this opportunity. There was nothing difficult to understand. Then what are you going to do now? Linny sat down calmly and poured himself a cup of tea. Although this was a confinement place except for the relatively claustrophobic environment, everything else was not bad. It could be considered a good room in and outside. I don't know. Duanmuyu shook her head. Based on her original character, even if she couldn't be considered to be decisive in killing, she would definitely do things in a clean and efficient manner. She rarely hesitated, but the current situation really put her in a difficult position. Even if it could be confirmed that Chiu Mingchong was behind this, what could she do? Not to mention that she was now in confinement and could not get out at all. Even if she really had a chance to get out, it would be useless. Could she confront Chiu Mingchong face to face? The other party used an overt scheme. Now that the people who wanted the divine knowledge grass were the entire Yiling sect senior management, what was the use of confronting them? To put it bluntly, at this moment, there were only two options left for Duan Muyu. Either hand over the divine knowledge grass or keep the divine knowledge grass, that was all. There were pros and cons to handing it over, and there were pros and cons to keeping it. It all depended on how she weighed the pros and cons. Of course, Duan Muyu's personality tended to be straightforward. She might not have really weighed the pros and cons before making a decision. It might just be based on her personal preferences. After a moment of silence, Duan Muyu raised her head in a somewhat embarrassed and apologetic manner. You came to see me with good intentions, but I didn't expect you to be dragged into this, or, it was easy to guess what she was going to say next. If she was alone, she could continue to hold on and not give in. At worst, she could just treat it as a retreat, but now it involved Lin Yi. If Lin Yi was also locked up here because of her, it would not be right. Don't, if you change your original intention and hand over the divine knowledge grass for me, I won't agree. Lin Yi interrupted. There was a large pile of divine knowledge grass roots in the space of the jade pendant. He did not care about Duan Muyu's half of the divine knowledge grass at all. According to their relationship, Duan Muyu handed over her half of the divine knowledge grass, and then Lin Yi would compensate her with a large piece of the divine knowledge grass root. After all, they had agreed to split it in half at the beginning, but Duan Muyu insisted. Chapter 5385. But you are also trapped here and can't get out. This is not a good idea, right? Duan Muyu frowned. She also thought that the sect's higher-ups might take the initiative to let Lin Yi out, but this was unlikely. Perhaps in the eyes of those people, Lin Yi was a bargaining chip sent to their door. Exchanging the divine knowledge grass for Lin Yi's freedom, this kind of proposal might have already been put forward for discussion. Lin Yi glanced around with an indifferent expression. It's okay, you don't have to mind. This was the truth. He was now a genuine Yuan Shen of the mysterious ascending stage. Even the one step to heaven array couldn't trap him. This unknown array naturally couldn't trap him either. After all, the one step to heaven array was personally set up by the legendary Great Emperor. No matter how great the background of this array was, it would be difficult to match it. How can I not mind? Duan Muyu smiled bitterly, but then she thought about it. In the river of spiritual knowledge, even a terrifying existence like Jianghu was subdued by Lin Yi. This might really be a small matter for him. Thinking of this, she suddenly felt a lot more at ease. Let's not talk about this. Anyway, we have nothing to do. Why don't we do something? Linny suddenly suggested. While they were talking, he had carefully explored the array that trapped the two of them. It was not much different from the one step to heaven array. It was a relatively tricky array, but with his strength, it would not be a problem for him to get out. If he spent a little more effort, he could even uproot this array. However, that would be equivalent to completely falling out with Yiling's sect. Judging from Duan Muyu's attitude, she probably did not want to go to that step. Otherwise, she would not have stayed here and done nothing. She even deliberately left the divine knowledge grass untouched. Do something? Seeing Lin Yi's gaze falling on her, even Duan Muyu could not help but shiver. She was a man, but after all she was still a girl. Especially in this situation, a man and a woman alone in a room, anyone would have a perverted thought. It's rare to see you. I want to take this opportunity to help you break through to the Jedon stage, and also help you refine the spiritual awareness grass. It's a small gift. Why are you blushing? Linny asked curiously. He had been with Duan Muyu for a while now, and this manly woman didn't blush often. Duan Muyu suddenly felt embarrassed. Just now, the scene in the mirror world where she was hugged by Lin Yi in a disheveled state unconsciously appeared in her mind. At that time, she acted extremely carefree, but now that she thought about it, she inevitably felt a little embarrassed, especially in this kind of situation. At this moment, the metal door suddenly opened, and a young man with a slightly tanned face stood outside. Without Duan Muyu's reminder, Lin Yi only needed a glance to recognize him. This person was Chiu Mingchong. The sect master and the elders asked me to come over and ask, what is eldest senior sister's decision? Chiu Mingchong's eyes fell on Lin Yi. No. Duan Muyu's answer was simple and direct. Chiu Mingchong was not surprised by this. He had come over to ask the same question every few days and now he was used to it, but this time he did not turn around and walk away. Instead he continued, okay, but the higher-ups specifically told me another thing. Eldest senior sister, you said before that there was only half of the spiritual awareness grass in your hand, so the remaining half of the spiritual awareness grass is most likely with Lin Yi. Since he has come to our Yiling sect this time, I hope he can return it to its rightful owner. Return it to its rightful owner? Lin Yi was not surprised that the other party wanted him, but returning it to its rightful owner, what did this mean? Yes, the spiritual awareness grass has been a treasure of our Yiling sect since ancient times, and it is only clearly recorded in the ancient books of our Yiling sect, so is there anything wrong with saying that it should be returned to its rightful owner? Chiu Mingchong said. Lin Yi was stunned for a long time when he heard this. Was it really appropriate to say such a shameless statement so openly? If there is information about the spiritual awareness grass in your family's ancient books, then all the spiritual awareness grass in the world can only belong to your family. What kind of weird logic was this? Duan Muyu, who was on the side, blushed a little and held his forehead. Even in his own family these words were at most a joke, but now they were directly used to mock Lin Yi. Wasn't he ashamed? The sect master said that Yiling sect and the Blue Cloud sect of the North Island have always had a good relationship. He doesn't want to hurt the relationship between the two sects because of this matter, so as long as you can hand over the spiritual awareness grass, then nothing will happen, and we will naturally treat you well and thank you. Chiu Mingchong continued to add. That's. Lin Yi thought about it and concluded, the reason you gave me isn't very flattering, but I get the gist of it. I'm in a situation where I'm being held captive, and the only way to redeem myself is to hand over the spirit grass. Is that what you mean? Duan Muyu almost laughed out loud and Chiu Mingchong's face was a little ugly, but he still nodded and said, Your Excellency must be joking, but in general you are not wrong. I believe that Your Excellency should be a smart person who knows how to adapt to the situation, right? Of course I know how to adapt to the situation. Unfortunately, the half of the spiritual awareness grass that you want is not with me at all. I gave it to Bing Wuqing. If you want it, you might as well go directly to Snow Sword Sect to find him. Anyway, it's not far from here. Lin Yi said casually. What? Chiu Mingchong was shocked when he heard this, and his face was obviously filled with disbelief. How can such an important thing as the spiritual awareness grass be given to an unrelated outsider? Your Excellency must be joking. He had only heard in private that Lin Yi had obtained the spiritual awareness grass, and Duan Muyu had gotten half. As for the specific situation, he was not clear about it. Naturally, he thought that Lin Yi had kept the other half for himself. The two of them had been together since the primordial trial, and they were a living pair. After obtaining the spiritual awareness grass by chance, they divided it in half. This kind of thing could be said to be logical. Unfortunately, Chiu Ming-chung did not know that the most important thing about the spiritual awareness grass was not the spiritual awareness grass, but the huge spiritual awareness grass root. Not only did he not know about this, but even the senior members of Yi Ling sect did not know about this. After all, there were no records of this in the ancient books. Otherwise, Chiu Ming-chung would have asked for the spiritual awareness grass root, and would not have stared at a mere half of the spiritual awareness grass. Am I familiar with you? Linny asked. No, not familiar. Chiu Ming-chung was stunned, and his face was inexplicable. Chapter 5386. Just you wait. Chiu Ming-chung left in a hurry after saying those 3 words. He was obviously going to ask the higher-ups of the sect for instructions. Not long after he returned. The sect leader said that since you said that you gave the consciousness grass to Bing Wuqing, we can believe it. But to prove your sincerity, he hopes that you can write a letter and ask Bing Wuqing to come over. This shouldn't be a big problem, right? Okay. Lin Yi agreed without hesitation. He took the pen and paper and wrote a letter on the table. There was nothing special, and he didn't mention the consciousness grass. He simply asked Bing Wuqing to come to Yi Ling's sect. After he finished writing, he left the letter at the door for Chiu Ming-chung to rush in and take it. When the iron door was closed again, Duan Muyu couldn't help but ask in confusion, "Why did you really write it?" "I'll write it if they want me to. It's not a big deal anyway." Lin Yi acted very indifferent. "But aren't you leading Bing Wuqing into the fire pit for no reason?" Duan Muyu was a little worried. She already knew that there was some kind of tacit understanding between Bing Wuqing and Lin Yi during the primeval trial. Although she didn't know why there was such a tacit understanding, she was basically sure that Bing Wuqing should be on their side. Wasn't Lin Yi dragging his own people into this? Since it's a fire pit, let's jump into it together. It'll be more lively this way. Lin Yi chuckled. Duan Muyu knew that he was joking, but she couldn't laugh at this time. After a moment of silence, she said, "I don't know what you're planning, but I don't want you to compromise with them because of me. You're the Grandmaster of the Blue Cloud sect in the North Island, and the higher-ups of our Yi Ling sect aren't fools. As long as you insist on not agreeing, they won't do anything to you. They'll let you go sooner or later." "What about you?" Lin Yi asked. "Me. At most, I'll stay in confinement here. It'll be a good closed-door training." Duan Muyu didn't look like she was pretending to be relaxed. That was what she really thought. From her standpoint, she definitely didn't want to completely fall out with the sect, but with her personality she wouldn't give in so easily. Then she would just let the stalemate continue. It's really rare for a woman to have such a carefree temperament. Lin Yi casually praised and then said, "Come, let's continue what we were doing just now." What is it?" Duan Muyu was confused. "Didn't I tell you? Since I have nothing to do, I can help you break through to the gold core stage. Don't you want to become a gold core stage expert and go out to scare them?" Lin Yi said in a natural tone. "Is that even possible?" Duan Muyu's eyes lit up. If she had the chance, she certainly wanted to break through to the gold core stage. In fact, if she was an expert of the gold core stage, this incident would not have happened. The divine knowledge grass could only be used by gold core stage experts. However, she was only at Foundation Establishment Great Perfection now. This was the most important reason why the higher-ups asked her to hand over the divine knowledge grass. If she became a gold core stage expert, then this argument would naturally be untenable. It was just that with her own ability she could only fantasize about this kind of thing. If she really wanted to break through to the gold core stage, she was actually not there yet. After all, strictly speaking, she had not advanced to Foundation Establishment Great Perfection for a long time. It had only been less than 2 years, and the key was that she didn't have the conditions. Without a gold core stage in hand, how could it be easy to break through to the gold core stage? "What's impossible about it?" Lin Yi said as he took out a handful of medicinal pills. Duan Muyu was dumbfounded at a glance. They were all gold core's golden pills and each one had a halo on it. They were all fucking top grade. This time, Lin Yi's main purpose for coming to Yi Ling sect was to give her some gold core's golden pills. After all, they were friends who had gone through life and death together. With Lin Yi's character, he would not mistreat such a reliable true friend. "All for me." Duan Muyu looked at the handful of gold core's golden pills that the other party stuffed into her hand and was dumbfounded. She knew that Lin Yi was a generous person, but it was a little shocking for him to be this generous. These were top-grade gold core's golden pills. "Yes, you don't have to eat them all at once. For now, eating 2 should be enough," Lin Yi said. 2. Duan Muyu was shocked when she heard this. She knew that the higher the grade of the medicinal pill, the more it should not be eaten, especially top-grade gold core's golden pills. With her current realm, Eating one would take all her energy to digest the incomparably huge medicinal power in it. Eating two at once would really kill her. Don't worry, of course you can't eat two when you're alone. But with me here it'll be fine. I can help you guide the medicinal power. Linny explained. He knew that Duan Muyu hadn't completely touched the barrier between foundation building and golden core. He hadn't reached the point where he could really break through to the golden core stage yet. It might not be safe if he only ate one supreme grade golden core, but if he ate two then it wouldn't be a problem. Is it really possible? Duan Muyu was still a little incredulous. She had never heard of eating two top-grade gold cores golden pills in a row. As for letting someone guide the medicinal power during the breakthrough process, it was even more unheard of. This kind of thing was completely contrary to her common sense. Yes. Linny nodded and did not explain much. Okay, then let's begin. Duan Muyu agreed very quickly. After the magical experience in the Archean trial, even if her trust in Linny was not as blind as Song Lingshan and the others, it was not much different. After all, this was a mystic ascension stage existence that Jianghu personally admitted. Compared to this, what really made her hesitate was actually the top-grade golden pills themselves. The value of so many top-grade golden pills did not need to be mentioned at all. It was much more valuable than the consciousness grass. A person like her who clearly distinguished between kindness and hatred would generally never accept favors from others, especially such an exaggerated favor. Just like how she did not want a big pile of consciousness grass before, and in the end she only wanted half a piece of consciousness grass, because this was the only thing she had agreed with Linny in advance. But unexpectedly she did not hesitate for too long on this, and did not even symbolically reject it, and directly accepted Lin Yi's gift. Lin Yi did not know what she had thought through, but he did not find it strange, because Duan Muyu was originally a very free and easy woman. Duan Muyu slightly adjusted her breath, trying to adjust her state to the best. This process did not take much time because she had been doing this all this time. Then she stuffed the two top-grade golden pills into her mouth without hesitation. Chapter 5387. The incomparably huge medicinal power erupted in an instant. Lin Yi gently placed his hands on her back and was about to guide the medicinal power for her. However, with a bang, Duan Muyu's clothes suddenly exploded. Looking at the beautiful body that was suddenly exposed in front of him, Lin Yi's first reaction was to be dumbfounded, and then he couldn't help but smile bitterly. I've gone too far. Hearing the somewhat awkward voice coming from behind, Duan Muyu's body couldn't help but tighten. After all, she was a woman. If it weren't for the fact that she couldn't be distracted at this time, she would have already crawled into a hole in the ground. No matter how much of a tomboy she was, no matter how close she was to Lin Yi, a girl's pure body being seen cleanly by Lin Yi with his hands on her back as well. This situation was simply... Her face was so red that it seemed like it was dripping blood, but Duan Muyu finally forced herself to calm down. Although she was ashamed, she couldn't regret it now. She could only risk it and continue to break through to the gold core stage. Otherwise, the incomparably majestic medicinal power in her body would instantly drown her. At that time, not to mention her pure body, she would even lose her life. At this time Lin Yi was quite embarrassed. He really didn't mean it. He knew that the medicinal power of two supreme-grade gold cores would be very strong, and he was prepared to guide it in this regard. Logically speaking, such an embarrassing accident shouldn't happen. However, the problem was that he suddenly found that the meridians in Duan Muyu's body absorbed the medicinal power at a speed that was almost 10 times faster than ordinary people. This was like pouring water into a bucket. Although the amount of water was the same in the end, the original intention was to use a small ladle to scoop in, but he didn't expect that it would suddenly become a large bucket of water to be lifted up and poured directly into it. This was completely unexpected. The legendary leaf vein? Lin Yi mumbled thoughtfully. The so-called leaf vein was just a legend, and everyone's meridians were the same. Even if there were some special people, their meridians were more or less the same. As for this so-called leaf vein, it wasn't something that Lin Yi was familiar with. In terms of the structure of the meridians alone, there was no difference from ordinary people. Otherwise he would have discovered it when he treated Duan Muyu last time. The structure was the same, but under certain special circumstances, the ability it displayed was completely different. For example, a normal meridian needed some time to absorb such a large amount of medicinal power, but for a leaf meridian, it was done in the blink of an eye. In the blink of an eye. All the medicinal energy was squeezed into the meridians of Duan Muyu's body, which was why such a charming yet awkward scene had occurred. The powerful medicinal energy instantly burst out from every pore of his meridians, and his clothes were naturally torn apart. Lin Yi could be said to be unprepared for this, but fortunately he was now a real profound ascending stage primordial spirit, even if the strength of the primordial spirit body was not enough. However, with his method of guiding the medicinal effects in the other party's body, it was more than enough. At most, the other party would be caught off guard. By the time the other party reacted, he would be able to easily control the situation. Time passed bit by bit. With Lin Yi's assistance, Duanmuyu's absorption of the medicinal efficacy was very smooth. By the time the medicinal efficacy was completely digested, it was already 3 days later. Duanmuyu suddenly opened her eyes, and a brand new aura slowly released from her body. There was a sincere smile on her face. The effect of 2 top-grade golden cores was really not in vain. In 3 days, it helped her successfully break through to the golden core stage. The key was not the early golden core stage. It was the peak of the early golden core stage. This surprise was a little unexpected, but it was also reasonable. After all, whether it was her talent or heritage, she was by no means a mediocre person. It was not an exaggeration to say that she was a genius. Since she ate 2 top-grade golden cores at once, it was not surprising that she had advanced 2 levels in a row. Congratulations. Lin Yi's voice sounded behind her. Duanmuyu was about to respond, but when she looked down, she suddenly remembered that she was still naked. Her face suddenly turned red, but before she could do anything, Lin Yi behind her had already handed over half of the divine knowledge grass. Strike while the iron is hot. Eat it. Oh. Duanmuyu subconsciously took it and hesitated for a moment. But she forgot the embarrassment of not wearing clothes. You're not thinking of handing it over, are you? Lin Yi asked curiously. That's not it, but... Duanmuyu was not an indecisive person, but this matter was indeed of great importance to her. Now the entire sect's higher-ups were forcing her to hand over this half of the divine knowledge grass. Although she had put on an attitude of refusing to cooperate, if she ate the divine knowledge grass just like that, there would be no room for negotiation. Once they fell out, it would be equivalent to betraying the sect. With her feelings for Yi Ling's sect, of course, she did not want to go to such an irreparable point. You're now a golden core stage master, so it's natural for you to eat the divine knowledge grass. No one can say anything about it. Besides, I'm here, no matter what happens, I can always support you. You won't lose control. Lin Yi's tone was very firm, and there was a sense of condescension. He was not targeting Duanmuyu, but the entire Yi Ling sect. Ever since he recovered his primordial spirit to the profound ascension stage and was able to kill a nascent soul stage old monster with one move of the soul hooking hand, this feeling naturally appeared. After all, for the entire ancient small Jianghu, he was originally an existence that stood above the rules. Then, okay. Duanmuyu finally nodded. Being submissive was not her style. Otherwise, things would not have come to this point today. Since the divine knowledge grass was hers, what was the harm in eating it? As she spoke, Duanmuyu took the divine knowledge grass and stuffed it directly into her mouth. Then her whole body stiffened again. There was no longer the embarrassment of not wearing clothes in her mind. Only 2 words were left in her mind: great pain, great pain. The indescribable pain surged like a tide, instantly engulfing her whole body. At this time, everything was not important. Strength and skills were not important. The only thing that could support her was her willpower. Because of her willpower, she was like a reef in the monstrous waves of pain. Time seemed to be extraordinarily long at this time. I'm a little reckless. A trace of regret suddenly appeared in Duanmuyu's consciousness. After holding on for a long time, she found that she could not hold on any longer. Chapter 5388. In short, Duanmuyu's opening method was wrong, so the current situation was basically the same as when her clothes exploded before. If it was someone else, even if it was a master of the Yuanying stage, Duanmuyu would definitely die at this moment. Fortunately, there was a profound ascending stage primordial spirit sitting behind her. In the small Jianghu of the ancient times, this was almost the existence of a master of the spiritual awareness. More importantly, this guy knew the entire refining process of the spiritual awareness grass. After all, since he came to the small ancient world, Lin Yi had to take a bite of the spiritual awareness grass almost every day to assist in his cultivation. In the first month he still felt unbearable pain, but by now he had basically become accustomed to it. He was probably the first weirdo in history to eat the spiritual awareness grass as a daily snack. Pain was pain, but in his eyes this thing was similar to coffee. Apart from the pain, it was quite fragrant and refreshing. Lin Yi unsurprisingly took over the turbulent and spectacular tide of pain for Duanmuyu, but he did not directly erase it for her. That way there would be no effect of refining the spiritual awareness. He just suppressed it to a certain extent rhythmically, and then released it little by little. In this way it was within the range of Duanmuyu's tolerance, and at the same time, it could maximize the effect of refining the spiritual awareness. In this way another day and night passed, and Duanmuyu struggled out of the endless sea of pain. It was just one day. This time was far from long for others, and it was not worth mentioning for cultivators who had been in seclusion for decades. But if they were in Duanmuyu's situation, it would definitely be extremely long because this was really like a year. The amazing perseverance that Duanmuyu showed on this day, even Linny couldn't help but be surprised. Although he had suppressed the tide of pain, the total amount of half of the spiritual awareness grass was still there. Even if it was released in a controlled manner, the degree of pain was still far above the usual. After all, Duanmuyu had only used one day to deal with the pain that others would need at least half a month to endure. She was able to do it without a sound, and Linny couldn't help but give her a thumbs up. Young lady, you really are a man. Phew. Like a marathon that had finally come to the finish line, Duanmuyu let out a long sigh of relief. At this time, her entire body had been soaked in sweat countless times, and her image had been completely thrown to the back of her mind. Her tense spirit for the whole day relaxed a little and her whole body fell back. Linny was stunned. Duanmuyu was too tired to care about his image, but he was not tired at all. Especially in the past few days, he had been openly admiring Duanmuyu's clean and beautiful back. It was inevitable that some charming thoughts would arise in his heart, but he had been very good at restraining himself. But now, Duanmuyu suddenly fell backward and directly crashed into his arms. Linny didn't even have a chance to react. He then stared blankly at the beautiful scenery in front of him. Previously he could only see his back, but now he could even see his front clearly. Pink? This thought flashed across Lin Yi's mind, and then he met Duanmuyu's eyes. Duanmuyu finally came to her senses at this moment. She quickly covered her chest and sat up again. She hurriedly tried to find clothes to cover her embarrassment. Unfortunately, the clothes on the ground had already been torn to pieces, and this place was the confinement room, not her boudoir. Naturally, there would be no clothes to change into. For a moment, she was like a headless fly and didn't know what to do. Linny was also very embarrassed. It was fine if Duanmuyu didn't move. He couldn't see too much. At most, he could only see her back. Now that she moved, it was even more beautiful, and he didn't know where to put his eyes. This kind of charming awkwardness didn't last long because Linny suddenly reminded, "Hurry up and hide, someone is coming outside." Duanmuyu was stunned for a moment. This room was shrouded by the black water array. Logically speaking, it was impossible for anyone trapped in it to perceive the situation outside, because divine sense couldn't explore it all. But based on the absolute trust established before, she subconsciously reacted and hid on the bed and covered herself tightly with the quilt. In fact, she should have done this when she was helpless just now, but for some reason she actually froze. Thinking about it, it was very strange. Sure enough, as soon as Duanmuyu hid under the quilt, the iron door was opened, and the person who came was still Chiu Mingchong. Chiu Mingchong stood at the door and was about to speak, but when he glanced at it, he was stunned. From his angle, although he couldn't see every corner of the room, he could still see it clearly. He clearly saw that Duanmuyu was actually on the bed at this moment. A man and a woman were sharing a room. Although Linny was still sitting on the side, Duanmuyu actually ran to the bed. Anyone could imagine what had happened, not to mention a guy with a rich imagination like Chiu Mingchong. Here's the chance. Chiu Mingchong's heart skipped a beat, but he didn't insist on this matter. This time he didn't come to watch the show. Bing Wuxing will be here soon. Before that, I would like to give you a word of advice. I hope you can weigh what you should and shouldn't say. Again, as long as you can help Bing Wuxing hand over the God Knowledge Grass, you will be an honored guest of our Yiling sect. Everything will be negotiable, Chiu Mingchong reminded. Sure, Linny agreed readily. A wise man submits to circumstances. Then we'll see your performance next. Chiu Mingchong was very satisfied with Lin Yi's attitude. He had no enmity with Lin Yi in the past, and the only thing he wanted was the God Knowledge Grass. As long as Lin Yi was sensible enough to help him trick the God Knowledge Grass from Bing Wuxing, he had no intention of continuing to make things difficult for him. Chiu Mingchong left, but before he left, he deliberately glanced at the bed. Although he still couldn't see anything, his gaze was meaningful. That guy's eyes are strange. Don't tell me he's taken a fancy to you? Linny turned to Duanmuyu on the bed and said. Huh. Duanmuyu was stunned. Then she shook her head with a strange expression and said, That can't be. I don't have any private contact with him, and a while ago the higher-ups were discussing what? Lin Yi saw her hesitant expression and couldn't help but feel a little strange. This girl had always been forthright and rarely hesitated. Chapter 5389. Yes, as many as you want here. Only then did Lin Yi remember that there was still a pile of women's clothes in his jade pendant space. He had already given a set to Duanmu Yu during the primeval trial last time. He was distracted just now and did not remember this. After taking the clothes from Lin Yi, Duanmu Yu did not get out of the quilt. Instead, she looked at Lin Yi with a strange expression and said, "You didn't do it on purpose, did you?" Of course not, you're thinking too much." Lin Yi suddenly sweated. Although Duanmu Yu's appearance was indeed quite pleasing to the eye, he really did not think of this. "Is that so?" Duanmu Yu was skeptical, but there was no unhappy expression on her face. After putting on the clothes quickly, she immediately returned to her usual elegant and neat manner. It seemed that she did not take the previous embarrassment to heart at all. "Of course, how can an honest person like me do such a wretched thing? After all, we've gone through life and death together. It's not like you don't know this." Lin Yi's words were justified, but looking at Duanmu Yu, who looked like a new urban white-collar worker, he could not help but think of her naked appearance, and he felt a little guilty. "Forget it, seeing that you've given me so many supreme-grade gold cores, I'll just look at them. It's nothing anyway." Duanmu Yu once again showed her forthright side. Lin Yi was speechless. After coming out of the confinement room, Xiao Mingchong did not lead the way for Bing Wuqing, who was waiting in the reception room. Instead, he went straight to the God Leaf Hall. This was the most core and authoritative place in the entire Yiling sect. It was where the sect leader and a group of high-level elders gathered, and all orders were issued from. At this time, the sect leader Yi Qingqing and other high-level elders were all present. When they saw Qiu Mingchong register and enter, they all showed some anticipation. "Did you get the divine consciousness grass?" "Master, not yet." Qiu Mingchong respectfully performed a disciple's salute. Although Duanmu Yu had surpassed him, his position in the sect was not low. However, his position in the sect was not low. After all, he was the personal disciple of the sect master, Yi Qingqing. "Then why don't you hurry over and keep an eye on him?" Yi Qingqing frowned. The spiritual awareness grass was an absolutely fatal temptation for any gold core stage master. Even if he was already the head of a sect, even if he was only one step away from the Yuanying stage, he still coveted it. If there was no chance at all, then it was fine. Now that it was within his reach, he couldn't help but feel a little anxious. The other high-level elders were also urging him on. If they could get their hands on the God Knowledge Grass from Duanmu Yu and Bing Wuqing this time, Yi Qingqing would definitely get the lion's share, but they would definitely get a share as well. If they couldn't get the meat, they should at least get some soup. Yes. However, this disciple just discovered something and felt that it was necessary to report it to Master and the elders, Qiu Mingchong said. "What could be more important than the divine sense grass?" Yi Qingqing and the other elders frowned. "When I went to talk to Lin Yi just now, I found eldest senior sister hiding under the blanket, and there were pieces of her clothes all over the floor. It seems like she went too far," Qiu Mingchong said with ulterior motives. "Outrageous." The group of high-level elders immediately started cursing when they heard this. As the eldest senior sister of the sect, how can she be so shameless and openly have an affair with a man from another sect in the restricted area? Where is the image of our Yiling sect? What a scandal. Yi Qingqing was even more enraged. Anyone with a discerning eye could see that he was trying to make a fuss. This was not surprising because although Duanmu Yu was recognized as the eldest senior sister of the sect, she was not his disciple. There was nothing he could do about it. Who asked Qiu Mingchong to not live up to expectations? Letting Duanmu Yu take the position of the eldest senior sister of the sect was somewhat embarrassing for the sect master, Yi Qingqing. He could not show it on the surface, but he still bore a grudge in his heart. Otherwise, he would not have listened to Qiu Mingchong's slanderous words and strongly advocated for Duanmu Yu to hand over the spiritual awareness grass. If this matter really spread out, it would be very embarrassing, but he did not care. It was a good opportunity to suppress Duanmu Yu. Now, Duanmu Yu actually had an affair with an outsider. That was even more terrible, and it would ruin the sect's reputation. Directly removing her status as the eldest senior sister was already a light punishment. This was exactly what Qiu Mingchong wanted. He deliberately said this at this juncture in order to make Yi Qingqing and the other high-level elders remove Duanmu Yu from the position of the eldest senior sister. This way he would naturally be able to become the eldest senior brother of the sect. His strength at the peak late foundation establishment was a little weaker, but he was still the personal disciple of the sect master, Yi Qingqing. Moreover, there were not many disciples in the Yiling sect to begin with. Apart from Duanmu Yu, no one could be above him, so it was only natural for him to be promoted. Everyone was filled with righteous indignation. Qiu Mingchong thought that his master would definitely go along with his wishes, but in the end he heard Yi Qingqing say, "This matter concerns the image of our Yiling sect, so we have to investigate it. However, we should suppress it for now and discuss it after they hand over the spiritual awareness grass." Qiu Mingchong was stunned and could not help but feel disappointed. Duanmu Yu would be severely punished for doing such a thing sooner or later, but in his opinion, the result of discussing it now and later was likely to be very different. At this time, Duanmu Yu was almost standing on the opposite side of all the high-level elders of the sect. Once she was severely punished, her position as the eldest senior sister would definitely be lost, and there might even be a heavier punishment that would make her unable to rise again. However, if they discussed it later, it would be hard to say if she really handed over the spiritual awareness grass. At that time, for the sake of the spiritual awareness grass, the high-level elders of the sect, including his master Yi Qingqing, would definitely be too embarrassed to kill her. If they were to go easy on her, maybe Duanmu Yu would be able to get away with it. Unfortunately, Qiu Mingchong had no right to speak on this occasion. Yi Qingqing had the final say. After all, for Yi Qingqing and the high-level elders of the other sects, punishing Duanmu Yu was only a small matter. The spiritual awareness grass was the most important thing. If Duanmu Yu was forced to completely give up and resist stubbornly because of this matter, it would not be worth it. What are you waiting for? Hurry up and go. Yi Qingqing glared at him. Yes. Qiu Mingchong did not dare to delay and obediently retreated. Soon, Bing Wuqing arrived at the confinement room under Qiu Mingchong's guidance. The iron door opened, and Bing Wuqing could not help but frown slightly as she felt the faint fluctuations of the array in front of her. Chapter 5390. He was very sure that no formation could trap Lin Yi, at least not in the primordial underworld. Since it was Lin Yi who asked her to enter, Bing Wuqing naturally did not hesitate and immediately stepped in. "Alright, since he's here, the three of you can have a good talk. I hope there'll be good news when I come back later. Of course it'll be good news for you too. Otherwise, you'll be imprisoned in this dark place for the rest of your lives. I'm sure it'll be very frustrating, right?" Qiu Mingchong laughed, closed the iron door and left. "Boss, what's going on?" Bing Wuqing nodded slightly at Duanmu Yu, who was beside her, as a form of greeting, and asked directly. Lin Yi's letter to him did not mention the specific situation. He only asked him to come over and he was still confused until now. Duanmu Yu couldn't help but look at Lin Yi in surprise when she heard this tone. Previously, during the primordial trials, she did see that there should be some tacit understanding and connection between the two, but she didn't expect it to be this kind of relationship. From this tone, Bing Wuqing was clearly like Wu Qintian and the others, becoming a loyal subordinate of Lin Yi. Others might not be much, but Bing Wuqing was a famous super genius in the entire primordial underworld. She had always been arrogant and rarely looked others in the eye. Now she was actually willing to submit to Lin Yi. This was really a little embarrassing. However, when she remembered that the other party was Lin Yi after the shock, Duanmu Yu felt that this matter was reasonable. Back in the primordial trials, even a legendary existence like Jianghu was frightened by Lin Yi. As long as he wanted to, subduing Bing Wuqing was naturally a piece of cake. Lin Yi told the whole story in a few words. After listening, Bing Wuqing had a strange expression on her face. She carefully looked at Lin Yi and Duanmu Yu, and finally came to a conclusion. "I didn't know that the higher-ups of the Yiling sect are really good at courting death." He could tell that Duanmu Yu and Lin Yi's relationship was not ordinary. Moreover, these people had actually blackmailed Lin Yi himself. If this wasn't courting death, what was? In comparison, the upper echelon members of the Snow Sword School were rather tactful. Duanmu Yu was speechless. Even from her point of view, she felt that the higher-ups of her sect were courting death. She wasn't worried about Lin Yi and her situation at all. Instead, she was more worried about Yiling's sect. What if they really angered Lin Yi this time and he casually destroyed the entire sect? Putting everything else aside, she still had deep feelings for the Yiling sect. Then what does boss mean? Bing Wuqing looked at Lin Yi. There was no need for him to use his brain in such a situation. He would just do whatever Lin Yi said. Even if Lin Yi ordered him to destroy the entire Yiling sect, he would absolutely not object. Of course, for the sake of Duanmu Yu, Lin Yi would definitely not do so. There's no hurry. By the way, you saw Qiu Mingchong just now. Did he look familiar? Lin Yi suddenly asked. Qiu Mingchong? Bing Wuqing thought for a moment and said, "He just went to the secular world to train. There doesn't seem to be anything special about him. Wait, he does look a little familiar. Seems like I'm not mistaken. He's one of them." Lin Yi nodded. What are you guys talking about? Duan Wuyu was confused. She had no idea what the two of them were talking about. Lin Yi and Bing Wuqing looked at each other. They didn't hide anything anymore and revealed everything. There's an extremely mysterious and powerful organization in the secular world called the Center. After this training in the secular world, they've already instigated many spies in various primordial sects. If I'm not wrong, they've already brought people to infiltrate the primordial underworld. After lying low for a period of time, they'll probably start to encroach on the primordial alliance. Encroach on the primordial alliance? Is that even possible? Duan Wuyu was dumbfounded. She had never seen the Center's strength and resources. Moreover, she was born and raised in the primordial underworld. When she suddenly heard this, she naturally felt that it was a fantasy story. Of course it's possible. They can easily create a bunch of nascent soul-old monsters. Given time, how difficult would it be to encroach on the primordial alliance? Lin Yi said. Create a bunch of nascent soul-old monsters. Duan Wuyu was completely dumbfounded. Nascent soul-old monsters were the highest combat power in the primordial underworld. If they could really mass-produce them, not to mention encroaching on the primordial alliance, it wouldn't be difficult for them to directly control the entire primordial underworld. Although she was horrified, Duan Wuyu quickly recovered. At least on the surface, she had regained her composure. She changed the topic and asked, Then you said Qiu Mingchong is? He's one of the chess pieces that the Center has secretly instigated. Lin Yi confirmed. From the first time he met Qiu Mingchong, he had already been suspicious. However, he didn't have a complete grasp of the Center's list of instigated defections. He could only rely on his initial observations. Unless he paid special attention, he would only leave a slight impression. It was only now that he had Bing Wuqing's testimony that he was completely certain. Of course, Bing Wuqing couldn't fully grasp the list of instigated defections. However, every time she contacted the bespectacled doctor, she would more or less meet with other people. Even if she didn't say it explicitly, she could still make some guesses. There's such a thing? Duan Wuyu was instantly shocked and angry. Although it was a question, there was no doubt about the meaning behind it. Otherwise, there was no way to explain Qiu Mingchong's recent abnormal behavior. Although this guy always had the intention of replacing her, he didn't have the guts to do so in the past. As the three of them spoke, the iron door outside opened. Qiu Mingchong stood at the door and asked, How did the discussion go? Oh, you mean the consciousness grass? Sorry, it's already been used up by Bing Wuqing. Lin Yi answered casually. This was the truth. The consciousness grass had indeed been used up by Bing Wuqing. Yes, it's quite delicious. Bing Wuqing took the opportunity to reply. She turned to look at Duan Wuyu and said, You ate it too. How did it taste? It was indeed quite delicious. Duan Wuyu cooperated. Since they already knew that the other party was a spy from the Center, this matter was no longer something that she or anyone else sent by Yiling could deal with. They could only let Lin Yi handle it. They would do whatever Lin Yi said. What? You ate it? Qiu Mingchong exploded in anger. This time, he had used the consciousness grass to stir up trouble, not just to replace Duan Wuyu's position. More importantly, he had received orders from the Center. If he couldn't fish in troubled waters and get the consciousness grass, the consequences would be unimaginable. Chapter 5391. Nonsense, it's so hard to get the divine knowledge grass. If it were you, wouldn't you eat it? Lin Yi scoffed. But isn't Duan Wuyu at Foundation Establishment great perfection? Qiu Mingchong still did not believe it. Sorry, I'm already at the golden core stage. Duan Wuyu smiled faintly. You. Qiu Mingchong choked, then flew into a rage out of humiliation. He snorted, I really hope this is just a joke. Otherwise it won't be good news for the three of you. I can only ask my master to personally punish the three of you. Punish us? Duan Wuyu was taken aback. He said with a strange expression, It's fine if they punish me. After all, I'm a disciple of the Yiling sect. But these two are outsiders. Even if your master is the sect leader, what right does he have to punish people from other sects? Qiu Mingchong, is there something wrong with your brain? If this was before, even if he knew that Qiu Mingchong was up to no good, Duan Wuyu would not have said this. But now that he knew that Qiu Mingchong was a spy, there was nothing to worry about. Since you're in the territory of the Yiling sect, you naturally have to follow the rules of the Yiling sect. Besides, you're just two weaklings. Can't my master, the sect leader, take care of you? Qiu Mingchong pretended to be pretentious. Of course, he knew that both Lin Yi and Bing Wuqing's powers were not to be underestimated. However, his knowledge was only based on what he had seen in the trial competition. He thought that Lin Yi was invincible below the Golden Elixir realm, while Bing Wuqing was only at the early stage of the Golden Elixir realm. Of course he had to look up to such powers. However, his master Yi Qingqing was a Golden Elixir perfected being. After hearing his words, Duan Muyu and Bing Wuqing looked at him as if they were looking at an idiot. Only Lin Yi had a look of agreement on his face. What you said makes so much sense that I actually have nothing to say. Duan Muyu and Bing Wuqing rolled their eyes at the same time. They were speechless that Lin Yi would have the mood to joke with this kind of person. Good that you know. Just you wait. Qiu Mingchong thought that Lin Yi wanted to admit defeat and leave with an arrogant attitude. It was too late for regrets now. In the Divine Leaf Temple, Yi Qingqing and the other elders were waiting for Qiu Mingchong's good news. However, after Qiu Mingchong's report, all of their expressions became ugly. This is too much. Yi Qingqing suddenly slammed the table, and the huge conference table turned into powder. He was only one step away from breaking through to the nascent soul realm. Now, his only thought was to obtain the divine sense grass to further refine his divine sense. That way, not only could he become the strongest gold core expert in the ancient martial world, he could also lay a good foundation for breaking through to the nascent soul realm. In the process of breaking through to the nascent soul realm, even if it was just a little bit more confident, he absolutely couldn't let it go. The three of them are clearly looking down on Master and our Yi Ling sect, especially Duan Muyu, who openly slept with an outsider and ruined the sect's reputation. In my opinion, he must be severely punished. Otherwise, if word of this gets out, we'll become the laughing stock of the pugilistic world. Qiu Mingchong took the opportunity to sow discord. No one had any objections to this. However, one person suddenly stood up. It was a middle-aged man with snow-white hair. He was thin and had a weak aura. At first glance, he looked like a sickly person who couldn't withstand the wind and rain. However, no one present dared to look down on him. Even the sect master Yi Qingqing was wary of him. This person was called Yi Tongxian, and he was Yi Qingqing's senior and junior brother. At the same time, like Yi Qingqing, he was the only two golden core perfected experts in the Yiling sect. You said that you slept with an outsider? Yi Tongshuan's cold gaze pierced Qiu Mingchong's heart. He subconsciously took a few steps back. One should know that he had another identity, which was Duan Muyu's master. If not for his strong backing, Duan Muyu wouldn't have been able to sit in the position of eldest senior sister so easily. However, before today Yi Tongxian had been in seclusion, so he didn't know what had happened. He also didn't know that his disciple had been grounded because of the consciousness grass, and even had her chastity tainted. I saw it with my own eyes. She and Lin Yi were alone in a room together. Their clothes were torn to shreds and they even hid on the bed. If this isn't sleeping with him, what is it? Qiu Mingchong said stubbornly. Call you are here. You can confront him. If he says anything false, you can prepare to die. Yi Tongxian snorted coldly. His tone was extremely overbearing. Duan Muyu was his only direct disciple, and he was famous for being protective of his disciples. Moreover, he had a special identity and was very powerful. Not to mention Qiu Mingchong, even Yi Qingqing, the sect master, couldn't do anything to him. Master. Qiu Mingchong was so scared that his scalp went numb. He could only look at Yi Qingqing for help. If Yi Tongxian really wanted to kill him, he couldn't do anything unless Yi Qingqing intervened. It was a pity that Yi Tongxian was famous for being a pain in the neck. Unless it was absolutely necessary, Yi Qingqing wouldn't want to confront this junior brother of the same sect. However, Qiu Mingchong was his direct disciple after all, so he couldn't just ignore him. Junior brother, don't be impulsive. If that's the case, Mingchong, bring Duan Muyu here with the token to confront him face to face. We'll know the result then, Yi Qingqing said. If the affair was true, then even if he did not do anything, Yi Tongxian would probably clean up the sect. If this matter was fabricated out of thin air by Qiu Mingchong, then Qiu Mingchong only had himself to blame. No matter what, Qiu Mingchong was just a useless disciple. In Yi Qingqing's eyes, Qiu Mingchong did not have much weight. If he was beaten to death, then so be it. Yes. Qiu Mingchong didn't dare to be negligent. He quickly took the token and went to fetch Duan Muyu. Having seen that scene with his own eyes, he had full confidence in the matter of Duan Muyu and Lin Yi. At this time he wasn't particularly flustered. Before he left, he turned his head and asked, Master, what about Lin Yi and Bing Wuqing? The Black Water Matrix is a first-class trapping matrix. Even an ordinary Yuanying stage-old monster can't break out of the matrix. Let them live and die on their own. Yi Qingqing snorted coldly. This time he was determined to get the grass of consciousness. He didn't expect that it would turn out like this. He couldn't help but be angry. However, as the leader of a sect, he couldn't easily kill a disciple from another sect. That would give others a bad impression, so he might as well imprison him until the end. Very soon Qiu Mingqiong brought Duanmuyu over. When Duanmuyu saw Yi Tongxian, he was instantly delighted. He hurriedly greeted, "Master, you've come out of seclusion." Are you? Yi Tongxian originally wanted to ask about the matter of sleeping with him, but when he saw the faint aura around Duanmuyu, his eyelids twitched. He said in surprise, "You've actually succeeded in breaking through to the Golden Elixir Realm? And you're still at the peak of the early Golden Elixir Realm?" Chapter 5392. As soon as she said this, everyone was in an uproar. At this moment, Duanmuyu did not deliberately release her aura. No one, including Yi Qingqing, noticed the change in her body. Only Yi Tongxian, who knew her best, saw through it with one glance. Yi Qingqing and the others were stunned. Not only did she succeed in breaking through to the Golden Elixir Realm, but she also became a master at the peak of the early Golden Elixir Realm. What was going on? "Master, please understand. I made a good friend during this experience in the secular world. Without him, I would not be where I am today," Duanmuyu said truthfully. Although it was only a matter of time before she broke through to the Golden Elixir Realm with her own qualifications, if it were not for Lin Yi, the time would have been dragged on for 3 to 5 years. Moreover, it would have been impossible for her to break through to the peak of the early Golden Elixir Realm at once. Oh, there's actually such an extraordinary person? Yi Tongxian could not help but be surprised. He knew that Duanmuyu never lied. To be precise, she disdained lying. There was actually someone who could help her break through to the Golden Elixir Realm in such a short period of time. What kind of person was this? At this time, Qiu Mingqiong sneered and said, "Hey, you can't be talking about Lin Yi, can you? No wonder you were willing to become his mistress. This is really understandable. You can break through to the Golden Elixir Realm by sleeping with someone and rise 2 levels in a row. No matter who it is, they would be tempted, right?" "What did you say?" Duanmuyu frowned. "Pretending? Still pretending at this time? Is there a point? I saw you hiding in bed with my own eyes, and your clothes were torn to pieces on the ground. Dry wood met fire. The two of you must have gone crazy." Qiu Mingqiong said sarcastically. Is this true?" Yi Tongxian asked in a low voice. Although he believed in his disciple's character, as Qiu Mingqiong said, if Duanmuyu had paid a high enough price, why would the other party help her break through to the Golden Elixir Realm for no reason? The resources needed were not just words. Even as a master of the great perfection of the Golden Elixir Realm, he might not be able to afford it. Before Duanmuyu could say anything, Yi Qingqing, who was on the other side, had already come to a conclusion. "Looks like it's true. If this sect leader remembers correctly, you weren't wearing these clothes before you entered, right?" The other elders of the upper echelon all nodded. Duanmuyu was now dressed in the clothes of the mortal world. In the small pugilistic world of the supreme ancient immortal realms, he could be said to be an oddity. It was impossible for them not to notice him. Duanmuyu blushed, which was rare for her. No matter how tough she was, it was impossible for her to say that she had changed her clothes in public. She could only refute, "Sect leader Shirbois, you misunderstood me. It's true that I have changed my clothes, but it doesn't mean that I have done anything shameful." "You've already rolled in the sheets, but you haven't done anything shameful? This is really rare." Qiu Mingqiong was adamant. This kind of thing was equivalent to mud falling into the crotch of one's pants. Even if it wasn't shit, it was still shit. As long as he insisted on not letting go, Duanmuyu would not be able to prove himself. Even jumping into the Yellow River would not be able to wash himself clean. Duanmuyu was furious, but she really did not know how to prove her innocence at the moment. In the face of the suspicious gazes of Yi Qingqing and the others, she could not help but feel helpless. She could not possibly take the initiative to let others verify that she was still a virgin, could she? At this moment, a faint voice suddenly came from the entrance of the Godleaf Palace. "Your Yiling sect is really interesting. I just gave you a set of clothes, but you actually keep such a close watch on what female disciples wear. Just how free are you, the higher-ups, really?" "Who is it?" Yi Qingqing and the others were shocked at the same time. They had so many Golden Core stage experts, but they did not notice that there were 2 people standing at the entrance. If the other party did not take the initiative to speak but instead launched a sneak attack, some of them might have already become corpses. The people who came were none other than Lin Yi and Bing Wuqing. Duanmuyu was suddenly brought here at this time, so it was obvious that someone wanted to harm her. Naturally, Lin Yi would not sit idly by and do nothing about it. Without hesitation, he broke out of the array with Bing Wuqing. Although the black water array was powerful, it was really not enough for him, a profound ascension stage primordial spirit. After all, from the beginning, this array could only be used against ordinary nascent soul stage old monsters. This was already the limit, and there was no concept of a profound ascension stage at all. You have already locked us up, don't you know who we are? Lin Yi calmly walked to Duan Muyu's side and gave her a look, indicating for her not to worry. Lin Yi? Bing Wuqing? Yi Qingqing frowned and turned to stare at Qiu Mingchong, asking, "What's going on?" "I don't know either." Qiu Mingchong was also confused and quickly explained, "I only have a token in my hand, and it was very smooth when I brought Duan Muyu out just now." They were clearly still locked up in the black water array. Could it be that Duan Muyu discovered some loophole in the black water array and secretly told them? Even if he wanted to deny responsibility, he still had to throw the blame on Duan Muyu. Qiu Mingchong showed everyone what it meant to be a villain. Are you stupid? If she knew about the loophole in the array, she would have come out long ago. Why would she wait until now? Lin Yi looked at this guy as if he was looking at an idiot. How dare you? You trespassed into my Yi Ling sect's important place and still dare to be so unscrupulous. Do you really think that this sect master will not punish you? Yi Qingqing was furious when he saw this. He did not want to do anything to Lin Yi and Bing Wuqing. After all, they were from the Yi Ling sect. It would not be good if he attacked them because he did not get the divine knowledge grass. So, he just wanted to let them fend for themselves, but it was different now. He was in an extremely bad mood at the moment because he did not get the divine knowledge grass. Now that Lin Yi was acting so fearless, wasn't he making things difficult for him in front of everyone? Even if someone were to make some sarcastic remarks about him, he would definitely make this fellow, who didn't know the immensity of heaven and earth, suffer today. Noisy, did I say you could speak? Lin Yi seemed to wave his hand casually. Yi Qingqing, who was already angry from embarrassment, suddenly quieted down as if he was possessed. He actually lowered his head and really did not speak. The senior elders of the Yi Ling sect did not understand what was going on. With their eyesight they could not see what was going on. They could only see that Lin Yi had made Yi Qingqing obediently shut up with just a few words. They could not help but feel puzzled. Why was the sect master's temper so good? Who was this guy? Among the crowd, only Yi Tongxian seemed to have noticed something. He looked at Lin Yi with shock and anger. He was about to speak, but he saw Duan Muyu shake his head at him. Only then did he forcibly swallow the words on the tip of his tongue and wait and see. Chapter 5393. Alright, I'll hold a meeting to discuss the traitor of your Yi Ling sect. Lin Yi naturally took over the reins. The natural aura of a superior that emanated from his body shocked everyone present. This wasn't an aura of actual threat, but it made everyone feel fear and trepidation from the bottom of their hearts, and they didn't dare to look at him directly. The traitor? Yi Tongxian was stunned. At this time he was the only one who had the confidence to speak. He frowned and asked, "Who are you calling a traitor?" "The traitor I'm talking about, of course, is him." Lin Yi pointed at Qiu Mingchong with his lips and said casually, "This guy has been secretly bribed by Xue Jianfeng. He's now Xue Jianfeng's lackey." He didn't want to reveal the Central's affairs for now. Firstly, he was afraid of alerting the enemy. Secondly, he was afraid that it would cause too much of a shock to the Immemorial Alliance and cause chaos in the entire Immemorial Underworld. That would give the Central an opportunity to take advantage of, so he could only reveal it bit by bit. As soon as he said this, everyone's eyes focused on Qiu Mingchong. Everyone looked suspicious. After all, they weren't fools. Qiu Mingchong had indeed behaved strangely after returning from the secular world. He wouldn't have stirred up trouble in the past. Could there really be a problem with this guy? Bullshit. Qiu Mingchong was still at a loss. Hearing this, he quickly retorted, "I have nothing to do with Xue Jianfeng. How can I be his lackey? It was you who had an affair with Duan Muyu. You're slandering me and trying to make a false accusation. Master Elders, don't believe this ignorant bastard. He's trying to drive a wedge between us." Everyone once again turned their doubtful eyes to Lin Yi. Compared to Qiu Mingchong, Lin Yi, this outsider with an unknown background, seemed to be a bigger problem. "Do you have evidence?" Yi Tongxian frowned and asked. In the past, Lin Yi might have patiently helped them find evidence. However, he wasn't in the mood today. He immediately said to Bing Wuqing, "I'll leave it to you. If he doesn't admit it, kill him." As soon as he finished speaking, everyone was dumbfounded. This was Yi Ling's sect. Wasn't this guy being too overbearing? This was Yi Ling's sect's territory, and he was facing Qiu Mingchong, the second-ranked top-notch disciple of Yi Ling's sect. Yet, this fellow couldn't even be bothered to provide the most basic evidence and just wanted to kill him. Who did he think he was? Aren't you going too far? Yi Tongxian could not stand it any longer. Although he was Duanmuyu's master and naturally stood on Duanmuyu's side, he was still one of the important higher-ups of the Yiling sect. He could not stand to see Lin Yi slapping him in the face so unscrupulously. "That's right. Who do you think you are? How dare you come here and point your fingers?" Another high-level elder stood up angrily. This person was Qiu Hong, an expert at the pinnacle of the late Golden Elixir realm. In terms of strength and status, he was second only to Yi Qingqing and Yi Tongxian. He had a fiery temper and most importantly he was a distant relative of Qiu Mingqiong. He could be considered Qiu Mingqiong's second backer. At this moment, Yi Qingqing was not saying anything for some reason, and Qiu Mingqiong was being threatened in public. As the second backer, he could only stand up to support the situation. Of course, from Qiu Hong's point of view, Lin Yi and Bing Wuqing were simply acting recklessly, and he could use this opportunity to boost his prestige. Lin Yi ignored him and neither did Bing Wuqing. After all, she never had the habit of talking nonsense. Seeing the situation, she directly pressed the merciless ice force over. Qiu Hong didn't even have the time to react. He didn't even have the chance to resist and was pressed to the ground on the spot. Nascent Soul Realm Old Monster. Qiu Hong was already speechless. Yi Tongxian and the others were all shocked. After all, this was the headquarters of the Yiling sect. Before this, Lin Yi and Bing Wuqing were just courting death in their eyes. Even if Bing Wuqing was widely recognized as a super genius, so what? She was only at the early Golden Elixir realm. At most, she could advance one level to the pinnacle of the early Golden Elixir realm. So what? Who would have thought that she had not only advanced one level, but had also advanced directly to the level of a nascent soul realm old monster? How were they supposed to deal with this? In front of a nascent soul realm old monster, these people were like paper. No wonder Lin Yi was so arrogant. He really had the confidence. The group of Yiling sect's higher-ups were all scared silly. Yi Tongxian included, and no one said anything. As for Qiu Hong, who was kneeling on the ground, he did not even dare to raise his head, for fear of making eye contact with the other party. If he accidentally angered the other party, he could die. Bing Wuqing's gaze immediately fell on Qiu Mingqiong. According to Lin Yi's instructions, if this guy refused to admit it, he could become a corpse. Anyway, they had completely broken off their relationship with the sect, so it did not matter if they killed an unimportant pawn of the sect. Don't come any closer. Qiu Mingqiong was so scared that his legs turned to jelly. He would never have thought that there would be a day when he would be cornered to this extent in the Yiling sect's headquarters. Based on the other party's attitude, if he dared to deny it, he might really become a corpse. "Live or die, you choose," Bing Wuqing said expressionlessly. Qiu Mingqiong cursed madly in his heart. Right now he could only live by admitting that he was a spy. But if he did that, would these people from Yiling sect let him go? In the end he would still die. Unfortunately, Bing Wuqing was obviously not in the mood to think so much for him. Seeing that he was hesitating, she directly enveloped him with her heartless ice force. With Qiu Mingqiong's meager strength, he did not even need to do anything. In the blink of an eye, he would be frozen into a popsicle. "Master, save me. Master's junior uncle, save me." Qiu Mingqiong felt as if he had fallen into an ice cellar. He screamed in panic, but the group of Yiling sect's higher-ups pretended not to hear him. What a joke. How could they dare to be presumptuous in front of a nascent soul old monster like Bing Wuqing? "Then die." Bing Wuqing made the final death sentence. "No. If you dare to kill me, you'll definitely die a worse death than me in the future. Shui Jianfeng will avenge me." Qiu Mingqiong shouted at the top of his lungs in a final struggle. Actually, Lin Yi was not wrong at all. His current superior was no longer the bespectacled professor, but really Shui Jianfeng. In order to show how much importance he attached to Shui Jianfeng, the bespectacled professor had already assigned a portion of his spies to him. Meanwhile, he himself only paid attention to a few high-end combatants, including Shui Jianfeng. There was no need for him to be distracted by a nobody like Qiu Mingqiong. After shouting this, Qiu Mingqiong closed his eyes and waited for his death. However, after a moment of fear and trepidation, he realized that the bone-chilling aura that enveloped him had suddenly dissipated. Bing Wuqing had actually let him go. Chapter 5394. As he spoke, Lin Yi released Yi Qingqing's primordial spirit. This guy suddenly stopped moving just now because his primordial spirit was taken away by Lin Yi's soul-hooking hand. Now that his primordial spirit was back, Yi Qingqing was horrified. The experience just now was too horrifying. He didn't want to experience the feeling of his life and death being in the hands of the other party again. "Deal with this traitor yourselves. I won't interfere," Lin Yi said lightly. "This." Yi Qingqing hesitated. Qiu Mingchong was his direct disciple, and he wouldn't abandon him unless he had no other choice. But now that Qiu Mingchong had publicly admitted his identity as a spy, especially with Lin Yi and Bing Wuqing, these two unfathomable guys, watching him covetously, he didn't dare to play any tricks at this time. He could only bite the bullet and say, "Guards, take Qiu Mingchong, this traitor, into custody. We'll discuss how to deal with him later." Lin Yi didn't have any objections. He dragged Qiu Mingchong out purely to help Duanmuyu out of trouble. As for whether Qiu Mingchong was dead or alive, he didn't care at all. Moreover, from the standpoint of Yi Ling's sect, it was hateful to discover such a traitor, but they couldn't execute him directly. There were still many things that needed to be clarified. For example, why did Shui Jianfeng bribe Qiu Mingchong? Watching the dejected Qiu Mingchong being taken away, Lin Yi glanced at Yi Qingqing and the others and said, "Now, does anyone still believe Qiu Mingchong's slander of Miss Duanmu? No, you must be joking. How can we believe the words of a traitor?" Yi Qingqing hurriedly smiled apologetically and humbly. The others might be mainly afraid of Bing Wuqing, the nascent soul realm old monster, but in his eyes, Lin Yi was the most terrifying existence. This guy was definitely much more terrifying than the average nascent soul realm old monster. Is that so? Then what about the divine knowledge grass? Lin Yi raised his eyebrows and said casually. Yi Qingqing and the others broke out in a cold sweat. When they recalled how they had tried to force Lin Yi and Bing Wuqing to ask for the divine knowledge grass previously, they felt as though 10,000 horses were galloping through their hearts. Now that they thought about it, they realized that they were practically seeking death in all sorts of ways. A heavenly treasure like the spirit knowledge grass naturally belongs to those who are able to obtain it. Only people of your strength are qualified to do so. We were rude before, so I sincerely apologize to you on behalf of Yi Ling's sect. Yi Qingqing hurriedly said respectfully. Lin Yi glanced at Duanmuyu when he heard that. He had come here purely to visit a friend, and it was entirely up to Duanmuyu to decide whether or not to make a fuss and take revenge. As for himself, it didn't matter. At his level, he wouldn't take such a small matter to heart, much less Bing Wuqing. Duanmuyu returned a pleading look. She had suffered a lot during this period of time, but after all, she had deep feelings for Yi Ling's sect. Since the culprit, Qiu Mingchong, had been taken care of, the matter would end here. Otherwise, Yi Ling's sect would be the one to suffer losses. All right, on account of Miss Duanmu, I'll temporarily accept your insincere apology. However, I'll say the ugly words first. I don't have a good temper. If there's a next time, I won't be so nice anymore. Lin Yi took the opportunity to give everyone a heads up. In this way, if Yi Qingqing and the others wanted to settle accounts with Duanmuyu later, they would have to think twice. Yes. Thank you for your magnanimity, senior. We are very grateful. Yi Qingqing didn't dare to refute. Even though he was a sect leader, and even though there was only a thin line between golden core perfected and nascent soul old monsters, this thin line meant that he had no right to speak in front of Lin Yi and Bing Wuqing. They could kill him with just a thought, so what could he do? Yi Qingqing's only thought at this moment was to send Lin Yi and Bing Wuqing away as soon as possible. This time, for the sake of the consciousness grass, he had been blinded by Qiu Mingchong's instigation and had set his sights on the two of them. Now, it was easy to invite them in but difficult to send them away. He was in a difficult position. The key was that he couldn't directly ask them to leave. His eyes turned and he had an idea in this emergency. Both of you are experts and we are too weak to serve you well. Why don't I report to our sect's Grand Supreme Elder and ask him to entertain the two of you? It was the rule of Jianghu to have a nascent soul old monster entertain a nascent soul old monster. It was reasonable for him to suggest this. At least he could avoid being bullied unilaterally. Otherwise, it would be really stressful for him and the group of gold core stage higher-ups to talk. Whatever. Lin Yi waved his hand noncommittally. He had no interest in the Yi Ling sect's Grand Supreme Elder, but since he was here, there was no harm in meeting him. It could also be considered as helping Duanmuyu gain some face. Okay. Please wait for a moment, seniors. I'll report to the Grand Supreme Elder right away. Yi Qingqing immediately rushed out. Logically speaking, even if they were to ask for the Grand Supreme Elder's permission, there was no need for him, the sect leader, to go personally. However, he couldn't have asked for more. After all, Qiu Mingchong was his personal disciple. Although Qiu Mingchong had instigated the matter of the consciousness grass, it was mainly his own idea. At this time, he didn't dare to stay in front of Lin Yi and Bing Wuqing for even a moment. The pressure was too great. After a while, an old man in green walked quickly into the God Leaf Hall accompanied by Yi Qingqing. His aura was hidden, but it gave people a feeling of unfathomable depth. All the higher-ups of the Yiling sect, including Yi Tongxin and Duan Muyu, hurriedly greeted him in unison. Without a doubt, this was the Yiling sect's Grand Supreme Elder Yi Yixing. Not only was he the Grand Supreme Elder, but he was also Yi Qingqing's and Yi Tongshuan's master. In other words, he was Duan Muyu's master. My two friends have come to visit. Please forgive me for not going out to greet you. Yi Yixing cupped his hands in greeting and smiled. All these years he had been in a state of semi-isolation. If something like this had not happened, he would normally not have come out. Bing Wuqing looked at him with some scrutiny. He was a little stronger than her at the middle nascent soul stage. However, it was obvious that this guy had internal injuries. Ordinary people couldn't see it, but it couldn't escape the observation of an expert at the peak of the early nascent soul stage. Chapter 5395. Cultivation was like rowing a boat against the current. If you did not advance, you would fall behind. Lin Yi knew very well what it meant for the other party to be injured for such a long time without being able to recover. Even though this supreme elder of the Yiling sect was still a top-rate existence that was like a pillar that stabilized the world, if this were to continue developing, then it wouldn't be long before this supreme elder of the Yiling sect would step down from his peak. Unless he obtained a fortuitous encounter before the situation worsened to the worst. To some extent, Lin Yi's appearance itself represented a fortuitous encounter. Unfortunately, Lin Yi had no intention of giving the other party a fortuitous encounter. Yi Yixing was indeed Duan Muyu's grandmaster, and for Duan Muyu's sake, theoretically, Lin Yi would show some kindness, but that was on the premise that he found the other party pleasing to the eye. But now, because of Duan Muyu's experience, basically no one in the entire Yiling sect could enter Lin Yi's eyes, including Yi Yixing, the Grand Supreme Elder. Lin Yi did not believe that this old guy did not know that Duan Muyu was forced to give up the divine knowledge grass. Acquiescence was Yi Yixing's attitude. In that case, he had to pay the corresponding price. Of course, for Duan Muyu's sake, Lin Yi would not impose additional punishment on him. Otherwise, even if the other party was a middle-stage nascent soul expert, he would not be able to fight back in front of him. Lin Yi's side showed a lack of interest, while Yi Yixing's side was wary. After all, in his current state, Bing Wuqing, who was at the peak of the early-stage nascent soul, was enough to make him suffer. With the addition of Lin Yi, whose strength was unknown, once a fight broke out, he had no chance of winning. With such attitudes, after a few words of greeting, the atmosphere quickly fell into an awkward silence. Yi Yixing was the same as Yi Qingqing. Right now, the most important thing in his eyes was to quickly send Lin Yi and Bing Wuqing away, otherwise he would not be at ease. Since there's nothing else, I'll take my leave. Lin Yi was not an insensible person. He knew that his purpose of helping Duan Muyu's growth had been achieved, and staying any longer would only be as bad as not doing enough. He immediately called Bing Wuqing and prepared to leave. All right, fellow Taoists, please take care. Forgive this old man for not seeing you off. Yi Yixing and the others heaved a sigh of relief. At this time, Duan Muyu suddenly stopped him and said, "Wait, it's rare for you to come all the way to see me, and you even encountered these things. As the host, shouldn't you let me entertain you before you leave? Is this appropriate?" Lin Yi glanced at Yi Yi's group. It's appropriate, it's appropriate. Ye's group nodded hurriedly. At this time they felt very guilty. As long as Duan Muyu's request was not too excessive, they had to agree. The Rain Admiration Pavilion was one of the many independent pavilions in the Leaf Spirit sect. Apart from its relatively quiet and elegant surroundings, there was nothing special about it. If one had to say, its owner was Duan Muyu. As a woman, no matter how manly her actions were, she would never be able to change her weak and sentimental side. This was not often shown on Duan Muyu, but some clues could be seen from the various arrangements in the Rain Admiration Pavilion. "Ha, I thought you lived in the same place as us. Turns out you're still a little feminine." Lin Yi looked around in surprise. Duan Muyu looked at him with hidden bitterness and said faintly, "I'm a woman after all right? Don't tell me I'm a real man in your eyes?" "Not to that extent. You're a manly woman." Lin Yi laughed. As their friendship deepened, the way they spoke to each other became more familiar. Otherwise, he wouldn't have made such a joke. Manly woman? Duan Muyu frowned and digested the meaning of this secular word. Then, the corner of her mouth suddenly curled up. "Wait for me, I'll go change my clothes." "Change your clothes?" Lin Yi was stunned, but Duan Muyu didn't give him a chance to ask. She turned around and went to the bedroom, leaving him alone in the pavilion to wait. As for Bing Wuqing, she didn't follow him. She stayed in the God Leaf Palace to be entertained by Yi Yixing and the others. Anyone could see that Duan Muyu wanted to entertain Lin Yi alone. Bing Wuqing was a sensible person, so she naturally wouldn't follow him and be a third wheel. After the time it took for a joss stick to burn, when Duanmuyu reappeared in front of him, Lin Yi was dumbfounded. Actually, there was nothing special about it. It was just a plain dress that was commonly seen in the immemorial pugilistic world. However, when it was worn by Duanmuyu, there was a different kind of charm. It was a unique charm that was extremely rare to see on other women. Heroic, gentle, Duanmuyu in a plain dress perfectly blended the two together. Although with her looks, she definitely wouldn't look bad in other clothes, especially when she wore the secular women's clothes that Lin Yi gave her. It was undeniable that the Duanmuyu in front of him was the most beautiful Duanmuyu. On her, Lin Yi saw true femininity for the first time. What? Is it very awkward? Duanmuyu looked at Lin Yi's strange expression and couldn't help but feel a little nervous. With her style, she rarely dressed like this, and it might not even happen once a year. Today was considered a special treatment for Lin Yi. No, it's quite nice. Lin Yi pinched his nose awkwardly. He had always been surrounded by beautiful women, and his immunity to beautiful women had already reached the level of a master. Normally he wouldn't look like a pervert. However, the contrast between Duanmuyu's appearance and just now was too big. Normally, anyone would be stunned, especially a hot-blooded man. Is that so? Duanmuyu blushed for the first time. Then, she hurriedly turned around and brewed some tea as a cover. This is the emerald grass I just brewed. It's a good tea unique to our Yiling sect. You can't buy it outside. Try it. One night stand? Lin Yi's expression suddenly became extremely strange. What? Duanmuyu didn't react. Nothing. Lin Yi immediately blushed with shame. Fortunately, she didn't know the meaning of the word, or else he might have thought that he was flirting with her. He took the teacup and took a sip, then praised, "Although I don't know much about tea, your tea does leave a fragrant aftertaste in my mouth. Drink the tea, look at the lake, and if I can listen to music, that would be perfect." You want to listen to music? Duanmuyu glanced at him, turned around, walked to the side and lifted the curtain. Lin Yi thought it was just another table, but he didn't expect it to be a guqin under the curtain. The melodious sound of the guqin rang out. Looking at Duanmuyu's focused appearance, Lin Yi couldn't help but smile playfully. Today Duanmuyu was really like a different person from before.